don't think it should be a taboo word to be feared. I remember there was a teacher who, when I was in school, and I don't remember this, and like when it exactly happened, but I remember there was a teacher who had just like a quiet time during class. Like it was for, I think elementary or junior high kids, but it was like, hey guys, it's going to be our 30-minute quiet time. You guys can either meditate, you can read a book, you can pray, whatever you'd like. We're going to have some quiet time, some self-reflection. And she got in trouble for it because, oh, you're pushing religion, oh, you're having that, you're telling the kids what to do. And it's like, they stopped enforcing a dress code altogether. And I asked Edmund, like, whoa, like that's a big deal that you guys aren't pushing a dress code. Is that because like you guys just couldn't get the kids to listen? Was there too many detentions? And they said, no, it was the parents. They said the first 2 weeks, they said we were handing out warnings. Like school started, we were giving warnings. There was detentions. Hey, you guys can't wear this. We have to be appropriate. Yada yada yada. And it was the parents continually coming in. How dare you tell my child what to wear? How dare you sexualize my daughter? How dare you? It's her freedom of expression. It's his idea. You know, I go to like conventions sometimes and I see those people in the corners with the signs like, oh, you're going to hell. And I'm like, that's never going to win people. Right. Like that's just, I don't like the fire and brimstone. I don't think that's going to have an honest conversation with someone like, hey, like let's chat about this or whatever. I don't think that's inviting. I think that's using fear and I don't think that's the way to do it. And so
what would you say is the way to do it?
Well, you did it again. You gathered up the courage to listen to another episode of the podcast that is changing hearts and minds all across this amazing planet. The podcast that has taken humanity by storm. The podcast that has single-handedly ended every form of pain and suffering that has ever existed. The podcast that after 3 years still only has 1 review on Apple. Yes, that's right. It's the Why Can't We Talk About That podcast. Welcome back, and I'm so happy you're here. Another fantastic discussion is coming your way in a few minutes. But before we get there, I just want to let you know that you can reach me at Why Can't We Talk About That at proton.me. Send me a message. Tell me hi, ask how I'm doing or what my favorite color is. Let me know what you think of the show. Let me know that you want to be on the show. Maybe even send me a blank email, just so I wonder what the heck that was all about. Just do it. Don't wait any longer. Also, do me a huge favor and subscribe, like, and or comment on this episode from wherever it is that you are listening from. And most importantly, tell everyone that you know that this show exists. This is pretty much the only way that anybody will ever hear about it. Thanks. My guest for this episode is Kaitlyn Kolec, a fairly new coworker of mine who I have worked with just long enough to find her interesting, but not long enough to know why. After hanging out with her for this episode, I now know why. Katie has an interesting taste in music and hobbies, and also has some interesting takes on world issues. I had a lot of fun getting to know her better, and I hope you will as well. Oh, one more thing. Katie is a Japanese car enthusiast and has even started her own car club. It's called Pacific.Nostalgia, and you should definitely check out their Instagram page. Well, with no ado further, enjoy the conversation.
Yeah. So how's your day going so far? Day's
been good.
Yeah,
it was nice. At church this morning, then kind of came home, did some stuff. I've been getting ready for, I have a car club that I do locally and stuff, so I've been planning some of that stuff.
Like what do you do?
It's just a JDM car club.
Okay.
And so I'm really excited to kind of have that. I kind of rotate different places around the Central Coast.
Okay. Do you enter your car into it, or is it like a...
No, it's just kind of a place to hang out, because there's a lot of groups already that are on the coast that are specifically like, memberships, and you have to do this and join. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. We're just trying to hang out. There's a lot of cool cars and coffees, in Pismo and all that. But a lot of the coast gets overshadowed by, they have... there's the Corvette clubs, there's all the hot rods, you see all the Bel Airs, the Novas, then you have a huge lowrider community, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so I really admired how SoCal had a lot of the Japanese imports, the JDM groups that were really popular. And there's a notable amount of us here on the coast, but there's not a lot of groups for it or awareness. And
so it's a club with a lot of people that share the same interest in the same kind of cars.
Exactly.
And you guys just hang out and talk about it?
Hang out and see our builds and see what's up and kind of everything. So
that be any Japanese car, like Nissan?
Nissan's, Toyotas, Hondas. Then you can get people who like have started really importing them. So you have people with like right-hand drives and all that kind of cool stuff. So it's cool. But no, it's been exciting. It's been a nice day.
So the first question I ask is, what's your favorite genre of music? If you had to pick just one.
Just one?
Yeah. And I'm going to let you flesh all these out later. But for now, just like a real quick answer.
That's so tough because it really, really does depend on my mood. I can tell you what I'm into like right now.
Okay.
Because I'm really into like the Y2K kind of like future funk, like deep space bass stuff.
Okay.
I'm really into that. I've been really listening to that. That's kind of like... artists like, like Cult Member or like Aldi Star Junk 95.
Okay.
More mainstream would probably be like Tame Impala, Vano 3000, like DJ Clark Nova. I like a lot of like the heavy, like kind of the tech feel.
Is that kind of like, what's that word they had going around long? Oh my gosh. What's that kind of music? Where there was a word for it. It was really big for a while and I haven't heard the word in a while.
Like a vaporwave kind of?
No. It might not even be what you're talking about, but there's a word I'm thinking of. It's kind of DJ-ish kind of music.
There's like the whole house side and techno and everything.
House and techno I've been around longer than
EDM, like electric dance music.
It's not it either. Oh!
You can Google it.
Oh! I wouldn't even know what to ask. It'll come to me later. But anyway, what would you describe? Is it like dance music kind of?
It's not even dance. It's more very much like Y2K. So if you think of like the aesthetic, like, the clear like technology, like PSPs or like everything that's early 2000s kind of stuff.
Okay.
That feels like that has that voice filter kind of on it where that's the best I can kind of describe.
Like a vocoder, kind of like a robot voice kind of sound?
Not even that. Just like it sounds kind of like older tech, like maybe fuzzier microphones or that kind of stuff. Just like something you'd listen to in like the early 2000s.
Okay.
So
and does it have vocals or is it mostly instrumental?
It can be, a lot of it's instrumental, a lot of it can be also vocal. They'll do like sound clips from notable, maybe like a movie or another song or something. They do like a lot of remixes. That's kind of what those like I was mentioning like the smaller underground stuff does. Like I really like Star Trek 95. Like if you ever heard of like are you familiar with like video games, like PS2 games or anything?
Vaguely, so mostly old games. There's like
a really popular like snowboarding video game, like SSX Tricky. His stuff is kind of similar to that. Okay. So it's I don't know how to say it. So like kind of like race music. Like if you're listening to like Gran Turismo, like menu options, that kind of music. Something you can like throw them and drive to.
Cool, awesome. Dubstep.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking. Okay.
So it's like if you think of like Skrillex, but it's less like. It's less heavy, like hard style. Okay. It's not very hard style or jump style. It's just more like, I don't know, like computer. Like if you're sitting there, if you want a vibe of like, I don't know if I can even describe it.
It's kind of hard to define.
It is. You can like listen to the music and be like, oh, that thing.
Which I will, because I'm going to get some artists from you and stuff. Because that's one of my favorite things on here is I learn new music. Because I'm extremely into all kinds of music.
Sure.
I love anything that's good.
And like on the flip of that, a little bit older, I really like the 1980s like Japanese city pop. Okay. So those are a lot of vinyls and records that came out in Japan in the 80s and 90s when it was like the economic boom before their own market crash. And so that's like Maria Takeuchi, like Miki Matsuraba.
And is it sung in Japanese?
Yeah, all Japanese music. So that's like a really popular, like beginners kind of easy into it is like Plastic Love. Okay. And that was like had exploded online when someone had like posted it in some kind of, I think, their own remix or something, and then there was a big resurgence for it. There's like some cool remixes like Young Bear, like Macross 8299 you might really hear. He does a lot of like his own remixes, but it kind of came with like the resurgence of like cassette tapes, CDs, vinyls. And so I collect vinyls too. I have my own like record setup and everything. I've got some cool vintage stuff.
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure.
Yeah, and so that's fun to kind of find some good ones.
Okay, cool. The second question is, politically, do you tend to lean more right or more left?
I had grown up with a right kind of family, but as I ironically, after college, I went to work at a military base down in San Diego at the libraries there, and just
At Pendleton, or
Pendleton,
Okay.
Camp Pendleton,
Okay.
and being able to step out of a small town and kind of a small little community of it. I was able to kind of meet people from all over the world and other states and other backgrounds and views.
Right.
And I want to say I'm more open-minded. I'm not like... It's such a cop-out. I know most people think like, oh, when you say you're moderate, it's because you don't want to take a stance or anything. But truly, I mean, if it comes to like today's, I'm really unhappy kind of with both sides. I think there's a lot the left is doing to really kind of shoot themselves in the foot that I do really kind of fall like somewhere in the middle because I wish the whole system was different.
Right. Okay. And the last question is, in one word, describe your spiritual beliefs.
I consider myself Christian, but like non-denominational. I don't really want to like I had grown up in like the evangelical church, but I feel like they've become too political and too opinionated and very harsh on a lot of things that I've kind of stepped away from that, and I just found like a really good non-denominational church that kind of just really focuses on more of just the Bible and the message and how to you know practice what you preach. And I really like that.
Yeah. Where do you go?
I go to First Christian here in Santa Maria.
Oh, funny. My daughter goes there.
Yeah, it's a really nice church.
Pastor
I like
Jim.
it. Yes.
Yeah.
He's a really nice pastor. I like it.
Okay. Yeah, I know lots of people over there, but my daughter and her husband have been going there for a year or so.
Yeah, and I have some friends who also go to the Bridge, and they say they really like that one.
Okay.
But so it's like, you know, I'm not one to like, oh, you are in this and have an opinion or anything. I'm like I said, everyone's got to kind of choose their own path and what they like, and I'm easygoing about it. But I just really kind of wanted to focus. I felt like there was a lot of especially like in the recent politics. I felt like there was a lot of using religion for motives and things, and I felt like that's not what it was for or should be for, and so I was kind of wanted to take a step back back from all that.
Sure, which is awesome. So cool. So I'm definitely going to let you flesh some of that out as we get into that.
I'm always a little hesitant, nervous to talk about that. So
really?
I might. Yeah, I've always just never really liked. I mean, it's not to sound like a hypocrite, you know, because I'm happy to say what I believe.
Right.
But I'm always very, because I was an art major.
Okay.
And so kind of being around a lot of that, I know there's a lot of open-minded people, but there's also a lot of people who have their own religious trauma and their own kind of opinions about it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of awful Christians out there.
Sure.
You know, they say like no hate like Christian love, and like I never wanted to be that, and it's hard to not be associated with that.
Yeah.
So I've always been kind of hesitant because I'm just like, hey, I'm not trying to take a stance on anything. And
well, I'll tell you, when people ask me, I'm a Christian as well, but if someone asks me if I'm a Christian, like something I don't know, I just mean to say, hey, Ryan, are you a Christian? Yeah. I don't say yes. I first ask them what they mean by that.
Sure.
Because I need to make sure that if I'm giving the affirmative to that, I want to make sure I'm affirming what they think in their head a Christian is.
Sure.
If they think it's one of these guys on the alt-right, white supremacist, whatever, these kind of Christian guys, no, I don't want to line myself up with that. So I was like, well, what do you think a Christian is? And if they describe it right, then I'll say, oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
You know, whatever.
I'm very much like, there's a big difference between religion and faith.
For sure. All right. So first of all, just kind of give me a brief, I mean, I work with you, but I don't really know you that well. I know we've talked a little bit before about your background and where you come from. You grew up here, you said, but then you went to San Diego for school. Do I have that right? I
went to LA for school. I grew up here on the Central Coast, and then I went to Cal State Northridge. Okay. For my bachelor's. So I did, community college here, save money, huzzah. Nice. And then transferred from my bachelor's to CSUN, and I majored in illustration. Oh, nice. Yeah,
So are you really good? I mean, people don't like toot their own horn, but I mean, are you a good artist? Can you draw?
I still love doing it now, even though I didn't take a career path with it. Because my biggest mistake in college was that I didn't really know how to utilize my, what is it called? The starts with a C, like the people that set up your classes, your counselor.
Oh, counselor.
Yes, thank you. I didn't know how to really use my guidance counselor. I was kind of a young 20-something who was just fumbling my way through it, trying to be an adult. So I never did an internship with anything. Oh, okay. And when I looked into internships, it's like, you have to be here 9 to 5. It's a daily thing. And in my head, I'm like, okay, well, if I have to be a full-time student, that's 12 units. When on earth am I going to go do an internship? I have to be in class. Right. And so I just didn't know how to do it. So I never did an internship. Okay. So I graduated early, with my bachelor's. And then by the time I was in San Diego, because I moved to San Diego to for job opportunities, and I was looking and applying for art things, but everyone was just like, who the heck are you?
Right.
You're just some unknown college student. We don't want you.
Is that the way it works? You have to know somebody for an internship.
Really?
Somebody has to recommend you and say...
Yeah, I had friends that I went to school with that did internships like through Disney and through other stuff, and they got in, with like the TV animation studio. Nice. And it's because you get in, and whether it's paid or not, and that's a whole nother topic, you meet your managers, you meet the people, and so when you apply, they're like, oh, you already have experience here. Okay. And then you have at least a foot in the door to have it better. And so I originally had kind of wanted to do character concepts. Okay. But I've either that or like I loved drawing characters and stories, comics or like kids books. I wanted to be like either like a children's illustration major or kind of on the other side like a production artist. So like I've always loved books, and I ultimately wanted to do so like the person in like say for like comics, so like Japanese comics, manga. Okay. There's like Viz Media, there's Kodansha, there's Bandai Entertainment. There's a couple like notable like English translation companies. Mm-hmm. I wanted to work there so I could be the person who's putting together the box sets, design the covers, design the boxes, design the pages that go in there. Like, oh, this is gonna be like a pink transparent lace overlay with these pages are colors. I love the production aspect. So of not so
much like creating the story or creating the art, but you would be putting the finishing touches on everything.
And like utilizing pieces from the artists to do this special edition version so I didn't have a way to get into it, but I ended up using art for my own like hobby life. I do and it's kind of a gray area for this, but I do like what they call Scanlations. It's like fan translations of comics from Japan or Korea that were never translated here. So there's...
So meaning they take something that's in another language, like in this case Japanese. Yeah. And the fans themselves are translating into English.
Sure. So say Viz Media I mentioned, for example, they have a series called Naruto that gets licensed and purchased by Viz in America, and then they have their translators and their cleaners and their redrawers, and they go through and change the Japanese words in the book. They write it in English, and then they publish it here, and then we can read it. Okay. So if there's a series in Japan that we really like, but no one's picked up for licensing, the fans then kind of have their own groups or teams that they've formed that's like, okay, someone's a translator, they can read it. Then you have someone who's, what I did, the cleaner and redrawer, so I erase the sound effects or I erase the speech bubble words and kind of stuff. Okay. And then I would hand it off to a typographer who then, in English, goes and puts in the words and the correct sound effects and all that. So that's kind of what I do. It's for free. It's for fun. It's technically copyright.
Is it legal though? Like, okay, that's what I was going to ask you.
It's the gray area.
Could the owners of the company come in and say stop it?
They could. They could absolutely be like, hey, cease and desist. And sometimes that might happen if, like, there's a smaller group in America called like 7Cs, like an official business, and they sometimes pick up licenses. So I was doing one with a group, and then we got a cease and desist from them because actually they were about to pick that up, and so they want people to support it, and so we absolutely agree with that.
Meaning they were going to start doing the work you were already doing, but for themselves.
To publish and sell and everything, and at the same time we completely agreed that, like, hey, we know what we do for Scanlations. The artist doesn't get any money for it. Right. It's posted on kind of your own forum maintained sites or anything. So we, follow it. We took down our stuff or like we add tags like, hey, go support the official release. That's how the artist gets money.
Well, because probably part of the reason you guys are doing it anyway is because it doesn't exist yet.
Yes.
And you're like, we would love to have this in this format, but it's not there. So let's just do it ourselves.
Sure.
So if the company comes in like, no, we'll do it. You're probably like, oh, cool.
Yeah. And there's like a scale of this. So there's like obviously groups who are like, we don't care what people say, we want to do it. Or there's groups that like there's sites that charge money to read stuff, so they make, and then there's kind of a big divide in the community of like, hey, like we're not trying to do that, we just want to give this story to the fans. And so but I've been doing that for about like 4 or 5 years, so it's really fun. It can scratch that kind of notable, and it's a good way to add to my resume that when I do see anything that opens up for like companies that might have an opening for a cleaner or something, or I could be like, well, hey, I've been volunteering with groups.
It's like an internship, really.
Do this on my free time. It is.
So is that something you're hoping to do? Is that kind of your passion that you want to get into that?
It would be great to go into that. And that's kind of why I leaned into libraries, because I could at least see on the other side the production aspect. Sure. I can see like, hey, I love working with books. I love doing all that. I can still kind of have a hand in giving back to the community and working with people. And so that's what I went to San Diego for. I ended up working at the Marine Corps base for the DoD for their public library.
Yeah.
I was their bookmobile driver.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I got my Class B license. I drove like a 40-foot Freightliner, big old
So would that
truck.
have been like around Oceanside then, or like
but it was so
Carlsbad, or
so like Oceanside technically, but just on base only.
Okay.
And it's the largest, Western military base on the West Coast compared to like Lejeune on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So it like takes 45 minutes to go across base.
Right.
It's huge.
Oh, I've never been on there, but we drive by it all the time.
Yeah, and so I would go to family housings, military battalions. I'd go. We supported the brig. We, so kind of all over just to bring books and video games. I mean, there's Marines out in the boonies. Recon out and and they don't have an access to the libraries and anything. So we'd bring video games and movies and books and stuff. And you just see my little bus putting out there.
Yeah, because then they can play like Call of Duty, and, as if they're actually on there.
Yeah, right. All the folks out there actually.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what part of San Diego did you live in?
So I lived in Vista.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a good kind of central point. I really liked Carlsbad and all that. So I was North County, essentially. But I was out there for about 10 years, worked there for 8.
Okay.
And then I just had an opening out here to work at some of the public schools to kind of help around with some of their libraries.
Okay.
And since my family's here, I'm like, hey, you know what? It's a good time to kind of come back. And so I moved back out here. And
do you like it better down there, though?
It's tough because I like having access to a city. I don't miss the traffic.
Right.
That's kind of one thing I like about Central Coast, that we're right in the middle of like 4 hours either the LA or the Bay. And then I can come back home to my 2-lane highway and be like, but there's no food variety here. My kingdom for a Korean restaurant.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, there's like one at a Tascadero, and that's it.
What about that sizzling gogi? Isn't that Korean?
It is.
Korean
I've
barbecue?
heard good things about it,
Okay.
but I know it's kind of pricey for like one person to just go, so I haven't had the chance to go out.
Yeah, I've never been
But
there.
there's a good Japanese restaurant. I do like Hamasado. Hamasado is very
good. We've been
there.
Yeah.
So I try to, give them business.
We go there when we've had lots and lots of exchange students over the years, probably 20-something at this point.
Oh, cool.
We usually have like 2 at a time.
Yeah.
It's almost always been girls. I think it's mainly because we're more comfortable. Because we have 4 kids in the house.
Yeah.
Which we did. 2 boys, 2 girls.
Okay.
Kind of like, I don't know if I want teenage boys in here with it.
Yeah,
probably
I
stupid,
get that.
but that's kind of where we were at. But
No,
we
I
have
get
mostly
it.
girls. But we usually take them somewhere. Like we want to take them to an American, authentic restaurant that's serving food from where they're from. Because we've had kids from Japan, China, Indonesia.
Oh, that's cool.
So we try to go places like that, and it's always really interesting.
Sure.
And I think this last time when we took the girls to Hamasado, it was they just struck up a conversation in Japanese with the owners. Yeah, and right. And I'm sitting there like, what are they talking about?
Sure.
But it's always interesting to see, like, this one time we had these 2 girls from China.
Yeah.
And my older daughter at the time, she was only like 12 or 13. She's 26 now. But she was talking about how her favorite thing is orange chicken. Oh, I love orange chicken. I love orange chicken. And this girl's like, and my daughter's like, it's Chinese food, orange chicken. And this girl's like, we don't put orange with our chicken. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then we finally ended up going. So I think it was just like a Panda Express or something. And then when she saw what it was, she goes, yeah, we have that, but that's not what we call it.
Yeah.
She was thinking like chicken with like oranges.
Citrus and stuff.
Right, exactly. To where it's more like, no, the color's orange. It's like orange chicken. This is what we call it.
Yeah.
There's probably some more, sophisticated name over there.
Like for the spice or something.
Yeah, exactly. So, so anyway, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, we love Hamasado, and some of the other ones in town are good too. But
sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But so aside from that, I kind of found my ways in like libraries, and it's been nice. I really like it, but it's tough finding any full-time work with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what a lot of people kind of find with the economy right now. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I had done some substitute teaching on the side.
Okay.
And that's kind of where, like, I helped in the high school libraries. Like, I helped with a couple local high schools for a bit.
Are you not still over there?
No, because I just got a new second job.
Okay.
So I switched over. So I'm not doing substituting anymore.
Okay.
And, I was happy to, but boy, that's a whole conversation on truly our, education system.
Yeah, I bet.
I have friends who are full-time teachers, and it's just, it's astounding how and I'm not trying to sound like, kids these days. Because even when we were kids, we had the adults being kids these days. And I get it.
Yeah, when you're an adult, kids always suck, and the music always sucks, right?
But it's truly like, and I don't even blame the kids for a lot of the behavioral or cultural things. I blame a lot of the parents for what it is, because the kids don't know any better.
Totally.
If the parents in their life are not giving them the tools.
Yeah, well, there's been so many studies done on that recently about that's the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like I can go on like a thesis tangent about like the differences in like internet and social media and the impact of technology. And I think even a lot of like those Gen Z generation, because I don't even call them kids. There's like they're 20-somethings now, that are having their own kids and realizing like, hey, I grew up with an iPad and I am not giving my kid that because of just the developmental issues. Yes. I had a friend who was a first grade teacher, and she noticed like a difference, like when she would tell the kids like, hey, everyone, we're going to color today, draw a picture, and like some of the kids or whatever would just be like, what do you want me to draw? And she was like, no, just like think of something up, make something. Like
use your imagination.
They're like,
what's that?
They're like, I don't know how.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
And it's just because they aren't in the car staring out the window having to make up a game of running alongside the window kind of thing.
Right.
They're not taught to flex that muscle. They're giving things for instant stimulation and instant fun, keep them busy. They're not using coloring books in a restaurant having to think of something,
Right.
And that's not like, technology's bad, but it's interesting to look at like, like the effect of their attention span or anything, how our movies are so different. I have friends who they're like, it's a miracle that my kid can sit through an hour-and-a-half movie in the theater. Or like, it's halfway, they've lost it, we have to go because they're having a fit now.
Right.
And it's like, how do you fix that?
Yeah. That's a great question. That's actually a really great question.
And I mean, even for teens, because everyone always jokes. I think the most notable joke is that kids these days don't look like kids; they look like adults.
Right.
And it's like that push that I feel like a lot of social media's had. Now, I was in high school. I had a MySpace. I had a
there's dating yourself.
Yeah, no, Facebook came out when I was in high school. I got the page like 2008. I think I was like a sophomore in high school.
Nice.
And but even then, social media then was different because there weren't corporations in it. I feel like that's the difference. There was no like consumerist capitalist aspect that was like, we can make money off this. It was just another forum page. It was another live journal, another Gaia online. It was something that like the difference between Twitter now, and this kind of goes into my whole big thesis thing.
Yeah.
The reason why there's so many like keyboard warriors, or like, people joke like and kind of when I talk about comics, like, air quote fandom wars, but people are opinionated about everything because if you look at Twitter, it's just one big melting pot of everyone. Yeah. Back in the day when you had MySpaces or live journals or anything, people made their own websites for stuff. You had secluded groups, pages, forums, people who liked the same things just conjugated together, and then everyone got along. Yeah. If you weren't into something like I hate that band or whatever, you just didn't go look at that band page.
Exactly.
And even then, it was like a respect aspect of like, if you're young enough, like, oh man, I can't wait to go to that group made for adults when I'm an adult.
Right.
And you don't see that now. Now it's the idea of like, well, I'm here. I can see everything you're posting on Twitter. I don't like this. Maybe I'm a minor. That's offensive. You shouldn't like that either.
Right.
Everyone has an opinion about everything. Yeah. Because everyone can see it.
Right.
And so the internet is so different now. So like I'm mentioning about social media and the different aspect of it is that once I feel like corporations then got involved, well, now they could push their products. Now they could push their idealized. Now you have celebrities like, well, look what you should look like. Girls, you don't want to be in overalls at 13. Yeah. Look like, Kylie Jenner at 25, even though you're only 13 and you're not mentally there. You're not physically developed. You're not any of that. You can't. Yeah. And so you have all these young girls and even young men who are, that sounded actually, so you see young women and young men. I'm not trying to like devalue girls. And I heard myself say it. I can, fix that. You're not, and who are trying to age themselves up. Yeah. You remember the big Sephora thing. 10-year-olds buying, all the Drunk Elephant skincare and everything. And now there's the bill going through California like, hey, kids under, I think it was like 18 or something, can't buy this without parents because the chemicals in it. The chemicals in it, and it's making them look older. They're actually aging. There's that whole joke of millennials look so young. And it's
Which is funny because they already are naturally looking older anyway.
Yes.
Like I look at the youth today, and compare it to what it looked like when I was in like junior high.
Sure.
I look at junior high kids today, boys and girls.
Yeah.
They look way older than me and my friends look like when I was in junior high.
Sure.
Like way older.
Sure.
Like I can be walking to the mall and see somebody and be like, oh, she's probably 26. No, she's 12. What?
And that's what I'm saying. It's because they were fed, and whether they can actually, think it or make that proclamation of, oh, I want to be that, because every kid wants to be that. I remember being a kid like, oh, I can't wait till I, look older. It's cool. It's, you want to be able to do
course,
stuff.
Yeah, boys want to be able to grow a mustache and all that stuff.
Absolutely. That's totally normal. But I remember when I started working at the high schools, the biggest surprise to me was dress code. And that's a whole topic of whether... how girls can be dress coded more than boys and vice versa. There's, that's a whole can of worms. But I remember, at least, even when I was in it, was always a battle. We wanted to rip jeans. We wanted to wear our skirts. Flip-flops. Flip-flops don't harm you. But I get like, okay, maybe it was a safety aspect. They don't want people cutting their feet and bleeding everywhere.
What if a textbook drops on your toe and then you break your toe at school and then it's a lawsuit and then, all that stuff.
So it's like, okay, but I also understand that school is a way ideally designed, if you don't have like awful, administration for the workforce. Like, again, working in public library, I can't come in a crop top and a miniskirt. It's that whole office siren trend.
But the question is why?
And it's,
that's really what it boils down, because I'm always curious about that stuff too, because it seems like certain jobs are okay with this, certain jobs are not.
Sure.
And I remember for a long time, you couldn't have any facial hair at all.
Sure.
Like, it just depends on what era you're looking at. And or piercings or tattoos, and now that's becoming more and more common. I think like Target was one of the first ones. Me and my wife used to joke, because back before everyone else started doing it, we go into Target and be like, oh my gosh, you want to find like all the like punk rock looking mohawk tattooed piercing people? They're all working at Target.
Sure, because they're the managers now.
Yeah,
and so they're like, hey, this is okay. I could still be professional with it. I can, and I've had that discussion with, older peers and then younger and stuff. And then it's like, hey, it's no longer like, you don't look like, a bum or something. It's like, no, I still make money and I can have a nose ring in and it doesn't impact it,
Right. How much does that matter?
Yeah.
Right. Ultimately, it's an optics thing, right? It's a matter of, if someone who's 75 years old comes to the library, say, and you're helping them, and you have one of them bull rings in your nose, and you got a face tattoo or something, they're going to feel uncomfortable.
Sure.
That's really who's trying to be protected, because ultimately you're checking out books to them. Whether you have that nose ring and those tattoos or not, the book is still, the service is still being provided in the exact same way.
Absolutely.
So it's more an aspect of that making everyone feel comfortable.
Yeah, and I see it, and it's interesting. So like, and I think there's like levels of dress code. You're right, absolutely. If it's hair, if it's like makeup, if it's rings like that, like that's a freedom of expression.
Yeah.
I was so shocked at the high school when, sure, you could say like crop tops or shorter skirts, whatever. That's like okay, but sometimes like I remember like, boys would be coming in with like Budweiser t-shirts or Playboy bunny hats. And I'm like, hey, like that's an aspect of like male dress code, like appropriate clothing. Like, hey, we're not pushing alcohol to minors. We're not trying to push pornography to minors. Like that's what that is. Yeah. Or, like they always had an issue with like, their pants being high enough. Like, let's not flash everybody. We don't want to see your underwear. But then like there would be some girls who'd come in and like be wearing maybe just the same, like showing a lot of skin or a lot of like their, bras and all that. I'm just like, hey, whoa, like that gets an aspect, like, that like I don't want to be subjected to that. I'm uncomfortable saying that. Like, let's not like push our ideas onto each other, because we're trying to be a public school. This is like an area for everyone. But you'd think the biggest aspect that the high school faced was the kids being like, oh, I'll do what I want. And it wasn't. They stopped enforcing a dress code altogether. And I asked Edmund, like, whoa, like that's a big deal that you guys aren't pushing a dress code. Is that because like you guys just couldn't get the kids to listen? Was there too many detentions? And they said, no, it was the parents. They said the first 2 weeks, they said we were handing out warnings. Like school started, we were giving warnings. There was detentions. Hey, you guys can't wear this. We have to be appropriate. Yada, yada, yada. And it was the parents continually coming in. How dare you tell my child what to wear? How dare you sexualize my daughter? How dare you? It's her freedom of expression. It's his idea. He's allowed to do this. They're not going to detention. And it was the parents absolutely destructing any type of authoritative rules that the school is doing. So the school just threw their hands up and they're like, well, screw it. I'm not going to, there's no reason to try.
So the moms and dads want to allow their daughter, let's say, to go to school wearing very revealing clothing. And when the school says, well, we don't think she should wear that because of the way maybe boys will look at her or whatever, their response is, you guys are sexualizing my daughter.
Yes.
Not the person who's dressing that way, not the person who's allowing their daughter to dress that way, but more the idea of boys looking at her in that way.
And maybe it's even a step away from the fact, because you're right, let's teach the boys to be respectful. Let's teach, we're not worried about adults in this situation because we're the adults and we keep things safe and proper and appropriate and everything, because that's our job. But maybe it's even that it's just like, hey, this isn't the situation to wear that. By all means, go to the mall and go to the beach and hang out. But if you can't wear a mini skirt to your office job, you shouldn't wear it to school because you're just learning a time and a place. Like, I like heels, but I'm not going to wear heels to work because I don't want to maybe trip, or I don't want people to constantly ask me about, where'd you buy those? Those are cute. You know, but I mean, it's just a time and a place.
That's why I don't wear heels either, for that exact same reason.
You know what? Honestly, Rad, I think you pull them off better than I.
I'd be tripping in things all over the place.
But so, like, there could be a number of reasons to not wear it, but just ultimately it's a time and a place for your outfit.
Sure.
And so...
Well, is it Starbucks right now that's having that whole thing with the shoes?
Yes. With the shoes and the clothing.
And the clothing.
Yeah, you
black,
have to wear black
shirt
or
whatever, and they're striking about it.
Yeah, and
I'm kind of like, well, if that's what you're... I mean, my wife and I had this conversation because it's an interesting conversation.
Sure.
Because I feel like if your job requires you to wear something, as long as it's reasonable, because then the person comes in and says, well, what if your job requires you to wear a Speedo or something?
Sure, lifeguard, whatever.
Yeah, right. Or if not, what if it's an office job and for whatever reason some sicko pervert up at the top is like, no, I want all the girls to wear bikinis.
Sure.
You know, no, I think at that point you have a right to stand up and say, no, this is inappropriate.
Absolutely.
But if they're just saying, look, the dress code here is we wear green shirts and black pants, certain kind of shoes, whatever. That's the dress. That's the uniform everybody wears.
Absolutely.
No different than if you work at McDonald's and you have to wear a McDonald's shirt with your name on it or whatever.
Absolutely.
That's
the collared polo.
Yeah. If you're that against wearing that, then don't work there.
Sure.
It's very simple. You can't demand of your employer that they change their whole thing around to suit you.
I agree.
You know?
I think the other half to that to consider is that, okay, if it's going to be such a rebrand, because it's their company, they can do what they want. If they want to rebrand it, that's their right as their company.
Yeah.
And I think in that aspect, then you need to look at why the dress code changed, because like I've seen Starbucks employees who have the other, previous Starbucks shirts, but they like logo, polo, everything, but they can no longer wear them because they're not black. Okay. So I've seen people having to like dye their old uniforms to match the color and stuff.
Because they can't afford to buy a new one?
Sometimes, yeah. Okay. I mean, honestly, there's so many people in this day and age living paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
I mean, like the joke I just made, I was doing school and library. That's like two notable professions that maybe not even 30 years ago, could have been supporting yourself in a basic middle class home.
Right.
But a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck now, and it's awful. And so there's the other aspect that's like, if it's so important to Starbucks that like, hey, we want this for safeties or branding, why isn't there a uniform stipend? Why aren't they giving the paycheck? Like, hey, we'll give you guys the first shirt, we'll give you guys the shoes. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned I got another job, my second job, I started working at the post office, the USPS, and I'm going through the academy and everything for it, and in our paycheck, we get a uniform stipend. Yeah. So we get money to like, because they want us in that uniform, so then there's the money
and
to
I'm
buy
all for that. I think that's great, and that was one of the things I talked about with Bethany too, is like, well, don't you think that if a job requires a certain dress or even a certain kind of shoes, because my daughter just got a job, my younger daughter just got a job, and they require her to wear non-slip shoes because she's working like in a restaurant setting, and she has to buy them herself. Yeah. And I kind of had a problem. I mean, I see both sides. I get, and after talking to my wife, she was like, well, no, this is why. And I'm like, to me, it just seems like if you're going to require something, you should provide it, but I don't know.
So if it's like a mom and pop just started little hometown coffee shop where maybe title money, I can kind of see like, hey guys, like let's all at least get like these one pairs or something. We need this for safety. I don't have the money for it. It's just Marianne who owns it herself kind of thing. I can be sympathetic to that. Sure. We're talking Starbucks, like multi-million dollar.
Yeah, they're not hurting for money.
No, they're not.
They're like there's Disney, then there's Starbucks, right? Yeah.
No, and honestly, it's like, okay, come on now. Like you can't like. There was the study that, I wish I could remember. This is why I wish I could take notes and remember everything ahead of time. Yeah. I don't remember who the company was, but it was one I had read online, and somewhere's going to Google it. Mm-hmm. But it was like a CEO who did like a test with his own company. And he made like great money and everything. You know, there's the statistic that like CEO payments since like I think the 70s has gone up like 300% kind of. But he took a pay cut for himself. Like he sold off a second home. He kind of thing, and he gave that money to his employees. Gave them all a raise to earn like more of like what they would have for living wage. And he saw within his own company, they started buying homes, they were having families, they were living better, and their work ethic and everything and their production went up because they're happier, they're not starving, they're not
feel
stressed.
Appreciated.
Yes.
Right.
And so there's so many people who are looking at the, you know, and like, hey, like Starbucks, even the CEO, and I don't have the notes to know how much he makes, but I'm, you know, I can probably...
He makes a good amount.
I can guess, you know.
He's doing okay.
Sure. That, like, well, how much is he actually giving back to the ground workers?
Right.
And how, you know, and I know I've heard that they have a great education plan. There's some that can own
Starbucks
stock
is one of the better places to work.
For sure.
For that
you
reason,
know, like Costco. Costco does a lot of wonderful payback. And so I'm not here trying to be like, down with businesses.
Right.
But there's got to be a middle ground. I mean, like, you know, we don't... A lot of businesses, you know, it's like like when you look at unions and stuff, you don't have pensions. You don't have the annual vacations. You don't have bonuses at Christmas time. You know, you don't have that with companies anymore that our generation, you know, mine sees, and that I assume, you know, Gen Z and then Gen Alpha when they enter the workforce is going to see. And so, of course, a lot of us we're supporting that. Oh, man, what was that movement? I forget the name of it, but it was like, you know, work your job, work what you're paid for. Don't go above and beyond. You know, I'm paid minimum
I remember
wage.
that. Yeah.
Yes. I make minimum wage. I will meet the needs and I will do my job. I will be paid for it, but I'm not going to do my overtime if I'm not getting paid overtime.
Sure.
I'm not going to do 3 other jobs if I'm not going to get that in my job title and get a bonus for it. You know, it's free labor essentially. You know, we're burned out. We're exhausted. Yeah,
but like,
sad.
do you think like there are certain jobs that should be minimum wage and they're minimum wage for a reason? Like people always talk about like a living wage, right? And there was this fight for a long time where these young kids or whoever it was working these minimum wage jobs saying we should all be making a living wage. To where I'm like, I don't know. I think minimum wage jobs are for the high school kid who's learning to work and doing that. They're still living with mom and dad. They shouldn't get a living wage. Now, if you want to move up in the fast food world, then you get a management or a regional supervisor kind of position. Then you make a lot of money. You can make a living wage then. Yeah. But the guy just like, you know, putting the lettuce on the tacos when he's 16... He shouldn't be making a living wage, in my opinion.
I think a better way to put it would be like entry-level jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So I think when, it was the president that created minimum wage back in the... I want to say like Eisenhower. I'm going to get that wrong.
That was a long time ago.
But the creation of minimum wage was to support people to live on the basic... Like you need at least this much money to like live...
Correct.
Basically.
This is the minimum amount of money you can make and still live.
And so with the economy today and everything, the minimum wage should have followed with it. Sure. And so that was the idea. Not like, hey, you make some money and still have to have a dual income, so get married and, you know, or like have roommates or whatever. But we're talking like the 30s. And everything when, you know, Social Security was created and all that kind of stuff.
It was one income families.
Exactly.
Pretty much the mom stayed home and the dad went to work.
Sure. Yeah. And so I feel like the different idea is like, rather than looking at jobs like, well, this is minimum wage and do you deserve that much? I think it's better to call it like, well, this is like an entry level because everyone has to start somewhere. Yeah. So maybe that fast food is like an entry level. You're just starting. We have to all start somewhere. Kids in high school, summer jobs or anything. Right. But they should still be able to make that basic, because if the idea of minimum wage is that they could afford their own little apartment, they could afford, you know, like I had friends who were emancipated at like 14 years old, you know, sometimes not every family is, you know, perfect or the kids are helping support single mom who, you know, can't make enough with her own income, you know. And so if the idea of like minimum wage is going to be to support yourself on that, then I think an entry level job should start that. Now, should I think the higher up jobs, we got fed, you need a master's degree. We got fed the managers at like McDonald's. We're talking, you know, if we want to move up, should they be making a minimum wage? No, they should be making more. No, I think our teachers should be making more than minimum wage. Right. I think they should be making as much as doctors, as much as lawyers. Right. You know, look at, you know, other jobs that are pertaining to education and system. If we want to push so hard that America is such a great country and it's the land of resource and opportunity and everything, then we have to look at how much money our people are making to actually live. I mean, we're kind of like the joke. It's, we're a third world country with a Gucci belt on.
Yeah. Right. Nice.
Yeah. It's all about appearances.
Right.
We want to look like we're the best.
Sure.
When compared statistically, we're not. Like, a lot of our states have really low in education.
Yeah.
And I oh my gosh, I can't stand the standardization that California pushes for.
Right.
But the teachers are burnt out on big class sizes and no support from admin.
Yeah.
Again, then you have kids who were, after COVID, like the COVID kids that are going through high school right now. And I don't mean the ones that graduated in 2020 and they missed their prom and missed their graduation,
like my son.
and all that.
My son was in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother aspect of toughness for them. Mm-hmm. But I mean, like the really young kids that are now like 5 years later that are entering junior high and high school, and they've all had Chromebooks the whole time. When I'm doing substituting, and I did some time at the libraries, we were in charge of the Chromebooks for the kids. The teachers aren't even giving, like PowerPoint presentation, here's your worksheet, take notes in your notebook. There's none of that. It's Chromebooks. You sign on like what college used to be for me. It was online college. You had your classes and maybe take notes or something there.
You like watch a video of a class basically, and then
but that's high school and junior high now. The kids, they type it, and their penmanship is terrible for it. When we would have them like, hey, your Chromebook's broken. All right, here's a sticky note. Write your name and your class student ID number so we know. And you have to like read their chicken scratch. You're like, what?
Yeah.
And it's especially with that nationwide, I think it was through maybe the Bush era or Obama era, I forget what it was, but the No Kid Left Behind.
Oh, yeah.
And so
I think it was Bush, yeah.
Bush, thank you. And you're not allowed to hold kids back anymore because it was no, everyone should go forward, everyone should be on the same.
Right.
But, there's teachers, again, friends of mine who tell me that there's like fifth graders who don't know how to spell their name. There's kids in junior high who can't read a clock.
Yeah.
There's, because instead of like, hey, they couldn't read, they needed extra help. That's, again, a whole nother discussion of...
Well, it is, and that's a big issue because I think you mentioned class sizes and that kind of thing, and that's when it becomes hard when you have one or two teachers to deal with 50 plus kids. So, I mean, one of the main reasons that we've actually homeschooled all four of our children.
Oh, okay.
From pretty early on.
That must have been hard.
Oldest, no, not too bad.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, granted, my wife did most of the work.
Sure.
But she would tell you it wasn't too bad. But my older daughter did kindergarten, first grade, public school, and then we homeschooled her all the way through high school after that. And then my older son did kindergarten, public, and then all the way. And our younger two did all the way straight across the board. But one of the beauties of homeschooling is because, I mean, and this is a perfect example, because even within our family with four children, from the same two parents being raised the same way, they're all so different in their learning styles, what they're better at, what they're worse at, what they need more help with than others. And through homeschooling, we're able to focus more on what needs work. Like, okay, well, your English is great. Your essay writing is fantastic, but your math is terrible. So let's spend more time doing math because that's the area that you need help in. To where my other kid might be like, oh, I hate writing essays. I'm a terrible writer, but I can crunch numbers all day long. So then we'll focus more with her on English, or literature, that kind of thing. And it's just it's such a better format, and I understand not all parents can do that. I get that, and that's why the public school should be that outlet, should be that way that the parents can take them to school while they go to work or whatever, and that's what should be happening at the schools. But it's so hard because, again, there's less teachers, there's mass amounts of students doing this, and you just get to the point like, okay, what do you do?
And it's such a tough thing because I know I've heard on like both sides like the idea that like standardization kind of defeats letting kids shine or anything. I think the push of college has been really unhelpful. When I was working and helping out at the library at one of the local high schools for a little bit, I was there for some months. I remember we had like a career day with the career center, and they would invite all the colleges and everything. And I went and I talked to them. I said, hey, do you guys do this for trade schools? I said, like, we have all these, here. Are we inviting the, local gas company? Are we inviting the electricians union? Are we getting operating engineers in here for heavy equipment, operators? Are we, all these ideas? I said, because college isn't for everyone. And that's like me, because I have two older brothers, and we all kind of took different routes. My oldest brother went to college. My middle brother decided it wasn't for him and went the trade route. And then I went to college, but, for art. So we can argue if that was, I have a degree in liberal arts. Yeah, you have a degree in baloney, and so, everyone has different doors. And so there was a lot of kids that I wanted to in the library would make sure to push that. They'd come in, maybe they weren't doing great with school and numbers, and I wanted to talk to them and get to know them, and because you never know if you were going to be the only one that they would see like as a smile for that day. You don't know what their home life's like. You don't know what they're dealing with or how their teachers are, because there's some teachers that are absolute, not very nice in a very nice way to put it. And so I would just get talking like, hey, like, you're great at this. Like, look into unions, like look into that. And then when I had talked to the counselor about it, the career tech, and she's like, yeah, we do, and it's down over here, and it's, at like 5 p.m. and after. I'm like, oh, so like you have the colleges during the day when the kids leave their classes and do walkarounds, but the trades have to be after school when the parents are off work trying to figure out dinner and they're tired, and it's down on the lower half of the campus. I'm like, that's not, why aren't you mixing them? Why aren't you having them in the same? Why aren't they in the classrooms? And so it's like, and
do you think they're kind of, not really switching gears, but kind of back to what we were saying before, there's kind of a push now from a lot of people. I don't know if Charlie Kirk's a big one, but I don't know if you know Charlie Kirk.
Yes,
basically he says college is a scam, and he's kind of pushing. And there's a lot of the country now and even just the public that is looking at, do I send my kid to college? Is this as important as it used to be? And it seems like in most cases, even like employers or corporations stuff, they're not really looking so much for who has the master's. They're looking for who's got the qualifications, who can do the job, who has the experience maybe through an internship or through that kind of thing. I mean, where we work is a little different because I cannot tell you how many different jobs I've got passed over for because I don't have the credential.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Even though I'm thinking, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know how to do this better than that guy. He's never worked here before, but he's got a degree.
Yep.
So therefore they just hire him. It's like,
I'm a library technician because I don't have my master's in library sciences. Absolutely. I'm not an official librarian.
Exactly.
And that's something a lot of people are like.
Outside of that, though, it seems like most other places, they're not really that concerned with that. They're more like, can you do this?
Sure.
Yeah, I can do that.
Or even if you have the master's and they're like, we want you to have a master's and here's your, $13 an hour.
Right.
Right. But in California, of course, is I think for 15. But that's the point. And then back to the original topic, like if you're in a higher position, why are you making minimum wage? Right. Minimum wage should be entry level positions.
Right.
And so, I definitely feel it. I think I can see a lot of, the conversation about is schools brainwashing or having an agenda coming from a place of fear.
That's where I was going to go next.
Yes, I think that comes from a real place of fear because I want to say, as someone who's worked in the school system, you're giving a lot of administration too much credit. Like that there's some mastermind pushing an agenda because we're exhausted and using our own money to buy pencils that little Jimmy keeps breaking over his knee for the 5th time because, again, his parents have never told him no, and he thinks it's funny to break something because he'll get another one. Yeah. Because, again, it goes back, like I said, that there's no, the consequences to it.
Well, but, barring, a big, huge, conspiracy agenda like what you're talking about, but, I mean, do you think that public schools, whether... or even private schools. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter if it's public or private, just government schools or whatever, whether it's high school or college or whatever. Do you think they should be teaching things like morality and ethics and that kind of thing? Or do you think they should be teaching academics, you know, because that's people's argument. They say, I send my kid to college and they come back and they're politically bent a certain way or they believe all these things. Like, why are you teaching them that in school? That's not what they're there for.
I think it depends on the education. So I think college should have access to those classes to teach ethics and philosophy and all that? Absolutely. Sure. You're an adult. You can choose what you want. It's a higher education. Maybe someone wants to sit there and learn about civil rights, racial tensions, all that kind of stuff, and government kind of thing. Now, do I think outside of basics, maybe like kindergartners or first graders, I think that's maybe a heavy-ended topic.
Sure. Oh, for sure.
But I think a lot of people, because of fear that both sides of the government have pushed about, brainwashing and this, and we're the right for you. No, we're the right for you. Because, again, like I said, I mentioned earlier, I kind of am fed up with both sides.
Right.
I think they're putting labels to it to prove their own agenda with something that's been there forever. Kindergarten has always taught the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated. Sure. That's not a new thing.
Right.
But now people could be like, that's teaching some, thing that should be only in the family. Like, no, guys, that's always been there. You learned it. Like, let's not make up new words for something that's always been there that we're trying to be fearful of. Do I think families should be teaching their own faith, their own, I think heavier topics of like sexuality and stuff? Right. I get that. That's like a very like family choice.
See, that's a good point. Like,
Absolutely.
let's say like if the colleges or let's say the high schools. Let's leave it in high school for now. So let's say the high schools are teaching a certain religion.
Sure.
When their kids are going to, I think there'd be much more uproar about that. Be like, no, that's my job to teach my kid about faith and that kind of thing. It's not your job.
Do I think maybe the school can offer, if there's an interest of like a general broader religious topic?
Right.
Maybe it's like world history and you're learning like, hey, China has this, America has this, and it's learning everything. Because now you're just learning religion in general.
But it's not pushed in an indoctrination kind of way. It's pushed as this is historical. This is what they believe that, this percentage of China's Buddhist or whatever, right? That kind of thing.
And I've had, now when it comes to college, then have that bigger discussion. Have that, because now, again, you're a personal thinking forward adult. You can you're meeting people from other states all over the world. Some are military, some are not, their own backgrounds.
Sure.
That should be the point of wanting to learn,
Well, let me throw this at you though, because, okay, so I'm with you, like with college, classes should be available.
Yes.
Right? If someone even wants to take a course in religious studies, yes, take it. If someone wants to take a class in LGBTQ stuff, take it. It's available.
Sure.
But I think the critics are not
worried
bothered
about
so much
kids.
that. Well, yes, that. But what I'm getting at is like within college, they're more concerned that the general ed classes, say your literature, your even math, those kind of things, to where those concepts are being pushed into those topics. To where, like, let's say you're taking a literature course, or you're learning and you're reading books and you're writing book reports and this kind of thing. And every book, let's say, this is just an example. It's not true. But every book, let's say, for that whole semester was an LGBTQ book.
Okay.
Now, and the class wasn't like LGBTQ literature. It wasn't anything to do. It was just like, whatever, English 101 or something. And there'd be an obvious bent and bias from that professor who was pushing that into that classroom. And someone might say, well, why? What is that all about? Right? So, that's, I think, where people are more...
the question could be is if they're having books that are all that, is it every book about the history of the movement and about, like, talking about persecution and that kind of thing?
Sure.
Or is it just a book that might have a cast member in the story who falls into that?
Or an author that's
absolutely.
Gay or
in
whatever,
that case, then I would say, well, I don't think that's a book on that. Just because the author's Christian, it's not a Christian book.
Right.
Just because the author is straight, married to a woman or a man or whatever they are, doesn't mean it's a book on straight orientation. It's just that happens to be the character.
Well, that would be harder to do that because that's more of a majority.
Yes,
right?
But
if it's a minority,
that's something people might say. It's like, well, like if that's the norm, it's like, why is it suddenly like, okay, well, the character is African American,
right?
And is it suddenly now a book on civil rights and racial just because they happen to be that nationality?
Right.
And it's like, well, no, that's just what they are, and they're a general story.
Yeah, but it would have to be planned that way.
Yes.
Like if you were in college and you had an African American professor, and it was a literature class, and every single book that semester, let's say there was 15 books read that semester, all of them were by African American authors. You would have to think like that's on purpose. You'd wonder there's a reason for that. Like,
and maybe in the syllabus in the beginning, it's like, hey, we're going to look at books that not everybody and their mother's read. How many more times do I have to read Tom Sawyer? How many more times do I have to read Ernest Hemingway? Like, let's focus on some authors we haven't, that are still there, that are just as good. Like in the library, and I tell parents this, when the big topic of like book bans and everything like they did in Florida and all that with the schools, or even I've had when I was doing the bookmobile for Camp Pendleton, we had, I had a child psychologist for the school because there was 3 elementary schools on base, and they came on the bus. They're like, hey, we're concerned. Student A here checked out the book 13 Reasons Why. And it was, I believe she was like 6th grade or 6th or 7th grade, something like that. And we would go to the schools because the school district at the time didn't have enough money for the libraries. Now, whether or not I knew if they had that on base, because I feel like the ones outside of base did. I don't know if maybe the base was getting ignored or whatever. But they didn't have money for books for the base schools for the older kids. And so we would supplement that by going with the bookmobile and let the kids come on. And I always had the rule that's like, hey, as a public library, I can't tell the kids what they can or cannot check out. But I could follow the teacher's rules. So that's like, hey, no DVDs. No, you guys are doing a report on Egypt. Let's stick to books only on Egypt.
That's more of a broad thing.
Yes. And so we had a student who checked out 13 Reasons Why. And
which is about suicide, correct?
Yes. was a student who killed herself and left her note, and the impact it had on people. And it's a controversial book.
Yeah.
And so we had the school therapist who came on, psychologist. I get the two words mixed up. I'm sorry, but she wanted me to pull YA books, any books that are considered YA. Now, the Library of Congress has a wide age range for YA. YA is 12 years old to 19 years old.
Right. So hang on. So you say pull them, remove them from the system?
She wanted me to not have them for the kids at school.
Just because they're YA? Regardless of the individual books and what's in them? Yes, because
she considered that this student was in a program, considered it was like at risk. That book could be triggering. They don't want her reading that.
Right.
And I had to tell her, like, hey, I like not only the logistics of like after this route, I go to a military battalion. I can't take off hundreds of books and put them back on.
Right.
And like I see 80 kids in one stop at a school.
Right.
I told her, I said, I don't know what each kid's reading level is. I don't know if one kid's family likes them reading Harry Potter or not. I don't know what. I straight up told her, I said, that's the teacher's job. If the teacher knows his or her students, and if there's like a, hey, their reading level, or hey, the parents don't want this, or yada, 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 then they can come and say, hey, little Jimmy, let's not read that. That's not school appropriate. You can't read Stephen King here in class. Take it back. But I told her, I said, at the same time, I'm at the housing stop just below the school for my last route. If little Jimmy comes on and checks out, It from Stephen King, he legally can.
Right.
If he brings it to school and the teacher says, hey, that's not appropriate here, then that's their prerogative. But I can't stop them from coming to the housing stop. And so...
Well, it's funny how you say that it's the teacher's job, right?
Yes.
Because then the problem becomes...
then again, the teacher's overwhelmed. How many students do they have?
Well, not only that, but then you have this library in the school.
Yes.
And I know that the argument that's been going on for quite a few years now is should these particular books be allowed in a school library for, say, high schoolers or whatever it is? And usually the rebuttal back is, well, it's up to the parents to monitor what their kids are reading or not reading, which I agree with to an extent, but at the same time, if these kids have access to this library, how hard is it for a kid to check out a book from the school library and I'm never going to see it? My kid will bring it home, she'll keep it in her backpack, absolutely. I'll never see the thing.
Totally get that.
Right? You see what I'm saying? So I think that for certain parents, they're concerned with a certain thing.
Is what material are they getting access
because
to?
I mean, I was horrified when I first started working at the library. And again, this isn't to say I don't agree in censorship. In most cases, I think people should have freedom of speech to write and produce whatever they want. But I do think we should be protecting children from certain forms of stuff. But when I first started working at the library, like you said, I was told that the young adult section was from, I think they told me like 12 to 18 or something, right? Or 12 to 17. I forgot the range. So when a 13-year-old girl comes in and asks me, well, where's the section with books for my age category? I'm 13. I said, well, it's over there in the young adult.
Yeah.
Well, as I started kind of going through some of these, because as my kids getting that age, like, oh, what do they want to watch? What do they listen to? I started flipping through some of these books.
Some of them can be kind of spicy.
Oh, my gosh.
Sure.
Like the one I was the example of, I can't remember, I think it was a PC Cast. Remember those?
Yes.
Remember those were popular?
Yes. The vampire books.
Yeah, which I'd never read them.
But
just by flipping through, I remember I got to a part where like one girl was within detail teaching another girl how to give oral sex.
Sure.
And I'm going, okay, so this is what I'm supposed to recommend for a 12 and 13-year-old little girl? And their parents have no idea. So my whole thing, I got on this crusade to like not stop that, but just to make sure that parents knew.
Sure.
I don't want them to be blindsided like me and have their 13-year-old daughter, hey, mommy, what's this?
Yeah. Like,
what in the world? Like,
we haven't even had that talk yet.
Exactly. Absolutely. So it's like that's the kind of stuff that I'm concerned with. The parents are like, oh yeah, I don't care if they read that. Then okay.
I think Library of Congress, or at least a lot of libraries, I don't know if it's officially through the Congress, has kind of established and created a new section because of that. You're right. There's a lot of kids who maybe don't even be reading about college age things because there's a difference. That's such a wide thing. A 19-year-old might not want to read Harry Potter or like Rick Riordan book. I hope I said his last name right.
That's the way I say it. I say Riordan.
And I get it. There's like age ranges. I also, when I was getting into YA, I don't want to read, Debbie McBomber's Secrets of the Divorced Woman in Her 50s in the Small Town, And
it doesn't relate to you.
There's a new level called New Adult.
Okay.
And so a lot of those former YA books, like Sarah Ma's books, all that kind of stuff, are falling into like the new adult. That's like the college age kids who are dealing with those life things or want to read that kind of stuff. I remember there was a big controversy about the book Icebreaker because the cover was like a cartoon. It was illustrated. And so younger kids are like, oh, that's a really cool cover. I want to read it. But it's a mature book.
I never heard of that one.
It's a, they call it like the spicy romance, and And so, but the point I was, making, like, I agree with you about certain books for certain things, was that when I don't think that, I think public libraries and I think school libraries can be different. Because I think school libraries should have books that, like, okay, your English teacher is going to be giving this. I think it can have books that, we mentioned, you asked about like, the teachers giving so many books. Is there like a prerogative to it or not? I think, I try and encourage parents when I was working at the library that, like, hey, whether, your daughter's going to read that PC Cast book or her friend at school is going to mention that what she found online or her best friend.
Might even show her that section of the book.
Sure.
Look what I read last night.
I think if there's a book that might be controversial that your English class gives, so for a while it was about Tom Sawyer and the language in it because it was during a time before civil rights movement.
Because I say the N-word a bunch.
Yes. Yeah. And so some people are like, do we want to read it? Do we not? And stuff. I always encourage parents to read the book with your kids.
Yes.
Absolutely. Read it side by side. When your kid's going to have questions, then you can have a discussion of why you support it, why you don't, why we don't like this and stuff. And then you're informed because I feel like having that knowledge is better than being in ignorance.
Sure.
Because they're going to learn it from someone. Whether they Google it because they think, I can't ask mom and dad. They're not a safe space to ask about that.
Right. Yeah.
And I would rather the kids have like, hey, you know what? Let's talk about religion. Let's talk about what we believe. Let's talk about what we don't believe. Let's talk about, what you're going to hear from friends, that kind of thing. And then I think that was a big thing about, like you were mentioning about what schools should, the idea of brainwashing, what they should teach, what they should not. Do I think, like a lot of the school districts here we're at, they cut out sex ed. And it's like, I think parents should absolutely have that conversation with their kids. I think that there should still be...
Instead of the schools, you think?
I think the schools need to teach because there's going to be a lot of parents who won't.
Right.
There's parents who will not want to. They won't have the education themselves, maybe. Maybe they're uncomfortable with it. Maybe they don't know how to. I think there should be like a general safety of like, hey guys, you're going to, be coming this age. There's going to be hormones. These are how to be safe. These are what your friends are going to be talking about.
Right.
I think parents should absolutely have a right to say, hey, let's sign out, not do the class because maybe they want to have.
But you
that
think
help.
It should be an option for maybe parents that are too chicken?
I do. Not even just chicken, but
just don't want to.
Again, like I mentioned in the beginning, that the parents who don't care. The parents are like, you'll figure it out. I was fine. Yeah. No, seriously.
No, I laugh because that's my favorite thing people say. Well, I did such. I turned out okay.
Yeah.
Anybody who says that, you're always looking at them like, no, you didn't.
And things are better now than what it used to be.
Right.
Like we look at like the rate of teen pregnancy has dropped since the 70s because
especially in Santa Maria. Did you know we were the #1 in the nation for a while?
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
And it's better because of like you can absolutely push absence. You can absolutely push that. And I have friends who joke about that with me. They're like, Kate, you're in your 30s, and I'm like, well, no, like if you don't want to deal with that, just don't do it. That's the basic. But you have a right to do what you want.
Sure.
And so if you're going to do it, here's how to be safe.
Yeah.
And so I think all boards of topics should be there. That not one is the right way, and every family has a right to talk how they want because every kid's going to be different. People who have an interest and have no interest, but.
It seems though that it's and this is the argument I think that people make is that you feel like almost like you're condoning it. It's like the argument between the abstinence talk versus the safe sex talk. Sure. You almost feel like you're saying, okay, look, don't do this.
Yeah.
But if you do,
here's
a condom.
And I get it. I'm not a parent.
Just like it's almost like your parents are like saying, don't do this, but I know you're gonna, kind of a deal, right? So it's
and I get that, and I don't have kids, so there's going to be a lens that maybe I can't see through that fear, that worry that your child best, whether they're a kid who's going to get up to something or not, but I mean the reality is they're. That's like the argument. That's like parents like, oh, well, just drink at the house instead of going out.
I was going to bring that one up.
That's a big thing.
It is.
Well, that's underage drinking.
But then it's almost like telling it's okay to get drunk when you're 16 but I understand where they're coming from.
Sure.
Because as a parent, I don't want my kids drinking when they're 16.
Sure.
But you know what? If I had to choose between them drinking at my house when they're 16 or drinking and driving from their friend's house and dying in a drunk driver crash, I'll take this option. But ultimately, the option is don't drink till you're 21 and then do it responsibly, right? Yeah.
And you look at other countries like Italy, for example, has such a big culture mixed with wine and everything.
Right.
And they look at it different than such a party culture. Like in America, like they wait. No, I'm 21, I'm going to party, then maybe I drink and drive and maybe all this because, I waited and stuff, that there's no, I think, built-in respect to it. It's like in Italy, it's such a culture thing. You have some with dinner. You cook with it. You do everything that it's not a big deal when you can't actually drink.
My 17-year-old daughter and her just turned 16-year-old friend
Sure.
already planning a trip when they're both 18 or over
Sure.
to Italy so they can drink wine when they're 18.
Yeah. I had a friend in high school who went to Scotland who him and his dad went to a pub because the rule is if you could see over the pub, you can drink. And they had a Guinness together.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so it's like,
my
you know,
gosh.
like I get it. You know, the idea of like when it comes to potentially like taboo topics or anything, it's like you don't want to encourage them, but like I feel like being armed with the knowledge is safer than being caught off guard. Because
it can be.
Then that can come up to where like, what about like peer pressure or if she's assaulted or, you know, anything like that. That topic happens with people you know more than a stranger.
Yeah, I think a good communication center with your kids is key. Like, especially from day one, you teach them that they can talk to you. You keep up that, you know, don't be the parent that just lets them go off and do whatever while you're watching TV all night or whatever. You know, develop that relationship.
And that is like the goal of like everything, whether like I talked about, you know, dress code or like teaching is parents need to parent. Parents need to parent. And I get that's harder now because they're burned out and they're working 2 jobs and they're stressed about the economy and they're worried like, is my kid's going to have retirement? Spoiler alert, no, we're not. You know, I've given that up. There was a shoe advertisement for Timberlands that's like, you're never going to retire, you know, so our shoes aren't going to wear out or something like that. Like last longer. And I was just like, huh. He's like starts crying in the mall.
Do you want kids someday or no?
You know, I'd like to, but I definitely have that thought that's like, what world am I going to bring them into? You know, what is that like I've had girlfriends of mine who are like telling me like, oh my gosh, you know, is that a selfish choice? Like the world's overwhelmed with stuff. We have a high population. We have a lot of, you know, so it's complicated and it's tough. You know, I had dreams of that when I was younger. I wanted to be a Girl Scout mom. I wanted to be involved with that, you know, and sometimes the road of life doesn't go the way you expect. And, you know, if that's you know, I'm very much someone who thinks like, you know, I think God answers every prayer. Sometimes that answer's no. And if that's not what was in the plan for me, then I'll be at peace for it. But
so you're okay with not having kids, but you still might want to.
I'm 33. I'm getting kind of close. I'm at that, you know, and so I just sometimes it's just like, you know, I'll just whatever's meant to happen will happen. You know, and sometimes I think maybe that's why I was in libraries, because I love working with students. I love having a hand in the community, and maybe that I can be the cool aunt that way. And I can
there you
still
go.
be with, you know, kids and have an impact and offer them that love and safety that they might not get at home.
So back to kind of what you're saying.
Yes,
about,
I'm all over the board.
No, this is great. This is great. I love how this. I like when it flows like this because it's. I like that it's going other places.
Sure.
I like being shocked at where we're going.
Fair enough. Okay.
Because that's what makes it fun for me. It'd be boring for me if every time it would be like, okay, what's your favorite color? Yellow. Okay. You know, it's just like I just love letting the conversation go. But this idea of, I think we were talking about when you're talking about reading certain books with your kids, is read it with them, like you brought up, like Tom Sawyer. Read it with them, because then there's some opportunities for teaching. There's opportunity to say, this is a word used in this book, and here's why it was used. There's a certain time in history when this was a kind of thing.
Or even that 13 Reasons Why. I never finished that story. Again,
go for
I'm tangent all over.
Let's finish it now.
But so I was telling the teacher, I was telling her that like, hey, if she's going through her life with these tragedies, because again, they're on base. They have parents who are dying in war. They are living in a very hard situation. It is, you know, war and death and all that is a way of life and very common for them. They have friends who's, you know, on deployments and all that kind of stuff. If she has questions or curiosity about suicide, that book is a great safe way for her to read about it and learn that, oh, shoot, this student did this and this is what impacted the kids in their lives. In the back of the book, there's links and phone lines and things to like, hey, you know, call people and talk about this. And it's a safe way they can explore those topics.
And is the book, I've never read the book, but is it an anti-suicide?
It is.
Like it shows the ill effects of what happens after the fact.
It shows the letter she wrote and the people who were tragically affected by her and how like that was such a waste of, you know, life and her chance and opportunity and like what they did to put her there, and like, hey, be aware of like the impact you have on other people, because like as we've seen with like the suicide rate amongst like teens, you know, the percentage of anxiety, like I remember reading at one point, and this was years ago, so maybe the statistic's not even real anymore, but that the level of anxiety that high schoolers have is like double or triple the amount that like patients in mental hospitals in the 50s had. Like it's so much worse what our kids are going through now, you know.
Well, but see, that's an interesting conversation though, because I mean I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder my whole life.
Sure.
I didn't even know what it was until I was 33. That's when I finally got some help and figured out what's going on.
Yeah.
My whole life, it was basically, I just thought everything in the world was wrong with me. I was in and out of ERs. What's wrong with my brain? What's wrong with my heart? Like, something's wrong. And the doctors were always like, there's nothing wrong with you. We ran a bunch of tests. Which is frustrating in a sense, not because I want something wrong with me, but because I know something's going on and the doctor's telling me I'm fine. It's like, no, I'm not fine. So, I mean, I understand what it's like to go through all that. And I do agree with the statistics that show that a higher percentage of young people especially are going through this.
Yeah.
But usually the thing that people say is, well, it's because of the way the world is today.
Sure.
It's the things they're dealing with today.
Sure.
And I feel like there might be an element of truth to that.
I agree.
But I also think the way we're raising our kids now is they're weaker. They're not as strong. I don't mean physically. I mean mentally. They're more prone to things. There's like,
not a lot of resilience.
Yeah, Susie doesn't like my hair. I'm going to go kill myself. Like, that wasn't happening 30, 40 years ago very often, right? The kids, Susie doesn't like my hair. I don't care what Susie thinks.
It's definitely a balance. It's a lot of, like we said, that, having access again to like social media and seeing a bombardment of everybody's opinion and everybody's a keyboard warrior. That's overwhelming compared to being at school and maybe hearing one or two people being a jerk and the parents being able to be like, don't do that. And then the people being able to like, I can defend myself, like, hey, if someone gets in your face, like the zero tolerance policy in school, between like boys, for example, if, one guy's being a bully and harassing someone and pushing the other kid, you can't defend yourself, you can't do anything. No, let him hit back. Put that bully in his place.
That's the way it used to be.
Defend yourself, and you should be able to. But everyone's tried to very much be like, make nice. No, we can't do that. And so there are repercussions to being able to have that resilience, and to be able to be like, when the teacher asks you to do something, I listen. And again, that joke I made about pencils. Well, no, I don't have to listen. I'm going to do it because you're going to buy it for me anyway, and my parents are going to care when the teacher calls the parent to say, hey, your kid keeps breaking my stuff. And then it's like, how dare you say my kid can't do it?
Well, see, and that, to me, that's the problem.
Yes.
Right? Like there's certain scenarios, there's a scenario that we just heard about of somebody that we know that that the school has a no phone policy during class.
Yes.
In between classes, they can have their phones or whatever, but during class has to be away. If you see it, the teacher sees it, gets confiscated, right? So the student's phone got confiscated. So the parent goes down there, all ticked off, and starts in front of their child yelling at the teacher, saying, how dare you take their phone away? And the teacher's like, well, the rule is she can't have it out during class, and she did. Right? So what does that tell the kid? It tells the kid that they can break the rules, and then mom or dad's going to come down and put the teacher in their place, and I can do whatever I want.
It's like, and this is my own theory, and I'm sure there's bigger dissertations and everything on it, but I feel like, so when I say our generation, like millennials, I feel like we really had decided and liked the idea and kind of encouraged that, like, hey, we can be free thinking. We don't have, because, the idea of like authority back in like maybe with Gen X or anything was like, do as I say, not as I do. Listen to the parents, never question authority. Everyone is right. You have to, and we didn't like that. We were like, hey, no, there are things that can be changed. I don't like just blindly listening to teachers. The teacher was wrong, or absolutely in that moment, like we should be able to choose or speak for ourselves or kind of thing. And I feel like
if we disagree, though, or if they cross the line into inappropriate.
That's what I was saying. That I feel like we kind of took that and ran with it. The idea of like, hey, you can, politely have a discussion with your teacher of like, oh, I don't like you calling me that, or I should be able to have that. Or again, the topic of dress code, hey, wearing flip-flops to school is okay. Hey, showing my shoulder to not distract little Jimmy, that's not affecting my academic. Let's teach Jimmy to be appropriate. But I feel like it went too far, and now parents who might be like, hey, you can't tell my kid not to take a phone, and they're showing their kid that no, like, you don't give basic respect to people. That's just, I think, going back to like kind. Like maybe if the parent really has an issue, then call the teacher privately on the phone and not in front of your child. Have that discussion. Like when I was in 6th grade, I got my first cell phone at 13 years old because the school would not let me call my mom when I was sick, and my mom was upset. So I got my first flip phone, flop, 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 little antenna and all that. And so when my mom told me, if you ever need me and the school won't let you, you can call me. And I firmly believe that. Kids were walking home. The school was more, the society was more aware, like, hey, things are dangerous. The world's always been dangerous. The 70s had serial killers. It's not a new thing. But, being able to put in context, especially when you look at, like, school shootings and things, I get that parents want kids to have a lifeline, that if something goes down, they can get in touch with the parents. well, why don't, the classrooms each have phones, or why don't we bring payphones back? I mean, man,
Right.
at the library, that's something I've talked to, like a few other coworkers about. Like, man, like we have so many patrons who are near like City Hall or near the jail or homeless or anything. We're like, hey, can we borrow your phone? Or mine died. I'm trying to, and we have nothing.
There used to be one right there.
Yeah.
In between City Hall and the library.
Yeah. And I've asked one of the managers about it, and I was just like, is that like a City Hall ordinance? Is that like us? But I know like the phone companies maintain the phones, and it's like, well, shoot, why don't we just call AT&T? Like, hey, this would be great for our patrons. Who do we talk to?
Well, no, they got rid of them.
I know.
That was
they
their
should
decision.
put it back.
Yeah.
I know, but
there used to be one right there where the water filling station is.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so that way the people, the homeless or anyone who needs just if my phone dies and I need to call my ride, then I'm not trying to scour around to the mall or something.
Right.
I mean, Amtrak stations over in Lompoc have a payphone, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's a payphone there. But if phones are so connected, I mean, other countries still have payphones.
Right.
Why don't we have them?
Because we've elevated beyond the payphone. See,
I know. Oh my gosh, I hate my iPhone so much.
Oh, yeah?
And I'm a hypocrite because I won't get rid of it.
Right.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
But so it's a balance. I really think that we took the idea and ran with it of question every authority and do it yourself and stuff, because there still has to in society be a basis of respect.
Yes.
There has to
or
be.
Or it will crumble.
Yes, and so I think we're seeing that with the younger generation that are maybe even having kids now, and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to raise my kid on an iPad like I was. I don't like that. We need to bring some structure, because society's a circle. You look at it like fashion. It all goes around and comes around. It's going to go and come and ebb and flow and everything. And so it's like we're swinging back around to where people want the older technology and older ideas, and
But I think questioning authority, I think, is always a good thing.
Yes.
But there's ways to do it. Like
Absolutely.
we talked about, the storming into the classroom where your kid's with you and yelling at the teacher is not the way, because it's even within our marriage. We've tried, we fail at this sometimes, but we've tried to maintain an idea of, if we disagree on something, really we've come to the conclusion or the arrangement that we're going to have these discussions behind closed doors.
Sure.
Even if one kid says, hey, can I go to Jimmy's party later?
Yeah.
Or whatever. We're not going to discuss that in front of the kids, because then they're going to, if one of us is okay with it and the other one's not, they're going to hear that. So then if the answer comes back as no, they're going to think, oh, my dad is such a jerk.
And not just
Mom
that,
loves me, but Dad's a jerk, Like
I remember I had a friend like this, and it always would make my jaw drop, that she could manipulate her parents. She could be like, oh, Mom, did you hear what Dad said? Dad, did you see what Mom just did? And then they could if Dad will let her go to the party and Mom won't, and that would oh my gosh, why would you ever? That's just I would never dream of that.
Yeah.
Because also that's not that it's maybe a level of respect for your parents and authority and kind of thing, and you can just there's always that wave of my parents not always right, they can make wrong choices and stuff, but again, it's just if you have a fit, and some parents are that very heavy-handed. They won't let their kids sit down to have hey, tell me why you really want to go to this party. Let's talk about it. Is this important to you?
Yeah.
There's some parents who are very iron fist, and the kids can't. So I don't think there's one answer to it. I keep sounding like such
all kids, no,
a
it's true though.
scapegoat, but it's
all
really
kids
a
are different.
ground.
But I know that for us, I used to say my whole life, because I hated when my parents would say, because I said so, that's why, right? So I kind of vowed from an early age, I will never say that to my kids. But you know what? I say that to my kids sometimes.
Because
there's no answer they're going to take except the one they want.
Sure.
So if the answer is no, and they want to talk about why, I'm all for it.
Absolutely.
I can give you all the reasons why. You can't go because of this reason, this reason, this reason.
Sure.
They're always going to come back with something, and it's not. I'm not saying they can't come back with something that's a good rebuttal.
Yeah.
It's in their heads. There is no conceivable reason why they should not be able to do this thing.
Sure.
So no matter what I say to them, it's not going to matter. It's just going to be the back and forth. So it's finally you can't go.
Yeah.
Why? Just don't worry about it. You can't go.
No, absolutely. Because there's definitely an aspect that as an adult or as parents or anything, we understand that sometimes our decisions are not only maybe for their safety or anything, but they can't understand that yet. They're still, of that level of maturity that, maybe we're that's going to be, an open door to something. I don't trust Jimmy's dad because of the history of something. I don't want you there.
You really got a thing with this Jimmy guy. He's come up quite a few times. So.
It's a very generic white boy name. I could switch to Paul or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, so like, you know, sometimes you could want to have that explanation and conversation with your kid, and they're not going to understand. Or maybe they're young enough that they shouldn't be aware of some of the evils of the world yet.
Right.
You know, and I think that's one thing I really like about, you know, that they call like gentle parenting. Like there's a difference. Some people think gentle parenting means like letting the kids walk all over you.
Yes.
And like, please stop crying. No, let's stop. And it's like, no, you just, I think the movement.
That is my view of gentle parenting. So you tell me what it really is.
I look at gentle parenting as treating your kids just like humans. That like, hey, if, you know, talk to them instead of like having that rule of law of like, because I said no.
Oh, it's more relationship, you mean? Like, okay.
And I think it's also teaching them about their emotions. I saw a really good one with a mom who, like, the kids having like the toddlers having a temper tantrum, and she teaches her son about emotional regulation. She's just like, okay, like, hey, let's take a deep breath in and out. Like, you're feeling really mad right now. Identifying and teaching it, because like we look at young men now who are angry and visceral. Maybe a lot of like, you look at like the again, alt-right or incels, a lot of the male podcasts you see, because a lot of boys are taught, you know, oh, you can't cry and oh, you can't do that and stuff. They're never taught that, a regulation or whatever. And so I think a lot of gentle parenting is teaching that, like, hey, you know what? No, we're not going to have a tantrum in Target. Right. I'm going to pick my things up, leave the cart here. We're going to the car. You don't get rewarded. We don't get to go out when you're doing that. But
so
they're
it's more consequence based.
But they're talking to them.
Yeah.
They're not just, you know, hitting their kid in Target and then leaving. And it's like, oh, you know, I fear my parents. You know?
And it's like that whole thing where they say, well, give them a spanking.
Sure, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Right, but then the kid says, well, why did you give me a spanking? And say, because I'm sure you did something wrong.
Sure, or because like, I said so. You respect me. I'm authority.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's teaching your kids to fear you. Yeah. I don't want my kids to fear me. Okay. I want them to be like, hey, you know what? I don't agree with it.
Do you want them to fear the consequences of their actions, though? Do you want them to be like, why? Because I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
It's the same in adult life, right? Like, I'm not going to speed if I just had to pay a $600 speeding ticket. Sure. That's going to prevent me. I'm going to be watching my speedometer for months after that. Because that hurt. That punishment hurt enough to me. Like, oh, man, I don't want that to happen again.
To learn a consequence. That if, you know, and even if the 3-year-old doesn't understand, you know, why they don't want to sit in the car seat, they don't like that. Like, you know, there's friends who go through the phase with their toddler, they won't buckle their seat. You see it on Reddit a lot. You know, the parents of Reddit. How do you keep your toddler from unbuckling? And there's all the suggestions like, you know, start to take them to their favorite place. Like, oh, we're going to go to the mini golf place or Chuck E. Cheese or wherever your kid, the beach. And then as soon as they unbuckle, it's like, oh, got to turn around. We're not going.
So and then take the reward away.
Hold to that. You know, oh, they buckle in group. Nope,
that's
we're not going.
The key right there.
Stick to your guns.
How many parents say that? So Beth and I always laugh when we're like Disneyland or somewhere. And you hear some parent going, you better stop that right now, little Jimmy. I'll use Jimmy too. Little Jimmy, or we're going to leave.
Yeah.
And me and Beth are like, you're not leaving.
No.
You just dropped hundreds of dollars to be here. There's no way you are going to leave this park at 9 o'clock in the morning.
We're not going to go on your favorite ride. Right. We're not going to get that lollipop.
Yes.
No treats today.
Well, my whole thing is throw out a punishment. Yes. But you need to stick to it.
Absolutely.
So don't throw something out there that you know you're not going to do, like we're leaving the park. You know you're not going to do that.
No, absolutely.
There's no way.
Because then your kids grow up thinking, I'm going to call my parents bluff. Why do I respect their authority?
Correct.
They're not honest with me. They're not a safe space to talk emotionally. Mm-hmm. I feel angry and I don't know why. You know what? My parents hit me, so I'm gonna hit my, I'm gonna hit others, or I'm gonna become a parent who does that. And it's like, no. Yeah. So I think like with any movement, whether it's political, religious, parenting, is people can take it too far to anything.
Yeah.
And so there's absolutely, I've seen videos on like TikTok, like gentle parenting. The kids screaming and throwing like, please stop. No, please stop doing that. I'm like, you're not doing anything. You're letting your kids walk all over you.
That's my issue. And I'm glad
you're a doormat to your own kids.
I think most people, when they hear gentle parenting, that's what they think.
They think, please don't do that.
Because I don't know if you've seen this person or not, but they come in the library all the time, and there's one of their children is just a psycho, disobedient as all get out, and that's always the response.
It's like the nanny 911 shows.
So and so, you need to stop that now. Come on over and let's stop. I'm like, this doesn't work, lady. No. There needs to be some kind of a consequence. I'm not saying you have to go over there and punch the kid in the face, but there has to be something that she doesn't like. Time
to be like, okay, we're putting our books back. We're going home. We don't get to go to the library if we can't keep our voice down to respect others' time here.
Yes.
Because again, and you look at so many other countries, like I really love like a lot of Oh gosh, this is going to sound such a weeb thing. I really like a lot of what Japan does for their school systems and stuff, and how their society, like you look at, like they don't have public trash cans, you know, and there's a lot of debate about like they don't have that because of some former incidents with, I think there was like an explosive device that got put inside of a trash can, and then they were like, oh, we can't take it away. But there's also a lot of people who say, well, it's because people just take their trash home with them. They respect others. They don't litter, and you know, people aren't perfect. I'm sure Shibuya at 3 a.m. after, you know, the drunk, you know, businessman misses the train.
A little too much sake.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, the idea that their country has such a build of respect for others and their children. You know, the kids in school, in kindergarten, they take turns, you know, working in the cafeteria to do lunch for each other. They learn that. They have days where they take turns cleaning. They're cleaning the classrooms. Now, there's still cultural janitors. There's stuff, but it's taught to respect others. Absolutely. And I feel like a lot of them, and that, I think, goes down to a lot of what America's built on, though, because America very much was a country of freedom, and that's a great thing. You know, I love the quote. I forget who said it. The quote that's like, "Freedom isn't, you know, bought with gold, but with steel." Absolutely, our country is founded on some wonderful things, and we have a great, I think, idea of a government system for that. Now, there's some things I said, like with everything, politics can go one way or another, and like, you know, the idea
not perfect.
No, like the idea of capitalist can be great this way. The idea of, you know, socialism can be great this way, but obviously people are imperfect and false, and there's going to be things that are not going to be good. You can look at examples and be like, that's terrible when they tried that.
Sure.
Hey guys, oh yes, tied into our country.
There we go.
So our country is so really built on like freedom that it's built into, I think, our DNA and our society. So the idea of like, we fought for our freedom in our country is like, don't tell us what to do, British, and we don't want a monarchy, and we built our own. So our society is very much, you know, what's good for me, what's good for my family. Don't tell me what to do. Schools are brainwashing. I want the right to do this.
Kind of selfish, you mean?
It's a little. Yeah. It's a little self-centered. Not that that's a bad thing, because as we've seen, our country was built because of self-centered. But I think when you look at a lot of how tied that is into America, that you can't just be like, oh, we need to think of everyone. Because then when you've seen governments try to like, hey, let's do some, you know, European or Nordic-based government systems, have a little bit of what some might claim as socialism. You know, you look at Denmark or Switzerland or anything, then people freaking panic. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, that's socialism. Oh my gosh, that's terrible. We don't want that. And, you know, but it's so like, well, no, we're just thinking of others. We just want to be kind to other people and help them, with the idea, the perfect world of like, no, let's help people and stuff. And let's think of others. I'm not going to litter because I'm not one person who only lives in this city. We live as a community. We live as I'm not going to do this because we live, you know, we live as a community, you know. And I think a lot of America doesn't have that. That's foreign. The idea of like, why would I think about them? I'm just going to worry about my home. I don't want to pay for a higher, you know, this bill that's going to be the bonds for the public school because my kids aren't in school. They all graduated. Why would I care? Well, you live in a society. Don't you want those kids going to school to grow up to become doctors to take care of your children? It's, you know, like you might not drive a car anymore because you're a senior citizen and don't have a license, but you should still pay taxes for the public road because you live here. And so that's a really big, hard thing, I think, for people to wrap their head around.
Yeah, it's difficult because you can't please everybody, right? So, I mean, I think ultimately, and this is why we have elections, this is why we vote for things and propositions
have debates and discussions,
stuff. Yeah,
and that's good.
Ultimately, I think the choices being made need to be made for the whole.
Yes.
Which, again, no matter where, let's say you reverse it and you say, well, let's take the 10%. And let's go their way. Well, now you're disappointing and taking off 90% of the population. If you go the 90%'s way, you still have people that are mad at you, but at least it's less people that are mad at you.
And you're never going to make everyone happy.
Exactly.
And I totally get that.
Because we're all so different in our belief, which is beautiful. I mean, that's the beauty of America. And that's what it's always been.
You know, even faith-based. And I've had these conversations with my family and everything. Like we've like, okay, well, God gave us free will. We have a right to choose.
Unless you're a Calvinist, he didn't.
No, that's true. I you know what? Fair enough. There is that debate amongst Christian sects about that. And so, you know, but personally, I think, you know, we have a free will, you know, that we have a right to choose, you know, if we want to believe in God or not. That God gave us that right. And so.
Well, because why would he want I always use this example.
Yeah.
I say, like, I want my wife to love me and be married to me because she wants to.
Yes.
Not because I put a gun to her head and said, you are going to love me and you're going to marry me and you're going to be happy. You know, that's not love. That's not real love.
No,
so I think it's the
absolutely.
same for God. He wants us to choose him, not be forced to believe in him. You know?
Yeah,
so.
and I agree with that. Absolutely.
Right.
And so that's why I admire, again, like when you look at other countries who have that basis of like, we live in a society and we live as a community. Right. Let's teach those fundamentals through our children and through everything. And so when they get older and they inherit the government and they have their own families, it continues on.
Well, and it's the fact that it's cultural is so relevant because like you brought up Japan, most people will tell you that have traveled and they've been lots of places and they've talked to many like I told you, we've had lots of Japanese kids with us. My wife is part Japanese, not that she ever lived there, but her grandmother was full Japanese.
Oh, cool.
People will tell you that the Japanese people are some of the most polite, loving, giving, wonderful people you will ever meet.
Sure.
And I'm like, it's not in their DNA.
No.
It's cultural.
It's taught.
They're brought up in a culture that they're surrounded by that. People putting others before themselves, which is a Christian principle, right? And it's sad to see that countries that are not predominantly Christian are doing that more than the country that claims to be the Christian nation. Yeah. You know, it's like that one simple teaching of Jesus, to put others above yourself. And it's ingrained in them almost to where even if they come over here, like because a lot of people from Japan eventually come live in America. Sure. And even then they stay here, but they don't acclimate to the selfishness of Americans. You know, they usually, I'm sure some of them have, but I mean, most of the time you meet Japanese people that are from Japan, literally from Japan, they're the same. They'll give you the shirt off their back, you know? And
it's funny because there's, you know, then so you talk about like, you know, the inherent selfishness of America and the inherent, you know, generosity of Japan. But then like you look and like Japan has their own issues with racism.
Yes.
You see those signs on the doors that are like, no foreigners welcome. Right. Or even amongst Asians, you know, and I'm a generic white woman. I'm not going to speak on the history of Asian cultures or anything.
Generic white woman.
As
opposed to a regular
You couldn't pick me out of a lineup.
A cookie cutter white chick.
So I'm going to be like, hey, I'm not going to say like I know all and stuff, but I find it, you know, fascinating, you know, like the history between Japan and Korea. There's a really lot of pain in that culture and history. And so you'll see a lot of, you know, racism that they deal with in their countries. Yeah. And so like they sometimes do things that you wouldn't dream of doing in America. We would never put on the sign like, you know, on the door that like, hey, this type of person isn't welcome. It would be like, yes, absolutely. But nowadays we have a big push to not do that. We're trying to have those laws.
Almost like it's bad or something to discriminate.
And so at the same time, Americans are so friendly. That's something a lot of foreigners get warned about. Like, hey, Americans like to shake your hand and hug and tell you about their day and like welcome you into your home. Like it's a Southern hospitality. Yes. Like you are now part of my family. Welcome to my home. What can we do for you? Yeah. There was a really good, you know, vlogger I used to follow on TikTok. I think he was from Japan. Mm-hmm. He started over in New York and he had one of the little like bicycle pull carts or something. And he walked from New York to Santa Monica and he vlogged it and he just recorded he followed the freeway and his route and everything, but all of the people he met all over the country and the amount of people who opened their home or like gave him food or like directions and just the inherent kindness that Americans do have. Mm-hmm. We really are like a lot of really good people. Because again, that idea of like our country's very me first, but we do that to like, hey, like, oh man, like welcome to my home. Let me share this with you. Yeah. Because then you could see that there's a lot of like maybe in other countries like Japan, a lot of like, oh, like properness and we want to, you're strangers and so there's aspects to the coins that you know it's. So I'm not trying to sit here and be like, oh, America's terrible and Japan's perfect.
That's what I heard you say. You said you hate Americans and you love Japanese people.
No, that's just me being a comic.
Only Japanese. From the cookie cutter white chick.
Oh man, I'm gonna hate listening back to this.
Oh man, no, it's great. It's doing good.
So there's again, it's just me saying like there's the ideas of everything has an ideal version, and then when humans take it, we can mess it up because we're imperfect. Everything's going to have issues.
Of course. Yeah. And anybody who's seeking perfection in people, I would say the flaw is within you. Yes. Because you shouldn't be looking for that in people.
And that's one thing I really try to give is I just try to give people grace. Yeah. I really try to be like, hey, even if we don't agree on this, like when I worked on base, there were Marines I met who were like full on communism. And at the time when I was just out of college and I was like early 20s and everything, that kind of bogged my mind. I'm like, you were in the military and you're fighting for like freedom and
against communism.
Yes, like, or that like a lot of the people say, I'm like, that fascinates me. Like, how could you? But ironically, a lot of people who work in the government really don't like government,
right?
Because they see it,
right?
And they have their own PTSD or their
which is funny because a lot of people that don't work in the government also don't like the government.
Yes, that's true.
The government's not getting a lot of Christmas cards, I think. So
it's not.
Yeah.
And so it's just wild. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's all I can say is that people are complicated. But I try and really just give that, like, hey, even if I don't agree with this, or I don't understand it, or we don't agree on this, I said that twice, is that, like, you are people and you still have that choice to choose.
Yes. Yep.
And so I feel like that's one thing that our politics is really lacking, is that they're really trying to make us fight each other. Like, I know people who are very alt-right, and I know people who are very, very left, and it's like heartbreaking to see it devolve into, the camps who are like conspiracy or like, a lot of hateful rhetoric or, I really, that's one reason I really like, oh man, I'm going to plug like The Daily Show. I really love, Jon Stewart. I do. I
used to like him a lot more than I do now.
I really like how it's just, I don't know, like everyone's up for grabs. Everyone is, I feel like, and maybe he wouldn't agree, but I feel like he's kind of middle because he at least, makes fun of both sides or kind of thing. But I loved how he really stood for the 9/11 responders, that he fought for those guys. And,
well, that was 30 years ago.
I know, but he still, like, he recently, I think within a year or two, pushed in Congress again to have their benefits extended. And he's always at back for those firefighters. He knows them all by name and everything. And I feel like, just, I don't know, man, we need young people in the government.
Right.
And that's one thing I'm upset about. I might, vote for more Democrats than the Republicans right now because of how I agree or don't agree with all of their stuff.
Yeah.
You choose, I hate that phrase, the lesser of two evils. I just kind of vote for my conscience and my faith stuff. So I vote a little more left-leaning because... and that's my belief system, and I have had arguments about that with a lot of Christians. Yeah. But
well, I have a theory, and I've said this lots of times. I didn't make this up. Sure. A lot of people believe this, but I see it to be true. You can tell me if you agree or not. You might not. But as I talk to so many people on the show, even or even just in person, like outside of the show, something I've come to a conclusion of is that people that tend to lean more right. Sure. As I listen to debates, I watch debates all day. Yeah, I love it. I love watching it and listening to it. But what I notice is, generally speaking, this is not true straight across the board, but generally speaking, people on the right tend to use logic and facts and reason to argue their point. Sure. To where people that lean more left tend to use feelings and emotion.
I could see that.
To where it's more like, well, why don't you think, just to use a stupid example that's recent, why are you voting for Kamala Harris and not Donald Trump? Sure. Well, because Trump's a big meanie jerk face who says things that hurt my feelings.
Sure, right? I could see that.
To where you ask a Republican, why aren't you voting for Kamala Harris? Sure. They'll say, well, because look what she's done in her time in office, look at this, and look what she hasn't done in her time in office, and look what Trump has done in his first. Like, there's more of a like a on paper response as opposed to like, well, I just don't like that guy.
I could see that.
He
no,
says
absolutely.
Mean things,
And then this kind of ties in like what I had mentioned before about not liking both sides. Is I think the irony is that when they keep trying to push us to like be against each other, like, oh, we're divided, no, we fight. I think they're two sides of the same coin. Yeah. They are doing the exact same thing to each other. I'm really upset with like what the Democrats are doing. We have how many people that are Democrats that have died in office now because they refuse to step down? Why is Pelosi still there? I'm very much like, please, we need art, I think you're part of my generation, the millennials.
Close. How old are you?
33.
We're 14 years apart. Okay. That's okay.
No, you're Gen X. That's right. Yeah. You're Gen X. Okay. And so, or even Gen X. But like millennials are like the main demographic right now, and we don't have people representing us in office. And I think a lot of that has to do with Republicans and Democrats fearing the change and fearing their loss of power, fearing being the senior citizens at, vulnerability, that we're making laws for them, we're choosing stuff for them. They don't want to lose that power. Right. So it's easier just to keep them in office. It's easier to hold on to that. It's easier to make the other look evil and awful. And there's awful things. I really do think that.
Yeah, when it comes
both
to
sides, that Republicans have done. That's why I kind of vote more left. But
sure. But when it comes to the presidency, I think that I think the next election cycle, we're going to see much younger candidates. I think this was the end of the geriatric, at least for a time. Because I think most people are just tired of it. The only reason you had that is because, Biden was put in there to go against Trump because they thought he could beat him, which he did. And then Trump was brought back because he's what he did the first time. People were sick of Biden. They're like, we want that back. But now that both of those guys will be ineligible to run again.
Yes, absolutely. I personally think that we see Trump sundowning right now. For as much as they complained about Biden's mental state and everything, I'm like, Trump's literally doing the same thing. You
don't think he's mentally cognizant?
I think he's he's older than Biden right now.
He's older, but I feel like he's definitely more mentally cognizant than Biden was.
I think when you look at his speeches, I think his speeches, he's having the same thing. The random topics, he can't follow the prompts on the teleprompters. I think not even just the talks of what he's saying and kind of maybe people being like, what on earth? That is absolutely wild. Where did that come from? He is here to talk to a delegate. Why is he talking about Obama golfing?
Right.
Kind of, I'm like, they're there, Grandpa.
Well, the guy's a stand-up comedian. He really is. I think he's going for the laughs.
I just think it's kind of hypocritical that it's like, if one can be like, oh my gosh, look at his age and his wife's hiding and he has to be held, the secrets in behind the scenes. Why are we not having the same conversations about Trump? How much is Melania doing? How much is and I'm just like, guys. And I think the DNC shot themselves when they wouldn't let Bernie run. I think, and they put Hillary in because they didn't want. That was going to lose power for them. That was a step away from their two-party system. And I think that's where a lot of the problems started.
I think they thought that Hillary had a better chance.
Yes.
I think everybody thought it. I thought Hillary was going to win. I never thought in a million years Trump would win.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous.
Absolutely. Especially all the quotes we have from years past of him making fun of Republicans.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm like, surely people are going to not be that stupid to be like, this is a bid for something.
Well, that's difficult, though, with that kind of stuff, because I feel like you could go back 20 years ago from what I've said, and I believe a totally different thing at this point. People can change,
absolutely.
Yeah. Talking about what's Melania doing behind the scenes, as Trump is incognizant. That might be the right word. But I think if we ever see Melania Trump telling Donald Trump after a debate or after any questioning or anything, telling him, "Good job, honey.
Yeah.
You answered every question. Yay!" If she's doing that, then I'll be like, okay, all right, it's over. Trump is gone.
I'm not debating that Biden had some mental problems. Absolutely.
Which is sad.
Sure.
The point is, he should have never been out there to begin with.
Sure.
I mean, he's an old man, not just old.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't be old and be in there. But he was obviously deteriorating mentally, and everybody knew it. Yeah. Yet they still kept parading him out there and lying and saying, "Oh no, he's great. Yeah, he's doing just great."
Because they didn't want to give up the game.
Right.
But I think on that same subject, that there can be different symptoms, there can be different looks, everything. That I think Trump, in his own way, is experiencing sundowning. I think he's kind of like, "There, Grandpa. Let's get you to the rocking chair, kind of." Yeah. And I think it's the same aspect. The Republicans don't want to admit, they don't want to lose focus, they don't want to and there's a lot of really scary stuff that I think is going on right now that I know people talk about with the Project 2025, and people are like, oh, the author had nothing to do with it, but then we see Trump playing golf with the author, but then there's a lot. But
I don't think Trump denies knowing the author. I think he's saying that he didn't even read most of it. But during the election, people were trying to say, nope, Trump's endorsed this. This is exactly, he says he's going to do all this if he gets elected.
But isn't that a worry? That's like, if you're not reading it and you're vouching, look at the thing that Marjorie Greene just did, that the bill they were pushing about the budgeting or something, and then that had the AI cannot be changed for 10 years, and then she just went all over Twitter like, hey, actually I never read the bill, I didn't even see that it was there. And people are like, why are you in office if you're not reading these bills? You admitting you're not reading it should be like, okay, if I was at my job and I'm not reading, or I'm not, if I'm not helping patrons, if I'm not doing the point of my job, then I get disciplinary action with my boss and a read up in your review, and okay, so why are we not if you're not doing this, let's suspend you from this, or you're no longer eligible for Congress. Let's have a new person go in.
If the Republicans wanted to do themselves a favor, they would excommunicate her from from their ranks because she is a nutball. And by the same token, I think there's a lot of people on the Democratic side. Get rid of AOC and Ilhan Omar and these people that are saying crazy things and start stepping away from that stuff and make the Democratic Party something America can respect again. And same with the Republican side. You need to distance yourself from the people that are way far left or way far right and they're acting like loonies.
Or at the minimum, stop at the two-party system. I think, like you said, it's going to come to a point where we want more younger people. I think people are done with the Republican Democrat. I foresee that because AOC and Bernie have been doing their own tours, a lot of the younger generation really likes that democratic socialist idea. They like the Nordic system. They want, you know, not that it's like, oh, big brother government, but they like that, like you said, emotionally helping people, systems. You know, the library is one aspect. You know, I made the joke to a friend, you know, like a while ago, I said, could you imagine if they tried to install libraries as a new concept nowadays? Hey, we're going to have a building that has free information for everybody, and it's free. And people can go in the... Absolutely, people would be like, oh, you communist, and why should people have the right to read, and why should people get a book? I paid for my books. No,
well, plus they say we already have that. It's called an iPhone.
Sure, but I mean, the idea that, like, you're right, a lot of people don't want to just... help people. They don't want to, and that's where I think a lot of like Democrats come from, that like, no, that sure, if it's like my idea of like a Christian system and principle that like, no, we should help the widows. We should help those that don't have food. We should, I think, provide information to people.
But should there be any accountability though? Because we have that in a welfare system. We do. And people mooch it.
Yes, they do.
And that's the problem. Or even workers come, oh, I've had a hurt knee for 12 years and I haven't worked. You're not hurt anymore. Now the
idea of like, okay, so is that just someone using a story as a scare tactic, or let's look at statistics. Let's look at how much is that actually happening. The big topic about like, you know, the Republicans were trying to push like, oh, the amount of dead people on Social Security or who are over this age, and then people to be like, well, hold on, let's actually check the stats. Let's fact check it. You know, come out and actually no, Social Security Department says that amount of people is not actually the case. Like, you know, there's a lot of misinformation to further an agenda. So I think the DNC would never allow AOC or Bernie to actually win an election. We saw it with Hillary. I don't know if they try to run as independent, because the newer generation's like, I'm sick of it. Screw it. I'm going to run my own. We're going to have a bigger push of independence.
Which might be because what's-her-face just distanced herself. Karen Jean-Pierre, the old press secretary for Biden.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, she just wrote a book and she said I'm done with the Democratic Party. I'm independent now.
So I think a lot of the Democrats, the exact same as the Republicans, it's the same thing. You know, big brother government who doesn't want to lose their hold on it. That's why they're not letting any of the youngers in, because they're scared of no longer being in power. I think it's going to come to a point where they're either going to, but I don't know how it would happen. I don't know how they would allow an independent to actually sit on a debate, because even like with RFK last time, you know, and I think RFK is insane, brainworms, but when he was running as an independent and he got votes and he got this, and then there was some stipulant like, oh, well, actually it wasn't within this district you got votes, so you're not allowed on stage. And I think they're going to do that. They're going to have to just be like, no, we don't want you.
Do you think they should be allowed to do that?
Yeah, allowed to say no, or
allowed to prevent, like with the whole thing with him. He was trying to get off the ballots. When he dropped out. And that's why he joined up with Trump. Right. And which was he has the right to do that. But then he was trying to get his name off the ballots in certain states. And certain states were saying, no, we're keeping him on the ballot. Which was an obvious move to try to get votes going for him that would have been totally pointless votes to take away from Trump, right?
Absolutely.
They should not be allowed to do that.
No, you're right. And I don't have the answer. I mean, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, we need to change, and offer no solution, because, I mean, I'm just one tiny little finish.
Hey, I brought you here to give me the answers, okay?
But, I mean, I really think that there's going to be... we've seen it already with a lot of a lot of people standing up with, you know, immigration right now, and a lot of things, who are defending communities and like, hey, you can't do this. And there's a lot of people who talk about, you know, what's the next, you know, big scare, civil war kind of thing. And now I don't know if that's just kind of the militia talking, kind of. That's the joke of, you know, like, well, hey, all of the Republicans who were really big on Second Amendment and fighting the government and fighting everything, like, well, they're here and wanting to tell you what you can and can't do. Why aren't you using your God-given right with a gun to stand up for your communities? And it's like, oh, so maybe you actually didn't really care about having guns. It's that you liked being in power and putting people down. So
well, they probably would if it came to it. Like, if they had another COVID-style lockdown where the government tried to say the whole country needs a lockdown, you got to close your business. I think you'd see a lot of that then.
Sure.
Because like, nope, we're not doing this again.
Sure.
You come take my company, you come shut down my business. Let's see what happens kind of thing, right?
But I think something's going to come to head with the next election. I think the next generation is sick of it, and they're not going to want to vote. And DNC and RNC are just like, oh.
I almost hope you're right, because I think it's time to do away with the two-party system. But I also, I'll believe it when I see it, kind of thing. Right?
That's it exactly. So, I don't know how how Big Brother would let it happen. Yeah. I don't. What's her name? Who always runs Green Party, like for decades. Like she's always on the ballot, and she like there's like whoa, oh hey, good to see you again.
You're back.
Kind of thing. Yeah. It's like it's a joke. Independents are like a joke because they never make a debate. They never make anything.
Right.
But I think it would be interesting if they let the independent on the stage. And at the same time, so much was undone. I think we talk about respect for others and everything. In 2016, when Trump was on board, it was, like when you look at like school debates, official debates in college and everything, you have rules. You can't interrupt. You have time limits. You have to follow the moderators who actively fact check you. Why don't we do that in ours? Why aren't we there like whether it's Trump or Biden or whoever, Democrat or Republican, say a thing? Why isn't the moderator saying, actually pause, this is not true?
They did when Trump debated Harris.
Did they? Because I know
but they did it biasly because... They did, because like they fact-checked all the kinds of things he said, and whenever I bring that up to somebody, I say, well, you realize that they fact-checked Trump like 20-something times. I'm probably getting the numbers wrong here. And they fact-checked Kamala like twice. And you know what people say when I say that? Well, that's because Kamala only said 2 things wrong, and Trump said 20 things wrong. I'm like, bull crap. You look into all that, you can see like some of the stuff he said was very true.
I would rather because I know like PolitiFact or Snopes do it on the side. They're an independently owned, non-government company, and their website will update as the debate goes. Like, why don't we have like our moderators, whoever's there, and then one official from PolitiFact or something that both sides pick, and then they can just every answer have a true or false or a percentage.
Well, in order to do that, you have to get rid of the big brother-ish person who's putting those people in there, because they're doing it on purpose.
Yep. And there's always going to be people who are too fearful, too hurt, too betrayed, and they're like, oh, that PolitiFact's a fake. They're not actually unbiased.
Have you ever seen the show Surrounded?
No, I've never even heard of it.
It's my favorite show right now.
What is it?
I think it started on YouTube, I believe, but it's basically like there's 20 seats in a circle, chairs, and then in the middle is a little desk. And there's a chair on each side.
The 2 people run to debate.
Well, it's any of the 20 can run to debate the one guy in the middle. So like there's all the different ones.
Yes, I've seen that on TikTok.
A Republican in the middle and surrounded by 20 liberals or something, right?
Absolutely.
Or a LGBTQ surrounded by 20 people who are anti, whatever it is, right? And they've had all these different things. And what I love about that show, I love everything about that show because I love watching that kind of stuff anyway. But I love how the group, I forgot the name of the company now, they have an independent fact-checking people that during this debate It's probably not during. It's probably, I don't think it's aired live. It's after the fact. Yeah. But when you're watching it on YouTube, whenever they say anything, a little bubble pops up that fact checks it. Oh. And they're accurate. Yes. They're not biased either way. They're like, oh no. Because sometimes you'll even hear like one side will be like, that's not true. That's not true. And the person over here goes, yes, it is. And it'll pop up. Yeah, the studies show blah, 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 blah. Right. And it'll list the sources. For sure. It's awesome. Yes. And that's exactly what we need because these discussions are happening. Yes. And people can't hide behind this garbage of, oh, I think that's true. And then everybody behind me believes me too. Yeah. I don't care. I want to know the truth, not how many people agree with you. And I think that's what the average American wants. They want the truth. Right. Whether or not they're Republican or left or not, because that's what I'm saying is we're not as divided as people think. Right. We want at like a basis, like our safety in our community and care for people and a freedom to choose what we want. Yeah. Like there's even like, I know like the bill that just passed in Texas about the 10 Commandments in classroom. Yeah. Sure. I believe in 10 Commandments. Sure. Do I think it belongs in school? Probably not, because I don't know how maybe Christian that teacher is. Right. If they're going to teach it correctly, or maybe how the not is. Maybe they'll teach it wrong. Right? I never thought about that before. A teacher teaching my kids that's a family thing. Right. I want to go to a church of my choice to have that choice and have that discussion. Yeah. And it's like I also don't want the child whose family's Jewish or the child whose family's Muslim or anything to like no, that's not their faith. So you think religion should be completely out of public schools? I think at least in the classroom, but you think kids should be able to practice their own religions. I think we can
I don't think it should be a taboo word to be feared. I remember there was a teacher who, when I was in school, and I don't remember this, and like when it exactly happened, but I remember there was a teacher who had just like a quiet time during class, like it was for, I think elementary or junior high kids, but it was like, hey guys, it's going to be our 30-minute quiet time. You guys can either meditate, you can read a book, you can pray, whatever you'd like. We're going to have some quiet time, some self-reflection. And she got in trouble for it because, oh, you're pushing religion, oh, you're having that, you're telling the kids what to do, and it's like, no, like, hey, religion is an aspect of our community, whether the kids have it or not. And I think it shouldn't be scary to talk about. I think they should be able to have like, hey, there's, all the kids in class have different faiths. Right. That should be okay to talk about. Yeah. That should be okay to like, hey, if you want to have a prayer time or, like we have the National Day of Prayer, the kids gather at the flagpole. Right. That's great. That's cool. They do it. And then kids can choose not to go do it. So
the freedom should be within the students, not the faculty pushing it like in a classroom. You don't think a teacher in a classroom should say, okay, everybody, now we're going to pray to Jesus.
Yes.
Because then that's enforcing or forcing, I should say, that religious belief on the whole class.
Absolutely. Yeah. America was founded, absolutely. There's God, in our country, and those that argue the founding fathers were faith. But we forget that, like, our country's founded on religious freedom. Sure. Like, the Pilgrims escaped it was a King Henry? Oh, my gosh. Yeah,
I don't remember the king, but they were...
But yes, they escaped the British government who was telling them what to believe. Right. And so they came to America and they're like, no, we want to choose. We believe the freedom of religion. Right. That's why our amendments are like, hey, government can't tell you what to believe. Right. And that should extend to like our own beliefs. Sure. And so I think it shouldn't be scary to talk about, though, that, hey, we're having quiet time. Yeah, there's going to be students who pray. That's cool. Go for it. Right. So no, and so the idea...
They shouldn't be prohibited from doing so.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a part of our society that, a lot of people have a lot of great comfort in. And so and so I think a lot of the right that I can see within my own friends or community or family or anything who feel like, maybe they feel they're persecuted or that there's a lot of fear rhetoric pushed or a lot of you can't talk about it because it's like, no, you're going to make, so-and-so uncomfortable. And even like within Christian sects, there's debates. The Protestants with Catholics. Sure. There's, Lutherans,
Calvinists,
Baptists,
and Arminians.
Calvinists. Like I had, a pastor down in San Diego. I really loved a church down there who really pushed like in a sermon once about like, hey, like guys, stop focusing on end time prophecies. Stop talking about it. Like I've seen families torn apart because they argue, is it pre-trib or post-trib? Is it, are we, is the end times, coming? Is it not coming? It's like, just focus on being a good person. Right. And, we don't know. The Bible says we will never know. No human will know the end of days. Right. Stop it with the like I remember being a kid terrified in school when you had all the people like, oh, this date, it's coming and we're going to die. And that terrifies kids and that terrifies people who are like, hey, whoa, what are you talking about?
Well, that's why they're doing it. Yeah. Because if they really believe the end is a week from now, they're trying to scare that into people and say, oh, you need to receive Jesus now, And that's not that's awful. And it's like, that's not how we should win over people or have that healthy discussion. Yeah. And so there's a lot of, I think, it's so easy, and I've had this discussion with friends, like, hey, like, I know it's easy when it comes to voting to be like, oh, you see it from groups. It's like, you're Christian, you gotta vote Christian. But how easy for it is someone to say, oh, I believe in God, vote for me. Right. The Bible cautions us about wolves in sheep clothings, the bleached white sepulchres, the people who prayed loudly on corners, look how holy I am, look how I do this, and then they don't practice the fruits of the Spirit. They don't practice what they preach. They don't, and then I think that's like, okay, but so you're a Christian and you want to help people, but you're not doing organizations that, go out and feature like, like the rescue mission that goes out to the emergency areas and helps people, or the, what was the group that, Jimmy Carter started, President Carter. That was like, he was a Christian. He started the home. It was oh my gosh, I forget what it was called. It was the group that went out and built homes for people. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. And so like that's absolutely putting your Christian beliefs to use. Homes for Humanity? Homes for Humanity, okay.
Thank you, yes. Yeah. Like that's what we need to see. Like if like, so when people are like, oh, all the groups that were like, Donald Trump is so Christian, and he's like, always then like, okay, well, do we ever see him like in church or like talking about it? The man held the Bible upside down. Like he could, like name scripture. Like he's not practicing what he preached. He's a man who was sued for the porn star. It's like I think anyone can turn their life around, their history, but he's not practicing the fruits of the Spirit. Right. I mean, at least Biden was in mass every Sunday. At least he was like, and he wasn't talking about it or trying. So like that's an argument. Like,
but you could say the same thing about him.
Absolutely.
Where the Catholic Church is very adamantly anti-abortion, and Biden was very pro-abortion.
That's true.
Stuff like that.
Sure.
And I think it's true on both sides. Like when Trump first ran in 2016, I was kind of like, people, oh, he's a Christian. I'm like, no, he's not.
Yeah.
I don't care what he says. No. But like now in 2024, I still don't think he is, but at least he seems a little more that direction than he was the first time.
Sure. And does he do that because he had like Billy Graham backing him and all this? And I'm like, at its founding, even like, in the Bible when it talks about, our duty as Christians, Jesus, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Absolutely. Follow government, be a good citizen, vote. That's important. Yeah. But it's never said like, well, Jesus would be Christian. I mean, Jesus would be Republican.
Jesus is a white middle class Republican.
I'm like, no, I'm like, you guys, I'm like, that's pushing your own agenda. Yeah. And I'm like, I really think religion should be separate from government.
And in the old days, in the Bible times, when people did stuff like that, they just dropped dead. Yeah. Why doesn't that happen anymore? Like when people say some of the most crazy, asinine things about God himself or whatever, and they just go on with their lives.
Yep.
I'm like, you look at like Ananias and Sapphira in the Bible, they just said, oh yeah, we gave you all the money that we had. Fall over dead. Then the wife shows up, oh, where's my husband? Oh, did you give us all the money? Yeah, we got she's gone. It's like, oh my gosh, like where's that? I think that would put some fear in people, like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't lie about stuff.
We're learning a pretty long game to listen, like, all right, God, what are we learning here? Yeah. Like, that's gonna come around at some point.
So back to the these are kind of related. So the dress code thing again.
Yeah.
And the argument is kind of the whole. It's usually doing gyms. It's usually heard about gyms, right?
Yes.
There's some guy in the gym, and there's some girl in there that's wearing basically a bikini while she's working out.
Sure.
And the complaint from the male side is like, can she not wear those kind of clothes to the gym?
Sure.
Look, we're trying not to look at her. We're trying not to be distracted, but we're men, right? And then the women's perspective is, that's not my problem.
Sure.
You need to be more of a gentleman.
Sure.
Or when dealing with children, you say, well, you need to teach your boys to respect women and not, to not look at them that way and not see them as objects and blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And my daughter should be allowed to wear a G-string in front of your boy whenever she wants to.
Sure.
So I mean, it's just... I'm not the person that says that we shouldn't be training our boys that way. We do. I try to train my boys that way and say, look, women are not objects.
We all have a self-responsibility.
But being a guy myself, I also know that it's part of our makeup. Sure. It's just true. We are visual creatures, more so than men. That's why you're going to find a lot more pornography geared towards men than pornography geared towards women. It doesn't mean women don't watch pornography
women
or whatever.
Women get the books.
Right.
Like I said,
They're like romance, trashy romance.
Classy ladies, we read our porn.
But even in that stuff, most of the time, the women are more drawn to the relationship aspect,
it's
not
a mental
the
aspect.
sex aspect.
Yeah.
Or even in a marriage. You talk to married couples and you talk about their sex life and you talk about like men are more drawn to the physicality of it. Women are more drawn to the emotions, which is why young girls, when let's say they're teenagers and the boy convinces her to have sex, oh, I love you, you're going to be together forever, blah, blah, blah. She falls for it hook, line, and sinker, and then when he hits the road, she's devastated. Because she's like, I thought we were going to get married. And he's like, what are you talking about? I just wanted a one-night stand. Like, she doesn't understand that. And she's like now emotionally connected to this guy. So, I mean, I think we're leaving out of that conversation the differences between the psyche of males and the psyche of females.
Sure, I can agree with that.
And I think there needs to be a good medium to where I'm not saying that women need to wear turtlenecks and sweats to the gym, but they shouldn't be wearing skimpy
ties
stuff,
into that self-responsibility and respect for others and respect as a community. Because absolutely, like, you can wear what you want, you have that thing, but I think there's also a lot of people don't think about that there is a dress code for men at gyms. Like you look at, I think it was Planet Fitness or something, that was very like, hey, this gym, we don't want intimidators. There's people of all sizes and experiences being here. So they have like, for men, no string tank tops because they don't want the big bodybuilders kind of intimidating guys. They don't want, like you have certain shoes that are allowed and not allowed. Men can, don't wear your like 3-inch inseam shorts kind of. They try to like encourage beginners to come to the gym. You don't want, the big macho bully that's going to be in there and intimidating people.
I'll never look like that.
I mean, it was like, I hate the phrase safe space, but they were trying to be encouraging and like, no, man, just t-shirt and shorts, just wear something normal. And so I can agree. I think a lot of, women who might go in there, like, even, like, as a woman myself, like, I don't want to see, like, everything out, man. Like, I'm just here to work out.
Yeah.
Like, but if that's, like, something for your social media, if you're an influencer, if you're trying to, maybe you're a model who's, like, selling a brand or something, have a home gym. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe, like, find a time early in the morning when there's less people or
Right.
something. It's being considerate for others. Hey, maybe someone's not going to be comfortable. It's like, this is such maybe a weird kind of thing, but you look at, like the kink community, I guess is the way to put it.
The what community?
The kink community, people who deal
kink.
with, like,
Gotcha,
sexuality
gotcha.
stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe someone's, like, I don't know, really into, like, collars or something.
Right.
And there was, like, a topic on Reddit that came up. Someone came into, like, a coffee shop, and they're, the collar with a leash and the pair, and, like, someone who was aware of, like, that kind of stuff had to be like, hey, like, you're involving me in that. I did not, like, consent to see this. I didn't consent to be involved. It's basic respect.
Right,
like, you're allowed to do what you want in your own, in your own bedroom, in your own business. Like, if you want to wear, like, that, like, I don't know, like, the nudist communities kind of thing. You're allowed to, but I also don't want to see you bike down the street naked, and it's like...
But see, that's what I wonder. Like, where's the line when I talk to some women who are pro, like, a woman should be able to wear whichever wants to the gym, and it's the guy's problem, not my problem. And if I say this, I say, well, do you think you should be allowed to go naked?
Yeah.
Almost every time they say, well, no, of course not.
Yeah.
Well, why? If your whole thing is you should be able to do whatever and it's the man's problem, then why shouldn't you be allowed to go naked?
Yeah.
Well, stop being ridiculous, Ryan. No, I'm not being ridiculous because 30 years ago, I could have said the same thing to a woman who was just wearing short shorts and a tank top.
Sure.
And now they're wearing, like, a bikini top, right? And I could say, well, do you think they should be able to wear... And 30 years ago, they said, no, you shouldn't be allowed to wear a bikini top.
It's those girls who are in high school with the no dress code. They're, like, wearing corsets. They're wearing, like, there was one girl who I straight up swear it was lingerie.
Yeah.
Like, it was mesh and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, you're a child, you're a minor. I don't need to see this. That's inappropriate.
Right.
Like, it's, like, there's a conversation that, like, as adults in school, it's, it is normal that teenagers, like a young teenage boy, might have a crush on a female teacher.
Yeah.
It's a trope. It's a story. It's everything. It happens because it's teenagers and they idolize.
I still
adults.
remember mine. There was a few of them. Yeah.
But it's the adult's responsibility to keep it professional, keep it appropriate, and to be like, absolutely not. Like, you're a child. Discourage everything because that's wrong.
Which, as we've seen, sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't. No, and I've had, I can't tell you, like, I've had, like, friends who are not in the teaching field, like, guys who would tell me, like, oh man, I remember my graduation in high school. I just turned 18 and I went and I hooked up with my 40-year-old professor at school. And I was like, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
That's your teacher. That's a role of trust and
Right.
And so, like, I get it that teenagers or people, or like you said, the one in the gym, you're allowed to wear what you want, but it comes again down to respect for others and respect for community and time and a place.
Right.
And so I think that, like, there's a limit. I don't think, like you said, women should be in tank tops. I think you can wear, like, a cute crop top and leggings and be fine and be like, dude, like, settle down.
Yeah.
Like, of course, women have curves and women are figuring, like, I can't hide this. I don't think, there's big discussion women who are maybe, like, more full-bodied or anything and at work and they get written up by HR for wearing a dress. And it's like, well, I'm not showing off. I'm just very busty and I have hips. That's not me trying to.
What are you supposed to do? Wear like a what do they call those? Those restrictors or whatever.
Yeah, and it's like, no, like, she can't help herself.
Yeah.
There's some women who are just like that. So it's a balance to it. Like, again, it's such a cop-out answer, but everything really is.
Do you think there would be a benefit to? I should say. Do you think people would appreciate if they did, like, men only gyms and women only gyms? Do you think a lot of people would appreciate that more?
I think so, and I know when that's been brought up, and I can't verify if the statistics are true. I know women have, I've, like, again, like, when I've read on, like, other, like, forums or Reddit or something, and how true is Reddit, but it's at least an open discussion of a lot of topics.
It's got to be true. It's been around forever.
Someone's like, oh, that's why women only gyms, and then of course they combat it with, like, well, when women only gyms start, and statistically they all fail because they don't get people, because the women want to go and show off, and they want to peacock a little bit.
There's a truth to some of that.
And I'm not gonna lie, there's times where it's like, hey, it's a good boost of confidence. I might feel good doing that, and it's like, well, then you need to check yourself and your own self-responsibility, and you can't say everyone is this. Nothing is black and white.
Yeah, I hate when people
world's a great
blanket
place.
Stuff like that.
Not every woman's trying to show off, and not every man's trying to be a predator, but you have to consider that, like, hey, there's going to be people who are comfortable, not comfortable. It's like in the Olympics, when in the last few years, when for the beach volleyball, America, their uniform, they have to wear a bikini. They have to wear bikini bottoms, and it's like, well, Germany offers.
That was a rule invented by men.
And it's, well, I mean, at the time, it was,
somebody
was the entire Olympic Committee male only, was, so maybe it was. And, but they're like, and I think Germany was the first one who said like, hey, women who are, like the Muslim women or whatever, or women who don't want to wear that, they can wear, leggings and the top. They can wear a burqa when they're, playing volleyball.
Yeah.
And it's not restricting their game and it's not changing. They're still a decent player.
Sure.
And so like that kind of topic, like, it's our society so, America is so built in that sex sells and everything that it's like, well, the woman who doesn't want to show off, well, she's a prude and she's, ugly and she's not, giving it out or whatever, it's an aspect to everything, and like, it's complicated.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think you're right. It's both. It's that, everyone has a responsibility to, I don't know, just be nice to each other, man. Just be nice.
That's a good rule to follow.
The world's not just about you.
Yeah. All right, the last thing was
kind
of the toxic masculinity thing. You didn't say that, but
I talked
kind of talking about
like with gentle parenting.
And just this idea of, and I agree with you for the most part about, for even me growing up, there was this whole stigma of this is what a real man is.
Sure.
He never cries. He's tough. He watches football. Eats raw meat.
Yeah.
It's like this. It's kind of like go get him kind of thing. And I don't think that's healthy. First of all, let me say that out the gate. I don't think that's healthy because then maybe someone who's more emotional, more sensitive, a boy who's more emotional, more sensitive,
has more sisters, kind
or
of
whatever it is, right? He may be treated. Oh, he's a sissy. He's a fairy. That's when I was a kid. That's what people say that kind of stuff.
All the gay jokes.
Yeah, which in reality he's probably not gay. He's just more emotional. I tend to be a more emotional, feeling kind of a male.
The idea that it's an insult to be feminine and it's a good thing to be masculine, like a girl when she's a tomboy. She works on cars. And look how cool she is. And she plays sports.
Or she must be a lesbian.
Sure.
Right? It's like, no.
Yeah, but a guy who maybe he likes to cook, despite the fact that the top chefs are men.
Yes.
And that's a career. The idea that like femininity is a negativity when it's a hobby or a personality is bad.
Yeah.
But when it's a career and you make money, then it's a good thing.
Right.
And it's a male dominated field.
Yeah.
Look at, Gucci. It's a male name. It's a male designer, Christian Dior.
Yeah.
But that's fashion. That's shoes and sewing and art
fashion
and everything.
For women,
but
generally,
a guy who might go to in high school because he's buying brands and wears colors or anything, well, that's a negative. Like, okay, well, maybe I want to start a brand and make money one day. Oh, and then actually you're forward thinking. Good for you.
Yeah. He's an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But like, so do you think though that there is an element of masculinity that is masculine and should be masculine?
Sure.
I mean, in other words, do you think God, I'd use God because you believe in God, that God created men and women different for a reason?
I do. And I'm going to have to try and gather my thoughts on this because, again, more word vomit. Yeah. But I think kind of like what you had said about dress code is that a lot of men are visual based, a lot of women are emotional based.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say like mental, like crazy, but like mentality.
No, when I said I didn't mean that as a bad thing.
No, not at all.
So
I'm saying that like, because I know people use like mental as like an insult. And I just mean that they're more They do a lot of critical thinking more than just, like visualization or anything. Yeah. And I think that's why, you see scripture sometimes that talks about like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to quote it, but I think it was in Matthew about like, if it's your eyes that are causing you to sin, cut out your eyes.
Cut them out.
And that's talking about men staring at women who are like, you need to dress, you need to be better, you need to change. Look what she's doing. Well, you're the one that's thinking the thoughts. Control yourself. So I do think that inherently men and women are different. I think inherently men and women need to be aware of that and they can be empathetic and kind of work through that. I think that, I think that there's like a God-given that like, Adam was kind of created first sort of thing. I don't think that means he rules the house. I think he could be called to leadership. But if you notice, Eve was created as like a partner for him by his side. Right. That, and she wasn't
literally by his side.
She wasn't made as a gift or as a reward or something. She was there because God saw that Adam had things he needed help with. I like the idea. I've heard someone talk about before that like men will build the house, and he can take a woman's thoughts to contain it and she will turn it into a home kind of thing. They work together. Yeah. Now that's not a topic saying, about, same-sex couples or anything. I'm straight myself, so I don't have the knowledge to talk about that. Yeah. I just noticed from what I've read and from what I think that they were kind of built to work together. And so,
almost as if God knew what he was doing.
Yeah, and I think that society has obviously ebb and flow, and maybe things work for different people. Like you said, if there's a more masculine woman and the husband's more submissive or feminine, then sure, that still works for them. I'm not saying it's like, every relationship has to be like this. And I think it's such a joke to, like, when you look at, like the alpha male and all that, and I'm like, which was written even on like the wrong, the wolf dynamic, which wasn't even a correct,
and I think
research paper that's been disproven. And
that's where the error comes in.
You start getting to like Andrew Tate BS and
although we won't go there.
It's okay. But so I think there's I think there's a lot of that really works, that a man naturally wants to provide. A man naturally wants to I think some guys aren't always for the chase. I don't think that's always like, I'm always cautious about like dating advice that's like, don't feed into this and ignore him, and you got to be a little mean to him. I'm like,
or
no,
women
man.
should never ask guys out.
Sure,
that kind of thing,
and I'm like, no, like everyone's different. Like you find a balance. You guys live, but and
all those little nuances I think are fine. But I think the vast thing is that I think in a sense we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater by saying this alpha male thing is wrong. Therefore, men need to be women. Men need to be more like women. No, they don't. They just need to relearn what it means to be a man. And it's not this...
in a correct way. It's not some iron fist dominating that you see in like the 50s. There was a lot of really awful ideas with the nuclear family. And the stress that the man had to be the ultimate provider, and him working himself to death at work. And then, the unregistered PTSD from not only World War II, his father faced and beat the kids and drank himself to death. So now he's going to Vietnam and he doesn't know what's wrong because he can't talk about it because men don't talk about it. And then no one's allowed to divorce, and so he beats his wife. Because
that's the next best thing.
So a lot of people are like, oh man, America's great. I'm like, hey, hold up. There was a lot of issues with not talking about what the heck is going on. And so...
Well, there's problems, but would you say America's the greatest? No. You think there's better places to live than America?
I'd say so. I mean, I think America's kind of lost the idea of what makes it great.
Like, where would you say is better?
I like a lot of... I like kind of a lot of the Nordic ideas. I know there was one that was a discussion about...
Like Vikings?
No, like Denmark and stuff.
You talk about chauvinism.
I know, like Denmark had how they do like traffic tickets. They do it based on your income. So like they don't do like here in America, like a traffic ticket in California is outrageous. It's like maybe $600 or whatever. Someone who is the CEO of Starbucks, that's going to be a drop in the bucket. Who cares? I'll speed again. It's $600. But someone who's living paycheck to paycheck and you're just gonna, that $600 is going to be devastating. It's going to be hurt.
Which means they're going to speed less.
Yeah. So if the point of a ticket is to teach you a lesson and a consequence to your action, then it shouldn't be a price. It should be, okay, well, you make that much money, it's going to hurt you just like it hurts the little guy. And I like that. And some people might be like, oh my gosh, but socialism and
I
how
see
dare
the
someone.
logic.
It's like, well, no, if the point of a ticket is to a consequence to an action, it should not be about a monetary value. It should be the lesson you're learning. And I like that. And that can be maybe a little socialist.
Which is why more of, and I agree with you, because I think that's why a lot of Hollywood or some of the big ups will just, they don't care about getting arrested because, you got $1 million bail. Okay, I'll be out tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big whoop-de-whoop. But if I'm in there, I got $1 million bail. No one's going to bail me out.
No, absolutely.
I don't know anybody's got $1 million. All my friends could put all their money together in a pool. They still wouldn't have enough to bail me out. So
and so there's a lot of to talk about the men and women, though. I think there's a lot of that. It's a good thing that we are teaching boys about, hey, while it's good to kind of be a leader, and I personally think that I would want someone to like lead the household and that kind of stuff. We're partners. He's not in charge of me because I have my own aspects that he can't do, that I keep him from panicking and floating away. I'm like, no, like we're good. Like here's let's think about this. How does that make you feel? But like you look at a lot of people who think it's a checklist. We fell in love in high school and let's get married and have kids, and
because it's the next step.
We hate each other and we're miserable, and it's like, why? No, you don't have to do that. Like you guys don't have to get married and stuff. Like, you can choose to break up. You don't have to be together. Like, it's awful.
Do you think that's damaging for the kids, though? If you have kids?
I think it's more damaging to have the kids hear mom and dad scream and throw things and fight every night. Yeah. And they grew up really scarred from that emotional abuse.
So if you had a friend, or maybe let's say a guy and a girlfriend that were married, and they had 4 kids, and they came to you and they said, we hate each other, we're arguing all the time, we can't stand it, what would your first advice be? Would you tell them to get divorced?
I think it would be like, hey, you need to sit down and talk to your kids about why you're upset and why you're screaming. And be like, hey, like the emphasis of like we might, mommy and daddy might be going through, depending on the age, obviously.
Sure.
Like there's some things we're talking about, but we love you guys, and like you are the main focus, and we want to do what's best for you.
Would you tell them to get counseling?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And I think the counseling should be through like actual registered counselors. I don't think like church counseling. I think that can be tough. There's a lot of churches that have, I think, good intentions with like, hey, we have some counseling here, some people who maybe have degrees in this, whatever. But I think that can kind of really like, well, the Bible says this, and it's like, like I think like if you want a faith-based counseling, because it's like, hey, you know what, I don't want the counselor to be like, well, why does your prayer life matter to you? Like, I'm not looking to explain that. Like, that's a lot. Like, hey, my faith is important to me. You should understand that. And then by all means, like, find a counselor, a marriage and therapist counselor who maybe is Christian, and then they understand, like, oh, okay, we're not even gonna have to talk about that, but like, maybe we can talk about that, but we focus on like the actual studies. Like like you mentioned earlier about, diagnosing about anxiety and everything. Like I've been through therapy myself. Okay. I, was diagnosed with, OCD after a lot of, like anxiety attacks and everything. And I didn't really kind of know. I've always had anxiety all my life. Yeah. And so I've been through CBT therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what helped me. And that saved me. Yeah. And, so I, had a lot of, some stuff was kind of like religious trauma, or some stuff was, things I went through because of some hardships later in my life. And so having a therapist who, you're not like, okay, well, the religious impacted me because of this. Well, why is that a big deal? Like, her,
man up.
No, but I mean, maybe that's like an important, maybe a therapist never would, but it was important for me to have like a therapist who was trained in OCD, first and foremost, an OCD therapist, but someone who was like Christian, so she could be like, hey, Kate, like, I hear you. Like, when you explain something, she's not like, I'm not having to unload another level of explaining or why I think that's important. And that worked for me,
Yeah.
And so...
Well, they say CBT is the only proven cure for anxiety. Other stuff is like kind of a therapeutic kind of thing. Like it might help you get through it. Sure. But CBT has been proven to actually get rid of it.
Sure, because you're learning how to manage it yourself and look at it and
work with it, and deal with it, and you knock the legs out, because anxiety is driven mostly by fear.
Yes.
So if you can take the fear away, which you can't just do with a snap of the fingers. People say, "Well, stop being afraid of that, Ryan." Yeah. Oh, is that all I got to do? Why did I never think of that? Yeah. It's like, come on.
Yeah. So. And so I think there's. At the end of the day, people have to have a relationship that works for them. Right. And I don't think it's up to anyone to say what works for others. But I really do think that, men and women are kind of inherently different. And there's going to be... And I think it's good to look at what makes us different, to celebrate our similarities and differences.
Yes.
I have... I just, it's... I don't know, it's everyone's journey.
Yeah, it's true.
Sure.
Yeah. Cool. So the first thing I want to talk about is just, I usually like to go back to like your first memory of enjoying music. The first time you remember thinking, this is awesome. I want more of this. Yeah. This gives me a feeling, or this does something for me.
And I always remember, I really grew up on classic rock, which I think a lot of people in my millennial...
Well, if your parents raised you right, you did.
Yeah. My mom was a big concert hopper back in her time, so she saw like Led Zeppelin, she saw Pink Floyd's last tour.
Shut up.
She's seen a lot of really cool bands. Okay. Woodstock was East Coast. Yeah. So that same era or time, they had the West Coast version was called California Jam. Okay. She went to that at like 16 years old.
What city was that in? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh.
Sounds like a Bay Area
maybe like Orange County or something, because she's from Orange County, so maybe around there. Okay. But because she was 16 when she went, so she probably couldn't have traveled too far. Yeah. But it was West Coast's version of Woodstock. It was called California Jam, and so Who
played it? Do you know? I'm gonna have to look that up.
Oh my gosh.
Was it around the same, like 69 was the...
Yeah, it was that year.
Okay.
That was just the West Coast version. And so she regrets like not keeping her tickets from the day.
Oh, yeah,
but
the
she used to, her and her friends
awesome.
And, you know, high school boyfriend used to go and stuff. And so like for her birthday, I got her tickets to see the Who at the bowl. So we went to that and all that. So
You saw the Who?
Yeah, I saw the Who with my mom and dad.
The original, the same members?
Yeah, same ones. That was fun. That was really fun. And so, and my dad always really liked classic rock as well. He had friends who were really into like stereos and everything. They had like, you know, they'd buy like the new LPs when it would come out and then they'd put it on and then to the reel they'd record it and then sleeve the LP and never touch it again.
Right.
So he still has a lot of really old like stereo equipment from when he was younger, and he did some, you know, he served in the Air Force during the time, so he had been in like Germany, so we had like some cool like German stereo equipment and everything. And
that's awesome.
yeah, so I really grew up kind of like on a love of that. Like my parents, like their songs, like Harvest Moon from Neil Young.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of.
Good one.
And so every camping trip in summer, we always just listened to it. And so that was just kind of what I really associated.
You want to hear a funny Neil Young story?
Yeah.
So I went to, I think I was about 15 or 16, and my parents got me tickets to see Pearl Jam play in Golden Gate Park.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's where I first heard Bad Religion, because they opened up for him, and that's when I started loving 90s punk rock, which is my all-time favorite genre. But at the show, it was an infamous show now.
Yeah.
Because Pearl Jam only played like 6 songs.
Sure.
And Eddie Vedder was like, I got food poisoning. I've been throwing up all morning, all day. He's like, so we're out of here.
Sure.
And we're like, boo! Like, what? We paid to see Pearl Jam. You know, we're so disappointed. But he goes, I think Neil Young's around here somewhere. So he's going to come play.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, at the time, I didn't know who that was. The only reason I knew him is because he came out on stage with Pearl Jam one time and they did Rockin' in the Free World together.
Was CSNY together at the time?
No.
They were broken. So they already hated each other.
This was like 94.
Okay, in the 90s. Okay.
Yeah, this was a long time ago.
A long time ago.
Well, for me, that was a long time.
Sure.
I mean, I was 15. I'm 47 now, but so we left.
Yeah. Oh.
We left. We were so ticked off, and we were like, I paid to see. I mean, I was still ecstatic anyway because Bad Religion set was awesome, just nailed it, and I was so excited about Bad Religion. But we left there disappointed and so upset, and then years later, I started getting into Neil Young.
Sure.
And I was like,
realized.
My gosh, I had the chance to see Neil Young play.
Now,
I didn't do it.
Did you understand the Pearl Jam lyrics? Or true fans, they just know how to sing to the motto.
I did know them all. Yeah, I did. I was a huge Pearl Jam's the band that got me out of listening to nothing but hip hop.
Yeah. I agree. I kind of like had taken that love of classic rock and like into high school really kind of fell into like hard rock or that early 2000s, you know, new rock and stuff. Okay. You know, I liked a lot of, you know, System of a Down, Pantera, Linkin Park, Puddle of Mud.
Nice.
I love Korn and Limp Bizkit.
Yeah.
Alice in Chains.
Thank you.
So a lot of those really good.
Good stuff, man.
And then like you could type in kind of like, I also a little bit to the side of that, I also really liked ska. So I was like a Goldfinger fan. Like loved Superman. Honestly, anything you'd find in the Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Yeah,
series,
right. Which is punk and ska. Yeah, so that's a lot of the stuff I like. Yeah.
And then ironically, like Daft Punk. I really loved what Daft Punk was doing. I remember like I was too young in like 2007 when they went to Coachella to actually go, as I think I was like 15 or something. And so I remember like when they came out with their new set for Alive, because Daft Punk doing Coachella like changed the game of live performances for like Coachella and tech and all that and stuff. Like they had like the way their stage was built. I think Coachella is so kind of different now since that, but Alive 2007, I remember when it finally like came out on YouTube and like were grainy download in 5 parts kind of thing. Could watch it, and that like blew my mind in my little like compact laptop, you know, with the little wireless card you had to shove into like, you know, to get a signal kind of thing. But no, and I used to really like a lot of that music. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
That shaped Baby Katie. You know, that was I was a little scrapper in high school.
So I'm going to touch on a few just because you touched on a few of my favorites. Limp Bizkit was just mind-blowing for me. I know they're not the ones that originated it, but for me that was
Fred Durst.
That was right. Yeah.
My love and my love of my life.
who made lots of friends.
Yes.
Apparently, that guy was always at war with somebody. But that band to me was the introduction to kind of the rap rock kind of style, which I guess they call new metal.
And you saw with same thing with like Linkin Park and stuff. When they did that MTV groundbreaking collaboration they did with Jay-Z for Encore.
Oh yeah,
Numb and Encore. They really tried to push to have like rap artists mixed with rock.
Sure,
that was a really cool.
Yeah,
idea.
it opened up a whole new genre for me, and I thought it was really neat to hear that. Actually, let me go back to something because there was a soundtrack to a movie, Judgment Night. Are you familiar?
I'm not.
That was the introduction for me to rap rock, but that was different than what Limp Bizkit was doing. But this was like every song on the soundtrack featured like a metal band mixed with a rapper. Sure. Like it was a collaboration between the two of them. So it was like Slayer and Ice-T, or it was like Pearl Jam and Cypress Hill. Sure. Like stuff like that. And it was just such a fusion that I thought was the coolest thing ever. This is awesome, you know? So then when a band like Limp Bizkit came along, I was like, dude, this is epic. And I know it's not a popular opinion, but my favorite Limp Bizkit album was Chocolate Starfish, because like people and everybody says, "Oh, that's when they went soft. That's when they got too slow." Because you listen to the $3 bill one. I mean, it's a lot of screaming. It's a lot of very heavy stuff. And Significant Other was they kind of meld out a little bit, but Chocolate Starfish, they're doing like The One, you know, that songs like that. But when they were, man, some of those bass lines and just funky grooves they had going with the rap and then the singing, so good.
Well, even their music videos, like when they would have like, oh my gosh, I forget which one it was. Was it breaks? Maybe not break stuff, but they had like the little cameos when they were like doing like the they had like
it is break stuff.
Yes, it is. They had Eminem, and then they also had like Snoop Dogg. And I was like, what? And so like they did a lot of really cool collaborations with it. Or like all the inside joke feuds between them and Korn, like when they had like the battle songs and everything. But like it's so funny. Like I think a lot of people like my age who got like introduced to a lot of like when Limp Bizkit or Korn or Pantera was like big. Like I discovered them a lot because of now I don't know if you were ever familiar with it, but it was like a cartoon channel, air quote, but it was Toonami. It had premiered like on Cartoon Network in like the early 90s.
This is a show?
It was like a block, like a channel block. But they brought a lot of anime to America. So like anime was still really hard to like find and stuff back in the 90s. It was a lot of like underground groups, or like they had to make their own VHS tapes, the sub it themselves, kind of hand it around, or the small companies, like there was Pioneer ADV who would like make the, you know, they would, like I said, license some stuff, and they'd give like a shoddy dub, or like they tried their best for what they could with like the legality and the licenses of like TV and everything. Yeah. But so Toonami was it was supposed to be like Toon Tsunami, so that's what it was, like Toonami. And it started like, that's kind of like, you've heard of like Adult Swim, that's like on, so it's like it was like a small subsidy kind of like Adult Swim. Is started with like Space Ghost Coast to Coast and Moltar and all that, and so they would just play Japanese animation action shows, and so a lot of the guys who did that, though, when they would have the bumps and like the commercials for it, they'd sneak in like, okay, well, we're gonna play Gundam, which is like a big mobile like fighting robot game, which is cool, but we're gonna throw like Pantera on top of it. Oh, really? And so they would introduce those rock shows and songs and everything. And so kids who were like our demographic, who were like 10 and 12, like oh, this cartoon's cool, like I'm gonna go watch more, like, oh man, that band's awesome, like what is that? And then we'd like find more of it and stuff. So it kind of like came really hand in hand with a lot of it, which is why I like, you know, like I mentioned, you know, I think maybe once in the beginning about like Deep Space Bass, the guy who like does Toonami, DJ Clark Nova. He would do a lot of his own kind of remix music with like that heavy kind of hip hop, you know, like maybe a little bit of house vibe or something. It's kind of a lot of like you found in the early 2000s, like some music, like early electronic stuff, and it was cool, you know, like a lot of garage brand feel. So again, still really nerdy. But
that's good though.
So
you're secure in your nerdiness, right?
At least I try and be like, you know what? I promise I'm not a poser. I try, and that's the joy of a librarian. I can go and look it up if I need to know.
There you go, bingo.
Freedom of information.
What about Alice in Chains? Tell me some of your.
I really like Rooster, Alice in Chains. You know, Man in the Box. And that one I found first. I joked about Tony Hawk Pro Skater, but I had for the PS2. So that was my first video game console that was mine. So I have 2 older brothers, and so we always shared consoles. So we were a Sega Genesis household.
Oh, interesting.
Genesis does what Nintendo don't. I still firmly stand by that. So we were.
So you had like Altered Beast and like
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sonic,
we had I'll still fight that NBA Jam '98 soundtrack is better on the Sega over Super Nintendo. But, Mortal Kombat had the blood cheat code on Sega Genesis over Nintendo.
Mortal Kombat was better on Genesis, I'll give you that.
So, and that was my brother's console, so I would play it with them and stuff. But my console I got in 6th grade was PS2. And it came with the video game ATV, Off-Road Fury. And it was just like a racing or a driving game. But they had a lot of that music. And I remember they had Alice in Chains.
Okay.
And they had Them Bones.
Oh.
And I remember I would just scroll through options and select that song. And I loved that.
I think that's the first Alice in Chains song I ever heard.
Yeah.
Because I was watching MTV and the video came on. I was like, what is this? Like I said, Pearl Jam was what got me into grunge. But then all the other ones came later, Nirvana and
Nirvana. I can't believe it.
Soundgarden and some of that stuff.
Absolutely.
Just like came in later. But the Dirt album is just amazing.
No, for sure. It's like I don't know, like there's a love letter about like grunge and 90s garage bands and everything.
Oh my gosh, so good.
Yeah, and it's always funny because everyone's gonna be like, the music today doesn't compare. But I don't know, man. Just the rock nowadays is interesting. I think kind of compared.
It's a good word.
And I think some bands still really try. Like there's shoot, like, do I know anymore? Maybe I'm a hypocrite. Like, I don't even know if I could like name like what's a modern kind of like rock group right now. We still, because I know now the new rock they consider it is now no longer new. It's 2000s. It's hard rock. It's butt rock.
Right. Right.
And so it's like divorced dad rock.
Right.
You think like
someone else used that term on here. I was like, what are you talking about?
And it's so like. And they have their, Sirius XM has, it's a hard rock, 2000. It's like, but like, what's stuff today? Like what? But I don't even know if like, what would be the radio station you'd go to that's like local to listen to?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't venture out there very often because only if somebody recommends something to me and says, oh, Ryan, you're really like this band. Other than that, I kind of stick in the 90s.
Yeah, and I mean, even then, like, if someone was like, oh, what's a modern rock? I can maybe be like, Disturbed, Daughtery? Like, but even then, that's now okay.
But they've been around for a long time.
They have.
But they're
that's
just
not
still going.
Really a new.
Right.
And I know there's still bands that play, like Green Day still had. I remember when they had their show recently, and
Jose went.
Huh?
Jose went to that tour.
Did he?
Yeah, he went and saw him play. They played all through, I think it was all of Dookie and all of American Idiot.
I saw Nickelback at Mid-State Fair. That was great.
The band everybody loves to hate for some reason.
Oh, no. They and I love that they ride with it.
Yeah.
I love that, they make their own.
They make fun of themselves,
Look at this graph.
I saw that.
At the concert. Like,
oh, did they really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Like, they absolutely lean into it. They love it.
That's
good for you guys.
Yeah. Well, and it's sad because they are a great band.
Yeah.
They've written some great songs. Yet for some reason, somebody decided one day, who sucks and needs to be made fun of? Nickelback.
Do you know what they did for the Spider-Man soundtrack with Heroes?
Exactly.
That was amazing.
Right.
But yeah, I don't. Man, now I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna look up like what.
Yeah.
Like, because I know like there's some like. I think punk is making a resurgence.
Okay.
Punk usually does when it comes to like the political climate.
Right.
When they're, I remember the big resurgence when I was in high school with like George Bush. That was when punk was really big. Like I said, look at Green Day. Look at all that kind of was very like anti.
Well, that Fat Records, that punk label, put out the comp Rock Against Bush. Yeah, and that had a bunch
absolutely.
of punk bands on there.
But I mean, as something that's not very like that's like a middle ground. Between kind of classic rock, it's the season of yacht rock. It's the season where we can, day drink on a yacht right now, listen to 80s music.
Yes.
Very much like, Doobie Brothers, Christopher Cross.
Nice.
Like Steely Dan, Toto. You gotta listen to Kenny G. And I have friends who hate it. I'm like, oh, it's May. It's time for me to, bust out my...
Do people ever listen to Kenny? I mean, other than like the two big songs he's got, do people just put on a Kenny G CD and rock it, or what?
I look for... Every time I go to like what's the store here? Like the New Records or something that's over in like Orchid.
The trade place?
I don't know. It's like I call them like thrift stores, but it's like
Paradise Trading. Yeah,
and they have like cassettes there. I always go and I look for. I'm like no, because like I'm. And kind of I joke that I'm like an audiophile. Like I love old technology so much. Yeah. And it's fun. And so I Kenny G, man, or even like Baker Street. Oh, I want a good sax solo.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
that's...
Well, don't get me wrong. I enjoy that too.
Yeah.
But like, I can't imagine myself, and I've never done it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll do it someday and be like, this is great.
Yeah.
But I've never like thought, you know what? I'm just going to pop on a full Kenny G album and just rock it. You know, I feel like that's it's good mood music, right?
Yeah.
Like you put it on the background. It's just kind of, it's kind of like, you know, chilling.
It's my driving music.
Okay.
When I used to do a lot of like long drives or whatever.
See, I can't listen to that kind of music. That's like going to sleep music, or like I can't listen. I love like classical music. I love like chill music, but I can't listen to when I'm driving. When I'm driving, it has to be fast, speed punk, or like Metallica or something like that.
That's where a lot of like I don't want to say like techno, because that's such a wide variety of like electronic music.
Yeah.
But no, definitely I call it like my ticket music, you know, because you put your foot to the floor and then you get a speeding ticket.
Right.
You know, like let me have my Eurobeat and everything. Yeah. You know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Like dancey stuff.
Yeah, some of that, or you just like all the BPMs really up, and you're just like faster.
Yeah. What about like the punk and ska stuff besides Goldfinger? Do you have any other examples of that?
Yeah, America's Funniest Home Video opening, Tom. It was ska the whole time. It was ska the whole time.
Nice.
No, I stole that from a TikTok. I can't be creative. No, but that blew my mind when like he was like, yeah, so like the opening to like America's Funniest Home Video is ska, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's ska.
I'd have to look that up. See what that sounds like.
Yeah, so like I do like some ska. I mean, I can't name a lot of bands as them.
Yeah.
But I just feel the Superman song so much because we're all getting older all the time.
Yeah. Well, some of the big ska bands that went in ska's heyday, I would say, was like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones.
Yes, thank you.
Save Ferris.
Yes, Save Ferris. Yes, I remember them.
Real Big Fish.
Yes.
You know, bands like that.
I had friends who were into that.
Less Than Jake, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of that stuff I found when it was like... Because I couldn't do concerts when I was younger. Again, I mentioned my mom was a concert hopper, so she went on at concerts. So she's like,
you couldn't do
like,
them. You mean
absolutely, like absolutely
she
not.
You're
not
let
going.
You go.
Yeah,
oh,
she's like, yeah, nice try. I know what happens at concerts. She, like I said, went to West Coast and Woodstock.
Yeah.
She saw it all.
She's like, you'll come home a pregnant drug addict.
Yeah. So like the most I could do was like I would go to like probably the garage band stuff, which was maybe like. Not as like she felt like it's harmless, you know, what's gonna happen, but you know, and I was still a good kid. You know, I just had my parents had a lot of trust with me. You know, they raised me as I'm like, I'm just not into that, so I'm good.
Well, plus you're their only daughter, right?
Yes.
So there's that aspect.
Yeah. So I was and I was the baby of the family, so I had a lot of supervision.
Yeah.
But I remember I have like memories in high school of going to like the local laser tag at the mall to watch bands.
Here?
Yeah, in Santa Maria Mall. And like friends in high school, we'd go and watch.
Do you remember my friend Kathy's son? He was in a band.
Yes.
And they used to play there.
Chris.
They won Battle of the Bands over there.
Yeah, I think I went to one of his concerts or so.
A Silent Explosion was
I remember they were like the cool kids. They'd like hang out like the hill kids or like anything in school. Yeah. I guarantee you'd be like, hey, Kaitlyn, they're like, who? They were all cool. Yeah. They don't know that any F all of me.
But you were there for some of the shows.
Yeah,
so
I'd
cool.
I'd see the stuff, or like I know I had friends who were kind of in their circle and stuff. But and that was fun, and I guess in its own way, kind of like when people would go see the Neil Young stage shows. Like there was that big news article that came out I think a year or so ago. There's a guy I follow on TikTok, and he owns like an old records shop. People take in and turn in and sell their stuff to him, the LPs, the cassettes, everything they don't want. And someone had brought in a box of cassettes for donation, and some ladies I just don't want it anymore. And sometimes, that includes like mixtapes and home recordings. Yeah. And she had recorded when she was in college in the 70s. She recorded a concert Neil Young did at a university that had never been heard before.
Oh wow!
It had never came to light of the day. It was like lost media.
So only the people were there.
Yeah, and so she had snuck in a cassette recorder, and for her and her friends, and so they could re-listen to it. And that's kind of what they did back then. That was the old pirating kind of. Sure. And so she had it and just gave it, and he saw it and was like, oh my gosh! Like he recognized the dates and the songs because they knew he did a concert, and then like of course once he got viral with that, then like Neil Young's like production team like reached out like, hey, we'd love to have these files.
No
because
way.
It's lost media. And everyone was like, hey, well, careful, doesn't like destroy it to lock it.
I'd be like, all right, Neil, how much you gonna give me for it?
Yeah, and so like it kind of came out though that like I think he had like shared the file so they had it, but like we have the original, and like it was like really cool.
That's
so
awesome.
like that was refound again. Like for like internet archivists could like save that kind of media. Like lost media is such a big thing for a lot of people into like old tech and everything. And so it's kind of cool to look at like what are small time little garage bands or like laser tag shows were what our parents were for like those old classic rock bands.
Well, that's one of my favorite things, at least it used to be. It's not really a thing anymore, but back in the mid to late 90s, both living here and living down in San Diego. San Diego was the best because the scene down there, the punk rock scene down there was huge. Everybody I knew down there was in a band. Everybody. Like, oh, you've heard my band? Where's my demo tape? Where's my demo tape? And I still have them. I have all these demo tapes.
Cool.
That music is probably nowhere else except for people that have those demo tapes. And they're like, whatever, Maxell, whatever, like recordings, and there's like a hand-drawn kind of little insert on the tape and stuff. And I still listen to that stuff. I'll pop that on and be like, man, this was great. And no one's ever going to hear it anywhere, And these guys have all moved on to other stuff. Some of them are like in big corporations now. It's like, oh, you remember when you were in a punk band like 30 years ago?
Yeah, it's awesome.
But like, I think that's great. Even now, if I go to shows and there's a local band or whatever opening up, I always buy whatever they have. If they have something available, whether it's a demo tape or a demo CD now, or even if it's like a link to a digital media file or whatever. Just 'cause I think it's cool just to think like, oh, no one's,
like these, SoundCloud, a lot of stuff that's on like SoundCloud or what's the app? It's like let me see. Bandcamp. I love Bandcamp. That's where I hear a lot of my, like I mentioned, like the Y2K music or like the city pop, which is like a named genre for like, the 1980s Japanese music. Because then it was just, well, this is just pop music in the 80s in Japan. And, us over here like, ooh, look at this is genre. And they're just like, yo, that's been around for, ever. But, that's like that, people can do the remixes and the resurgence, and then you see that's where like you mentioned like, oh, you mean like dubstep, or you mean like there's vaporwave, and it's all like niches. Then it's like EDM or dance or trance and house, and but I think the thing I like about it is, like I said, love the 80s and the early 2000s kind of effect on it, because it all ties in that like I try and hunt down the actual records. Like I really like the records. I have some old equipment from like family. I mentioned like my dad has some stuff. But so
when you collect, you said you collect vinyl. Do you collect, is there a criteria there, or do you collect like rare stuff, or do you just buy your favorite stuff on vinyl? Like I try not to do too much, because like I jump around to hobbies a lot. So like I kind of have a rule for myself that's like one hobby at a time. Because plus vinyl's not cheap.
No, it's not. So. It's like, well, if I want to do this, then I'm going to focus on only this for a while. I can't work on that or work on that. And so for a bit when I was in kind of my city pop phase, I was hunting down like the original LPs of those Japanese artists. So I've got some from like Henri and some from Maria Takeuchi, and sometimes those can be a little more rare because a lot of them get reproduced because it got really popular, and then they're like, oh, you guys want us to do like tours, because they're still around. Like Henri came to America and did like a concert, and I was like, what?
You're like, where was I?
I like, what do you mean I missed this? And so they would like reproduce and reprint her labels. But it's like cool to get one of the original ones that still have the original, like this is where kind of my library bookish side of me. I love that you see like the original like receipt, or they call it like the obi, the wrap that went over it, and the tags and the inserts for the manuals, and I love all that really nerdy niche stuff. Like give me the art piece that came with it. And so, my middle brother was like, is wicked smart when it comes to tech. Like he, I grew up around him just like building his own computers and everything. And the guy like can like reprogram cars kind of thing. Like he's really smart with it. And so like I know I've always had kind of a love of that. Like I don't even want to say old tech, but in the way of like Y2K, it is kind of old now, because like I said, we have iPhones, but like okay, well I got my iPod Nano back. I'm like, no, I want to like I'm like, I want to I'm sick of like how dependent like I've got on my phone. I'll admit I have a phone addiction. It really does impact sometimes at work or anything. It's hard. And so I'm like, okay, well maybe I'll go to like a dumb phone, a flip phone and then just use my iPod and use this. But it's unfortunate how tied in we are a lot. Someone made a point. They're like, okay, but you can't get an Uber on a dumb phone.
Right.
And they're like, if you're out with somebody, or even like, work uses apps to clock in now. You have to use your phone to check in your lunch break and your time. And it's like, well, shoot, I have to use a smartphone. But I digress. That's like a whole nother topic. But so yeah, I've got like a lot of old tech still, and I'm really into cars.
Yeah,
I'm really into like 90s and 80s cars. I mentioned like the Japanese imports. I love all that. Like my dream is to tie in like for like audiophile. I want to like build like a period accurate like sound system in a car.
Okay.
Like I love like the double din units. Like my dream is like the Japan exclusive, like the Panasonic, like it's like VZ200. It has like all the bars. You think of like for like a Pioneer, the dolphins going across the just that aesthetic.
Boy, that's a blast from the past.
The DINs that are the clear colored tech cases. Like when Nintendo 64 was purple and clear and you could see the guts. That kind of tech. I love all that kind of stuff, and so I really want to build like when people are like, oh, what kind of like car fan are you? Are you like a restoration? Or are you like a modified? Do you like tuner cars? And I'm like, well, I'm kind of called like a an OEM plus, which stands for keep it like factory, like restore, but add on cool things. So maybe I could get stuff that's like a rep or anything, but it was period accurate. Alternate. So like that era would have.
So this is a dream of yours to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think it's a doable dream? Do you foresee yourself doing it?
I think I'm doing it right now. Even if you're building up to it, like
nice.
It's like I have. I still have my car, my very first car that I had since high school.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Nissan.
Really?
So it's a 94 D21 truck. It's the hard bodies. So it's like, what do you call like a mini truck when you think of like the older trucks?
I used to have one of those. Not a 94, but I had
a... Yeah. And so I've been, kind of building him back to what he used to be, like what you'd get off the dealer lot. Yeah. And I want to, I put on, I hunted down for a couple of years for like the original, dealer option fog lamps, like the Bosch, brand Scout lamps, and I wired them in and everything with like the factory switch, and you look for kind of like the original, I still have like the window stickers and all. And
are you doing all this work yourself?
Yeah.
So it's like a hobby.
Absolutely. So I have like the service manual for my truck, the one that the dealers would get, for the technicians.
Yeah.
And so it has all the rundown. If you have this problem, here's how you diagnose it. Here's all the engine codes. Here's that. So I work on the car myself. So I've replaced my fuel injectors and the fuel rails. You take off the intake manifold to get to it all. I've done some electrical, like I mentioned, the fog lamps, or, I fixed my EGR. And a lot of people might laugh at that, and they're just like, it's just like, they call it like an EGR delete, because it has to do with emissions, and gosh, it's useless to make it run, it's California emissions. And I'm like, that's nice, but I can't do a hot smog. I need to actually get it smogged so I can pass registration. This isn't like my track car. This is still like a car I want to take to be able to legally drive on the road.
Sure.
And if I'm going to spend money, then I'm not going to hot smog it. I'll spend money to do cool, like a paint job or something that I'm saving up for.
Do you put a lot of money into that hobby?
I probably have so far. Like I said, I try to do one hobby at a time. So while I'm doing this, I'm not collecting records, because I try and limit myself and be like, okay, I did this for a little bit. Let's move on to something else. And it doesn't mean like, oh, you're like, I've had friends who are like, why suddenly pick this up? And I'm like, no, I can explore new things. It's fun. But
and you'll probably go back to the other stuff.
Yeah, and even if I sit for a while, it still means I like my cars, but I'm at like a good spot to kind of pause with it.
Sure.
And I was really like, ooh, in this economy, let's focus on my career a little bit. Let's kind of take a pause on this and just enjoy what I've got. And my dream, I would love a 91 Nissan 240 SX coupe. I would love that one. The seafoam green option.
Nice.
That would be beautiful. I've got the wheels I want for it. I know I want to put like an R32 wing on it.
Okay.
I have a Pinterest page of my dream for that car.
Nice.
Yeah, I would love it. And it's, but that car is really popular, sought after. It's a lot of people. It's kind of a beginner car. Kids who get really into it because of like media or something, or however they find it. I'm not going to knock how they get into the culture for it.
Sure.
But they would like buy the car, and then they kind of what they call like clap it out a bit or whatever, like, hey, I'm not really super interested in like learning how to do it the right way. I want to just, it's really popular right now, or look at the people on social media, or this is cool and I want people to like it, so I'm just going to throw it together and I'm going to, well, who cares if it's done correct, or, that kind of thing. And that was like a big thing with like, in like, I say like the early 2000s with like tuner culture and before social media. Everyone always points out like, oh, you mean like Fast and Furious. Like, well, yeah, but I mean, truly, in like 2003, like all the extras they used in that movie were actual people who were in the tuner culture, and they were fans of, JDM, the imports and everything, and they brought their own cars to the movie. And when you like, had the meets like hot import nights or like option video, or, everything that you'd see like with like just discovering a lot of what like Japan had already been doing for years, they brought the best of the best to the meets. You brought you helped each other learn how to do it correct. You bought the proper stuff, and you weren't worried about like, oh, well, and sure there was always people who are like, I want to show it off and like, and that's the nature of humans. We want people to like what we do. Sure. But I feel like people are actually more into the love of it. And like now it just feels very like someone can like buy something and go to a meet, and maybe like, not that it's bad to bring projects and be like, oh, look what I'm so excited. I just got my new wheels. I'm saving it for a paint job. Right. That's a difference, I think, between someone who comes over and they're just like, nah, I don't care. I threw like, 20 zip ties on it and just like fall in the car and like, screw whoever like actually has like a passion for this. And I just, selfie and then I ditch it. And it's like, okay, well now when I want to try and find like my 240, like you can hardly find a stock clean one. They're all like, here's a shell and it's like worth like, I'm selling it for 10 grand because I know what I got because everyone wants this, but there's like no transmission and the wiring was actually like all super glued together, so have fun with that. And it's like, that's not worth that. I'm not gonna spend the money on it. So it's kind of unfortunately ruined the market a bit,
because you're knowledgeable about it though, to where other people might not be, and that's those people are going to try to take advantage of somebody like that, right?
That, or they tried to get into it, found out there's a lot of work, they don't really want to do it, and so they want to like get rid of it, or maybe there's other reasons. Maybe they were into it one time, but now they want to focus on something else, and that's valid, and they could. And there's like different types of like tuner culture. I say like I don't want to like knock it like, oh, your car looks like garbage, so you're not a real fan, because that's not true. There's people who
could be true.
There's people who do like track days, like they go to tracks, so they want a beater, and they kind of want like a badge of pride, like look at my it's I don't worry about the paint job. It's got a roll cage. I'm just worried about like I throw in like an LS swap to it, and I'm trying to get the biggest horsepower. And it's because it's fun. By all means, go for it. That's the cool of a hobby. You can do what you want. But it's the people who are just there because they're trying to just like get attention or fake it. And with any hobby, with anything, you can always sense when people aren't really invested into it or the heart of it, and you're like, this is lame, dude. Like, this isn't what the car scene is anymore. And they then they comment on other people's stuff and like, oh, you don't have as many likes on Facebook, you're stupid. And I'm like, what? Oh, this is dumb. Why the hell do you even care about social media? Like, I'm just here to like chill and hang out. And so like that's,
well, some people aren't. That's why
that's true. That's really
true. They meet
true.
someone like you and they're like, what's wrong with you? You mean you're not here to impress other people? You're like, no, I'm just here because it's fun for me.
And a lot of women can get a bad rep in like car community for it. There's girls who go to meets and it's not always common. There's girls who do go. The idea is like, oh, she's here with her boyfriend, or she's like a car model.
She's draped over the hood in a bikini.
Yeah, she's there to show off, or she's there because she wants to like date one of the guys or something. And so sometimes you really have to kind of make a name for yourself. You have to like, no, like actually I really like this. Here's my car. Like, let's be friends and talk about it. And like I really, when I was down in San Diego, I kind of didn't get too involved in the car scene. I just didn't have the chance to and the opportunity at the time. But I knew it of a little bit. And it wasn't until I, got back here that I was like, oh man, I have the availability to. And I'm like, look, my car's cool and I'm going to do this. And I met, a lot more friends like out in LA and everything. And I really admire like SoCal's car clubs and then like car community. And there's like a really cool, shop down there over in El Monte. It's like Fujiwara Tofu Café. And so they're...
Tofu Café?
Tofu Café. So they're based around... There's a show, again, an anime, called Initial D that started in like 98 that had to do with like illegal street racing. And so it got a lot of people like into the scene. Aside, like I said, there's always, Fast and the Furious is something that got people in. Or there's, the videos who just heard about it from friends in Japan. Or, the anime is a big impact on a lot of people. And so that cafe is based on a character from that show who had a certain car and all that kind of stuff. And so they host a lot of car meets. People who have like Japanese domestic motors, JDM cars, they'll go and have meets and hang out and they'll just
and tofu.
chill. Well, yeah,
tofu is the meat for the vegetarians.
Boba drinks or anything, but it's like really popular. Like there's
this is in LA.
Yeah, over in LA. And so there's like a holiday called on August 6th. So because the date 8/6, because the car that's famous in the show is the 86, the Terreno, and so it's like in America it's like a Corolla, a little Toyota, kind of and that was what the main character drove and raced everyone in, and it was kind of really notorious for it. And so that day, 8/6 day, is kind of when everyone has like huge meets and like you should like Google it sometime, like look it up. Like there's sometimes that the cops shut it down because there's so many people and bringing out like all their cars and the best of it. It's a fun time.
And you've been to this?
Yeah, I actually. I got out of work at 4 o'clock, drove down to El Monte, so about maybe like a 3.5 hour drive. Hung out at the meet, hung out with my friends and stuff, my boyfriend down there, and then I got back on the road at 11 p.m. and drove back home.
Nice.
I went to work the next day.
No way.
Yeah, it was a Tuesday, and I'm like,
feeling
I'm going.
Fantastic, I bet.
And then of course, you have people who are like, that's not responsible as an adult. You need to make better decisions. And I'm like, well, I'm an adult, so I choose to do this, and that's great, and it's fun.
And you had told me that's where you met your boyfriend, right?
Yeah, we met at a car meet. Okay. It was a really cute story.
Yeah.
But no, he's sweet. He puts up with me.
And how long have you guys been together?
We're gonna be together for a year in August, so we're still kind of new.
Nice.
But yeah, no, it's fun. I really like that we have similar hobbies.
Yeah.
That was always really important to me.
August what?
August 8th. I mean, August 6th.
August 6th?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were at that.
So it's 8/6.
Yeah,
okay.
we were at so we met before that, but we officially became an
item, as the kids say.
At that meet. It's very nerdy. Oh, don't laugh at me. I'm all embarrassed now. I'm all embarrassed.
I think it's cool.
But it's something that like, I kept, I'd go to LA for my friends' meets and support their stuff, and but that's a lot of mileage and time, and I'm like, man, like I've got friends here on the Central Coast. We'd go to like the Pismo Cars and Coffee, and it's like there's a lot of cool meets that are like every car's welcome, bring the bikes, and kumbaya, like we all like it. And then because everyone always thinks of like, oh, is this like a takeover? Is it all the challengers and everything that like ruin it for everyone? And it's like, well, okay, but like, and so there's people here who have a lot of really cool like JDM cars, and you're like, okay, but there's like nothing really for us, and so I thought about it, and I'm like, man, like as much as in school, I'm always telling the kids like, hey, be the change you want to see, I started my own car group, and so it's not like something with like membership, and you've got to do this, and we're secretly racers. I'm like, no, this is all stupid. Like we just,
it's Illuminati, Illuminati stuff.
And I've had people ask like, oh, do we like? I'm not looking for like a new clique. I'm like, no, it's really like we just hang out, bring our cars, and see like what's been updated and what's kind of new and going on, and so it's cool, and a lot of people have really responded well to it, and I'm like, we need something on the coast, like we're here, and
if you're into that kind of thing, it's fun.
It's called Pacific.Nostalgia. I'll plug myself. It's Pacific.Nostalgia. It's nifty. We've got an Instagram.
Do you?
I do, yeah. I was really surprised by the volume of people who've like responded well to it. Like, our first meeting had like 27, and I was like, people want to hang out. Oh my gosh, yay! And so,
and now how many up to?
Oh, well, we're gonna have our second meet, over in Napomo. But I want to like pick a different spot. I had one in Pismo. I want to do one in Slow. I want to just kind of all over. And even like if you don't have a car that's like an import, like come check it out. Like, I'm not trying to be like, we're like every car, because I want to really be like, hey, this is kind of a focus of like JDM. But like I had friends who were like, hey, can I just like come by and hang out? I'm like, yeah, man, come see it and stuff. And
you weren't like, no, you're either part of the club or you're not.
No, again, it's not a club. It's not like an invite only. But I had wanted to kind of. I was nervous at first. Like, I don't want to invite like people who want to mess it up or cause trouble, or because it's inviting. I mean, maybe it's silly. Stranger danger. It's like, who's gonna come over?
Well, you don't want like car club crashers.
You don't. I don't want like the cops called, and because people are like, now you're making all this noise, and you always ask people like, hey, be respectful. Like, don't do burnouts. Don't like. We're at businesses. Be nice. But it's been good so far, and I'm excited, to kind of bring that to the coast. And then, there's a lot of like really cool groups like in SoCal over in LA that I really like. Yeah. Like I mentioned, Tofu Café, but like Slow and Stylish is a cool group, or like Pure Spirit Heritage. Like Bayside, California wants to do something over like in like their beaches and like Pismo and all that, and it's like, yes, like let's collab.
Well, that's fun.
Do cool things.
That's fun because that might grow into something huge.
Yeah,
them,
absolutely. And it's like, we get overshadowed a lot in the Central Coast. There's like the Corvette clubs, or you got like the big hot rod communities with all, the Bel Airs and the Novas.
The cool guys.
Yeah, a lot of like retirees who live at the beach and want to bring the cars. There's like a really big lowrider community in the coast here, and that's awesome. Like, love all the Impalas and everything. And I'm like, let's give us a little spotlight. Let's do some stuff.
That's
for
what
us.
I always wanted, was a '64 Impala back in my hip hop days.
What color?
I don't know. I never thought about it. But I just see like Dre and Snoop cruising one, and be like, I gotta have one of those.
Sure.
But my favorite all-time car and my dream car, people laugh at this, is a 1988 Ford Mustang.
Oh.
Drop top. It's basically the car from, have you ever seen the movie Menace to Society?
No, I have not.
Okay, it's one of those old gangster movies from the 90s with like Boys in the Hood and that kind of stuff. But the guy that he's driving a car.
You were saying like Blood In, Blood Out.
No, well that's around the same era. Yeah. But this one, like he's in the drive-through and the one guy comes up and basically carjacks him.
Sure.
And
wants to get his car back.
Well, that's the car that I want. That's like, I want that one right there. With I think there were gold Dayton rims. And the stereo. It was awesome.
That's cool. Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if I would actually drive that if I had one.
Yeah. No, I get that. It's tough when things get expensive.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, that's like a good thing on one hand and the other, but I don't know. I mean, like I think a really good like insight to people who could explain it like so much better than me, because I'm still, I guess, considered kind of newish. It's only been a few years that I've really finally kind of embraced and like got into this. Is like there's a really good podcast called like Sil 80 Mania that talks about like the history of like drifting and like street racing like in America, that like started in America, like when like Japan like finally kind of started bringing it over and all that, and it's they talk about so much cool stuff. And there's a lot of times I just throw that podcast on when I'm shelving at the library.
So one last thing in music.
Yeah.
Can you give me top 5 favorites of all time?
Oh no.
I know that's hard. And again, they can be ones you've already mentioned or.
Yeah. Oh no, that's awful because it changes all the time.
Yeah.
Let me think. I of course have to mention Led Zeppelin. I really like Achilles' Last Stand.
Okay.
Is a good one.
Yeah.
I definitely.
That's a later one. Isn't that their final album?
I think so. Yeah. Who I like? I mentioned Limp Bizkit. I really like. Actually no. Let me mention. I love. Stevie Nicks' Silver Springs.
Okay.
I like a lot of.
That's solo, right?
Yeah, some of her. No, it was because it was the Rumors album with. Yes.
With Fleetwood Mac.
I think I mentioned Alice in Chains, Them Bones. Was a really good one.
Yep.
Probably Daft Punk's. I'm gonna mispronounce it. I think it's like Veritas Quo or something. It's from their Homework album, I believe.
Okay.
Where's Discovery? No, maybe Discovery. I think it's from Discovery. And then some of the newer stuff that I've kind of found, I really like. Addie T's Liquor Store is a good one for. I know it's like I said. This is the Y2K
Addie,
kind of
like ADDIE.
No, it's ADI space T.
Okay.
So like
Addie T's Liquor Store.
Yeah, it's like one of the Y2K kind of like tech kind of stuff, or like Cult Members, a good group for that.
Okay.
As for like the city pop, a classic is Plastic Love by Mari Takeuchi, or there's like Shy Boy by Henri.
Henri's the
ANRI is the singer.
That's the artist. Okay.
Yeah, it's so varies. It like varies over. Yeah. Like I mean, I don't know. My brother, my middle brother used to raise me on like Linkin Park.
Okay.
Like he so it's if someone was like, if I were to hand a list of like favorite songs, and people would be like, who on earth? Like,
have you heard any of the new Linkin Park with the girl singer in place of Chester?
I tried and I didn't like it.
Okay.
I know. You know what? I feel like because I really like. Oh my gosh, I forget his name. Not Chester. The
Mike Shinoda.
Yes, thank you, Shinoda. Because I liked his stuff with like
Fort Minor.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Fort Minor,
you're good.
because I liked Remember the Name.
Yeah.
I really liked some of his rap stuff.
Right.
And so when he did Fort Minor, I'm like, hey, that's rad. And I know a lot of people say Chester really made it Linkin Park. It wasn't Linkin Park before Chester joined.
For sure.
So I feel if he wanted to keep making music with her, pick maybe another name, do some new music,
Well, that's kind of why I asked. I think for a lot of us, it's hard not to go into it already not wanting to like it.
Especially when you...
Because you're like, don't replace Chester. Just don't do it.
Especially her singing the same stuff. If they wanted to do a cover.
Right.
Or hey, this is cool as our new band. That's a cool name. But to hear even Chester's kids being hey, you didn't even ask us what we thought. Or I'm just it feels a little trying to grab back what you had.
Yeah.
When it's it's time to start a new chapter.
I've always been a huge fan of...
You can't go back.
If you change the singer in a band, change the name of the band.
Yes.
Just because the band sounds totally different at that point.
So then do you feel the same with some of the class rock groups?
Give me an example.
I think it was... Oh, I'm going to make a fool of myself. I know... Who was it? It was the one that... Oh my gosh. They sang... the song group, the main singer died in the plane accident. And so they had to replace him. His brother was in the band. It was... Oh my gosh!
Leonard Skinner?
Maybe it was Leonard Skinner, yes.
Okay.
So that's a new singer, but they're still continuing on doing all the music that they're started.
Yeah.
Do you think they should be a new band name?
Yeah.
Really? That's okay. You can think that. I mean, you look at Robert Plant. He's a new stuff because he continued on to do solo work.
Well, the solo, but see, that's different. That's not
But he's got
it'd be
a new
if he
drummer
left
and a new
Led
everything.
Zeppelin.
Sure.
And then they got some other guy.
And he's doing all this folk music.
And it's
now.
it's
friends
just
go oh, we're gonna watch Robert Plant.
There's a few
None
exceptions. If it's a singer that sounds very similar to the original, AC/DC,
yes.
Perfect example. Brian Johnson came in on the Back in Black album,
yes.
and he sounds a lot like Bon Scott.
Sure.
Right? I mean, you can tell the difference, if you listen, but it's the same style, singing. But then there's been other times where they put another singer in there, and you're like, this is just not the same band, at all. But the argument is for example, you got Van Halen.
Yes.
Yeah, David Lee Roth.
Yes.
Then when he was gone, then they put in Sammy Hagar, which I'm one of the few people in the world that prefers Sammy Hagar over David Lee Roth.
Okay.
But totally different sound.
Sure.
Totally different sound. You can easily tell if someone plays a Van Halen song for you, is this David Lee Roth or Sammy? You just know right off the bat,
Sure.
So it's just hard when you have a band that's named the same thing that sounds so different.
So are you a fan of Eruption or not? Or
Eruption was David Lee Roth, right?
I think so.
Yeah, that was early on. Yeah. No, and don't get me wrong, the music of early Van Halen is great. I mean, the 1984 album is great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great stuff.
It's the solo, aside from Freebird, that every guitar class teaches people, or the teacher plays to impress the kids.
Right.
Yeah. It's very notorious. Yeah,
for sure. But anyway, all right, spirituality. Let's kind of. I kind of want to get a.
All right.
You don't have to go into this as much as you want. Yeah.
I speak for no one, and I can be.
You speak for yourself.
Yeah.
This is your own personal beliefs, and we're all entitled to that.
I just get a little nervous.
Yeah, of course. But what you mentioned that you are a Christian.
Yeah.
In some maybe not traditional per se, but what brought you into that? Your parents raised you that way? Okay.
I was definitely raised in it. When we were younger, my family was Catholic.
Okay.
And then when I got to about 4th grade or so, my parents just kind of wanted more of a less religious rule following. They wanted more of a relationship with Jesus, and so we found a local Christian church, and we went to that and converted. And so I did grow up in it. It was Sunday school and all that stuff. And so then as I kind of got older, like I mentioned, I was like, I feel like it's kind of made a little bit of a political stance that I don't really kind of agree with. And so I went and I kind of found another church, but I still believe that, and I identify as, Christian and stuff.
You still believe the core tenets of Christianity?
But I don't really I think evangelical Christianity's gotten a little too political and a little too involved in government.
Meaning trying to convince other people that
and being involved in how people should vote and being involved in that this is what, that I think there comes with a lot of shaming and speaking for God, and then like a lot of that, I'm like, well, as Christians, like, you know, we always have that question that's like, oh, how do I know if someone's like being correct or leading me down the wrong thing? And it's like they always tell you like, oh, compare it to Scripture. Yeah. And so I do, and I'm like, well, looking at the Bible and stuff, I feel like it's like a lot of the stuff they say is like, I don't know, I don't think that they're following what I think is kind of the way, but that's just me.
Well, I'll tell you off the bat, I'm the same way. Yeah. I hold to Scripture. I don't hold to man. I don't care if you're a pastor. I don't care. I mean, even the church I go to now, I don't agree with everything that comes out of the pulpit because, again, I'm comparing it to Scripture. I think that's what it's for. I think we're supposed to do that, right? That's why God left it for us.
Yeah, you know? To encourage community and to check each other and to, you know, have that discussion.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And my question is always like, well, where's that coming from? Like if a pastor will say something or I'll be like, well, where are you getting that? Like, is that in the Bible or is that like just your own personal opinion or like, what is that?
Yeah, and I'd like to think that like God would enjoy the discussion of like minor theology. Mm-hmm. Like I think there's like minor things that like people discuss, like, oh, you know, was this, or you know that, and I don't have any good examples, but I think
you brought before like pre-trib, post-trib, that kind of stuff, which isn't explicitly stated in Scripture,
right? And stuff that doesn't like pertain to your salvation. Like, well, if I think this or I think this, that doesn't like yay or nay if you're you know, saved or not.
Right.
Like people who discuss about heaven, like the idea of like heaven and what it is, and all kinds of like, I think that's fascinating, and I think, you know, that kind of thing that God would be like, that's cool, chat about it, and like have discussions, and people go to college to study it, and all that kind of stuff, and so I think there's a lot that would be like encouraged to discuss, and comparing to like, well, like no, here's the basic tenets like that we all agree and all that stuff, but you like look at, you know, there's a lot of different. I say like religions who have those discussions of theology who all vary, but you know, I say like they're saved, and I'm not sitting here like, oh, everyone gets to heaven different ways. Like, I mean, like if you look at like I feel like Lutheran, Catholic, Baptist, like they all believe like Jesus and stuff, but they might have discussions about like different ideas.
They might have different doctrines they believe in, but the core idea of Jesus being the only atonement for our sins is still there.
Yeah.
Right. So, would you say then that? Well, let me ask you. You said the core tenet. Like, what would you say are the core tenets of Christianity?
I think is, you know, I always call it like the ABCs. Like, admit you're a sinner. Like, believe and then confess. Or, oh, I got it wrong. But like, you know, you admit, you know, you believe in Jesus, that you're a sinner and that you need it. And then I'm not trying to, you know, like I know there's a lot of like faiths, like with a lot of Catholicism that can do like, you know, they joke Catholic guilt. A lot of like, oh, you know, I'm an awful person because of this, and you know, the idea of like, if you love yourself, that's like terrible. And you know, I had gone through some pretty traumatic stuff, and when I kind of came out of it, and I was reading a book that was from a Christian pastor, and it was like, you know, God loves me and I love myself, and he was pointing out, and he's like, even in Scripture it says like, you know. The first greatest commandment is, you know, like love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second greatest is love your neighbor as you love yourself. And he said, in that thing, it's as you love yourself. Like we're not supposed to have like our shame and our anger and anxiety and self-hatred and all that. Like we're all infallible. We're all going to make mistakes. The point is to try and be better and to correct and to learn and have community and stuff.
Right. Nobody's
and to support
perfect.
each other.
Right.
But we have to know that like, you know, hey, like I deserve that love. I deserve forgiveness. Like it's okay, like that I'm feeling this way or going through this trauma or dealing with anxiety. Like, and I think that's a lot of that helps with like, and maybe you understand like in CBT therapy about like, hey, you know, that's okay. I have this emotion. Like there's nothing, you know, wrong with it, and like just let it pass on by. And so I think, you know, there's a lot that can come with very strict religious rules because, you know, and I feel like even in like Corinthians, Paul warned about that, about like following the religious law and that kind of thing. And I'm no theology. I'm no expert. You know, there's stuff I have to be like, oh, I misquoted that, or I just, you know, said that earlier. But
first, you don't have the answers, and now you're not an expert.
I know.
Why are you even here?
I just try my best. That's all I can do.
I'm just messing with you.
No, I know.
Yeah, none of us are experts, and none of us have all the answers, and that's kind of the whole point, right?
And I just, you know, I want to, you know, I feel like my gifts that I feel like, because, you know, I think everyone has like gifts and talents that God gave us. And I feel like my gifts really are that, like, mercy and hospitality and all that maybe that's why I work with kids and why I work so well. And I love, you know,
it's like a calling.
Yeah. And
right?
I always joke that, like, oh man, like my home is open to anyone. Like, I want to have, you know, like, food always is an option. I love hosting for holidays. You know, I love that if someone needs a place to stay, or like, hey, I always have, like, you know, a bottle of wine ready for announcements of, like, weddings and celebrations.
Oh, cool.
And I just, you know, I love, you know, like, my love language is like gift giving.
Okay. My wife too.
I love being that safe area and that warm place for my friends and my family, and that can be tough for a lot of people. I've met a lot of people who can get, like, angry at that and, like, oh, like, is this, like, manipulating, or you're being walked on, or and I'm like, no, I really feel like we have to truly remember to be kind to, like, not only others but ourselves too.
Right.
And it's easy to, you know, give into that shame and anything.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you. I think that we have sin, but then if we receive Christ, we get the forgiveness of that. And, and I don't think we are supposed to dwell in the shame, in that, you know, because now we're free in Christ, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think obviously if we can as we continue, I shouldn't say if we continue, as we continue to commit sin and that kind of thing, obviously there's now a conviction there.
Sure.
It's not like we're just like, oh, who cares? God forgives me anyway.
No,
big whoop-de-whoop.
And I think God knows your heart. And I think that's and so some people might be like, oh, well, you know, do we see it? Do we need to know? And I don't know if you've changed it and stuff. And it's like, I think God knows when people deal with addictions and struggles and temptation and everything. And he knows when people really are like shoot, like, you know, I did it again. I messed up. Like, but you know, I'm trying to be better, and I want to. And I think God knows that.
Of course.
And that's why he has grace for us.
Yeah.
To, like, that it's not up to others to pass that judgment, and you know, why point out the splinter in my eye and ignore the plank in your own.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of Christians can forget that when they're condemning others and all that. And it's like, hey, like, you might think it's not a big deal, but you're gossiping, and that's just as bad, and if not worse.
Right.
And like, so I try and just, I don't know, check myself a lot, or just really focus on the aspect of, like, helping people, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you think, though, do you believe that Jesus is the only way of salvation?
Yeah.
You didn't sound very sure of yourself.
No, I do. I struggle with being like I get pushed around a lot. Or I struggle, like, always kind of having enjoyment, because I don't like upsetting people, and I don't like people getting angry, and and I've kind of dealt with a lot of that. I've had, you know, people in my life who had a lot of anger, and it's something I'm working through to, like, hey, like, that's not my responsibility to manage people. Like, that's their choice to kind of explode that way. I can only, like, correct myself and remove my situation or have my boundary and stuff. And so I try to be true to myself and be like, yes, I do. Right. And, you know, if people are allowed to disagree with me, you know, that's, again, when I say, like, God gave us free will. Yeah. You know, and and so I won't, like, argue with people. I don't think you should, you know, I go to, like, conventions sometimes, and I see those people in the corners with the signs like, oh, you're going to hell, and I'm like, that's never going to win people. Right. Like, that's just, I don't like the fire and brimstone. I don't think that's going to have an honest conversation with someone, like, hey, like, let's chat about this or whatever. I don't think that's inviting. I think that's using fear, and I don't think that's the way to do it. And so
what would you say is the way to do it?
I think, like, just having that. There's an evangelicus. He's been doing it for years. He goes to colleges.
You know, Cliff.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget his last name.
Neffler.
Yes.
Neffler.
But Cliff, I like that he just doesn't treat them like they're stupid. Right. Doesn't treat them. He just talks to them, and he has a lot of really logical, like, hey, like, absolutely great questions.
But he also doesn't shy away from the truth. Yes. But he does it in a way that's not condemning.
And it's opposite of what Charlie Kirk does. Okay. Charlie Kirk, I think, does a lot of stuff to get a reaction and get angry and, like, get those views, like, calls them names or like shout stuff out, or like, oh, these are brainwashed and stuff. Like, you're egging for views. Yeah. You're not actually have a heart of, like, hey guys, let's chat about this. Right. There's no humanity and humility in it. Okay. And I think that's what a lot of, like, actual, like, Cliff does, and he has those heart-to-heart conversations with people. And so I really admire that, and it's kind of been like, oh man, that's a great point. I've never known how to talk about that until like I heard out what Cliff
and that's the beauty of it, like what Cliff's doing, and I think to some degree Charlie's doing as well. But they're opening up a conversation that might never happen, right?
Sure.
Especially like what Cliff's doing with like the atheist community or whatever,
Sure.
because where they might they might have got burned somewhere down the line by a
Sure.
religious institution,
Absolutely.
and they come out of that and their conclusion is God doesn't exist.
Yes.
To where Cliff's like, no, wait a minute. Think
Yeah.
about this a little bit.
Yeah.
I understand why you're angry at this religious institution.
Sure.
They're probably way off.
Yeah.
But don't make them and God the same person,
Exactly.
because they're not, right?
Absolutely.
There's lots of people that wear the name of Jesus on their forehead
Sure.
that are out doing the wrong stuff.
Yeah, like we said earlier, like in
Right.
politics, lots of wolves in sheep clothing. God cautions us about those who preach loudly on like the corners and tries to be so holy. And it's yeah, you have to
Right.
be cautious of those who try and just, I guess, take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So what are your thoughts on scripture? Do you think it's all true, some true, parts true?
I'd say it's all true. I do believe it. You know, I believe in miracles and stuff. There's some stuff that I mentioned, you know, with my own anxiety that I don't really enjoy reading Revelations.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll do it later.
Well,
But,
if you're pre-trib, you'll be gone by then anyway. So
I know, but that's not me saying it's not. That's just kind of me recognizing
Right.
that, like, hey, that's something I, you know, work through on my own, and so I do, you know, I believe, I do believe scripture, and that it's like you look at people who, like, you know, I think, you know, alcoholism can be like a mental disorder as well. I think some things within the brain, addiction can have tendencies. Some people, they just have one drink and that can trigger the thing within their brain, and they have very addictive qualities. So if that's how they're born and that's their nature, and they get addicted to whether drugs and alcohol or gambling or anything, then that's their nature and that's what they want. But they're like, hey, I don't want to live that life. I'm choosing not to.
Correct.
And so that's, you know, some people who might say, like, you know, like, I know a big thing if they talk about sexuality is like, okay, well, maybe a guy's nature is that he wants to sleep with as many women as possible and all that. Like, sure, I should.
That's most guys' nature before they get married.
And maybe guys, you know,
Some
like,
even after they get married.
And men can have that choice, and so can women.
Right.
That, like, hey, they want to do that, but then there's some people who are like, all right, but I don't want to lose, so I'm gonna, you know, not give into that. I don't want to deal with that temptation. I'm not gonna sleep around.
And the thing about that is there are people that feel that they want to do that, and but for the mass majority of people that do that, they're very unhappy at the end of that.
Oh, really?
Well, like they just had that, I mean, that's kind of an extreme example, but they just had that girl that, she's like I think OnlyFans or whatever, but she slept with like, it was like 100 and something. And then the other girl tried to outdo her by doing 1,000 or something.
Oh, wow.
Like in a 24-hour period.
It's what?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
No, I guess so. You're doing a bunch at once, I guess, but... Yeah, but so that was the whole thing, and they were in, and they interviewed her after.
Wow.
And she started off trying to like talk about how great it was and all this, and in the middle of that, she just out of nowhere just broke down. Sure. And they're like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "I'm sorry. It's just like you're putting on this facade, like this is the great lifestyle, and everybody should do what you do and sleep with 1,000 guys in 24 hours. No, you're miserable on the inside."
Well, I mean, even there's been like a movement of like women, like you see, like in I forget, like there was a movement in Korea, but it's really popular like now with a lot of women who like, okay, well, we're in like a civilized world. Like men have like no excuse to not like have the bare minimum to treat women right. Like with straight women that are like dating, you know.
But what is the name of that?
It's like the 4 something.
Yeah.
I want to say 4-H, but that's like a Girl Scout. It's like 4 something.
4-H is
4B,
a farmer
the 4B
thing.
movement
Okay,
in Korea.
gotcha. Yeah.
Yes. And so a lot of women are like, no, I'm not going to settle. Like if these are basic, like I should be treated with respect and everything. You are a human being. You should know how to treat me. So I am going to go celibate. I'm not going to date you. And a lot of women are even saying like in that idea that like, hey, like, you know, when they would be like just to be used or in that relationship, that it's like it's awful to feel used and stuff, and to have a partner that doesn't appreciate that. And so it's like, and no, whether it's like a faith-based celibacy or like they're just like I'm over relationships. There's many reasons and stuff, and women can have right to enjoy intimacy and stuff. But like I get it, wanting to be like, no, like why, you know, date just for the sake of dating when I feel like I'm getting the raw end of the deal here.
Yeah. And the beauty of that in a sense is that the more women that start having that respect for themselves and saying, look, no, we're not doing this. until I feel like you respect me.
Yeah.
Do you know what that does? That makes those women more desirable.
Sure. But on the other hand, now you might get guys mad at you. The incels
You
and
might.
the male epidemic.
But that's the guys you don't want.
I know.
Those are the jerk balls.
But they're all saying that there's a male loneliness epidemic and that women are being unreasonable and that this is just how men are. And there's a lot of scary guys.
There's obviously a lot of facets to the conversation, right? I think personally that the feminist movement has destroyed it for both sides.
Sure.
I really do, because men are not attracted to a feminist woman. They're just not.
When you say feminism, what's your idea of feminism?
Well, I'm not talking about, so the feminism that I am a fan of was back in the day when women rose up and said, no, we should have the right to vote, we should have the right to this, we should be able, if we choose so, to work in the workplace. I'm for all that.
Yeah.
But the feminism that tries to demasculinize men and say, oh, I don't need no man, women are better, we anything a man can do, we can do also. This kind of like, I use the word strong loosely. I'm not saying a woman shouldn't be strong.
No,
My wife is one of the strongest women I know.
Sure.
But there's a point where the strongness pushes over onto the man to where it's trying to make him feel small.
Sure.
Men are not attracted to that.
Yeah.
Men are too prideful, and I use prideful in a good way here. Prideful can be a bad thing, but sometimes it's a good way. Yes, like you have, getting back to roles. Yeah, you have a role of a provider that's, in my opinion, instilled in the male psyche, right? And for a woman to come along and step all over that and say, no, I don't need you to provide for me. Don't open the door for me, you chauvinist. That kind of stuff. Men hear that and we're like, dude, I'm out. Yeah. Have fun alone for the rest of your life. You know? So, you know what I mean?
And a lot of it's tough because it could be because, like I said, and I agree. When I talk about feminism, I do definitely talk about the idea of equality. That, hey, a woman can choose to work on her own and make more money and all that, but she can also choose to be a homemaker. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. That
without
the
other side shaming her for being a housewife.
That she doesn't have to get her husband to sign up for a bank account for her. Right. That she doesn't need his signature to buy a car. That the freedom, because I don't think a lot of people realize that it wasn't until like 64 that women could own their own bank accounts. Right. Like it was really not that long ago that women had their own autonomy. Yeah. And so then there's a lot of guys who still will do, like, well, I bought you dinner, why aren't you putting out for me? And it's awful. I've had girlfriends who've got horror stories. Yeah. And it's like, well, no, fine, I'll open my own door because I don't want you to think I'm asking for this. Sure. Or I don't want to, like...
Well, that's what I meant about many facets, right?
Sure.
There's so
a lot
many
of
angles.
That trauma or that fear of, like, hey, like the fact that, like, online dating is, like, terrifying. Like if she's going out with you, she's already agreed that she doesn't know who you are, that she's hoping you're your photo, she's hoping you're not gonna kill her at the date. Right. It's like a lot of like her preparing for a lot of scary stuff that could happen. Sure. And so it's a risk to go out there. And so,
I've already said a million times, if anything ever happened to Bethany, if she left me or passed away or something, I would be single for the rest of my life.
And so I think when it comes to a lot of guys to have that awareness, and a lot of guys might be like, oh, like you're such a, like a, some of the words, that you think, because you like consider that you're a threat to her. Mm-hmm. Like I have a lot of great guy friends that are like, hey, I'm just, you're aware of your size and your stature and everything. You could be walking down the street at night and it's like, hey, that girl doesn't know who I am. I'm going to walk on the other side of the street, because it's just basic decency. And so I think a lot of guys like can forget that a lot of maybe that awful, like I'll do it myself, can come from like trauma or fear, because it's like, okay, well, what kind of guy are you? Are you gonna take advantage of me? Sure. Because like no, hey, it's fine, we'll split the check, like don't worry about it, I don't want to, and so I think maybe it's been lost a bit. I think a lot of women are just tired of kind of getting stepped on. But, you know, with everything, like we said, with like faith, with politics, everything, there's always extremes to both ends.
Yeah, and I think mistakes have been made on both ends of that spectrum, and that's why there's an issue. Sure. Both sides need to admit fault in some way, which a lot of them aren't willing to do.
Oh, no.
From the man's side, it's like, oh, these girls today are terrible, and I can't date anybody because they're this and they're that. And it's like,
withholding it from me on purpose.
Right.
It's like,
and the women are like, I'm never dating men again. They're the worst species of all time. But it's like, well, you guys are both wrong.
Yeah. Oh, both wrong. I had an awful wormhole down to like the Reddit subgroup of like, I think it's called like men going their own way, and it's like MG TW or something, and it like originally started as like the idea of like, hey dude, like you don't have to get married, you don't have to have a nuclear family, like go and travel and you have hobbies, and which is good. The idea of like even with women, like, hey, you know, you don't have to get married, you don't have to have kids, like let's do it and stuff. But of course, you know, the extremists got a hold of it, and there's a lot of awful rhetoric about how like, you know, like that women are below you and that all this kind of stuff and they deserve what's coming to them. And, you know, like there was one post I read that was like a guy that was like, oh, like if I'm talking to like a couple, I never even look her in the eye because I don't respect her as a person. I only talk to her boyfriend. And I'm like, holy, you know, that's scary. Like some of the, like the anger they hold towards women.
Oh yeah.
And it's scary out there because you don't know, like you do it at the grocery store, you know? And so, and then there's a lot of, like, I don't think a lot of guys realize that, like, you could kill us.
Yeah.
Like, you're really, please don't.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, women are taught in high school in our like home ec class. I remember being taught survival skills. Like, hey, don't wear a ponytail in a garage when you're walking to get your car. Hey, actually, if you're getting attacked, yell a man's name, like you're calling for your husband or your dad, or yell fire because people won't come help you for help. Or, you know, and it's like, you know, I tell like, you know, guy friends or anything, or even like my husband, and they're just like, what? Then the thought never crosses their mind because they don't have to do that.
True.
And it's like there's a lot of stuff we have to like prepare and learn to keep ourselves safe.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And I think to go back to something you said a minute ago.
Sorry,
No, you're good. No, you're good. To go back to, you said men that say, oh, you don't have to get married.
Sure.
And there's plenty of women that have that philosophy. Oh, I don't need to be married to be happy. I think, though, honestly, I think that for the vast majority of people, not everybody, but vast majority, they won't be as happy if they stay single. I really don't. I just think that, again, back to the God thing, I think we are designed, like you mentioned earlier, Eve was made to be a helpmate for Adam.
Sure.
Right, that's what it says. He was to be his companion. Like none of the animals were sufficient.
I think, I think we have a need for community. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're not meant to be alone. I do think, though, if it came to it, I'd rather be alone and single than in a relationship where, like, I have to beg a guy to love me or talk to me.
No, for sure.
Like
for sure.
Like, if a man's gonna, like, you know, double down about, like, well, I'm, you know, and of course that's a point of, like, well, that's awful, then don't be in it.
Right.
You know, so you're right. You know, you have to be careful who you choose.
Well, not every guy and every girl out there are perfect for each other.
You're right.
You can't just go out there and choose one in the mix and say, oh, I'm going to have a happy marriage.
I will say it's an interesting statistic, though, that, like, in marriages, like, whether it's divorce or death, men will statistically get married more and faster than a woman. Like, look at, you know, women who are, you know, older ladies whose husband passes away and they never remarry. And they're happy on their own. They're happy with that pace, to not have to manage a house and put up with a lot of the stuff that they put up with back, you know, in the day when they couldn't have their own autonomy.
Unless you're Elizabeth Taylor. She got married like 8 times or something like that.
And a lot of men miss that companionship, having that intimacy, having that someone to take care of them, help them in the home, and that, you know, they want that. They don't want to be that self-sufficient. So I think we're just at a time period where a lot of women are telling men do better. Yeah. Like, because
a lot of them do need to do better. Yeah, for sure.
And there are wonderful men who step up and great. I mean, I feel like a lot of guys who really are trying to teach other men that. Like, you know, I don't think that guys are the scum of the earth. Yeah. I just think we're at a time where
some of them are.
But, you know,
I guess what I'm saying more is, like, if a woman, because this scenario you painted was you'd rather be single than in a bad relationship. Yeah. And I agree with you. Of course you would. But let's say that happened. Let's say you tried it and you got married and your guy was a jerk and he treated you like garbage and you're like, this sucks. I'd rather be single, so you get divorced. I still think in your singleness, there's going to be something inside of you that hopes for what that good marriage is, right? I think, and same for men. I think men, there's something in them that desires a good wife and a good relationship with a wife. So I think we're designed to be connected in that way. Obviously we can screw it up. You can be a terrible wife, you can be a terrible husband, and the whole thing could fall apart.
I think a lot of it, like I said, comes down to we do have a need for companionship, absolutely, especially having access to that intimacy, and then no longer that's a void you miss, you know. And so I think So of course, and you can want it, and I think what comes into a lot of people who don't go back to it is either trauma that they never can face or work through, or their choice. There are people who God gave us all the choice that they could be like, I don't want it, and so they choose to never remarry because of that fear of something that they never want to face.
Of course,
and so everyone's different. People have different things. Like, hey, I'm gonna just focus. I have wonderful family. I've got a great friend group, and that's fulfillment enough, and then that's their prerogative.
Yeah, it's like Bobby Brown. It's my prerogative.
Oh, that's good. I took me a second. I was like, what?
That's probably dating a little bit. I was like in junior high when that came out, so you were probably in diapers. All right. Well, actually, you weren't even born when I was in junior high.
No, anyway. I'm a 92 baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
92.
My oldest brother, though.
I was already in high school in 92.
I think my oldest brother was 77. So we're a wide range.
That's right. You're like a lot younger.
Yeah, we're all 7 years apart.
Wow.
I know.
That's gnarly.
I know.
Yeah. But the last thing would be, we talked earlier about kind of what's the wording? Like the nuclear family. And from a biblical sense, maybe the husband being the head of the family.
Sure.
And I think you used the term like in charge of me, like in a sense of like a husband. I don't want any husband in charge of me. And I would agree with you. I don't think that's the biblical model. Although some men have taken that parts of scripture and twisted it to mean I'm the head of the house. You do whatever I tell you to do, and if you don't, I'm going to beat you, and I'm going to do that. And it's in my rights, And there's men that feel that way. Less today than I think there used to be.
Sure.
But they're still out there. So I guess, in general, like the idea of the nuclear family and to kind of define that, meaning the man is the head of the family.
Sure.
It doesn't mean the wife sucks or she's no good or she's inferior, anything like that.
We just have our own skills that we bring to the table.
Correct.
We're equals, but we're different.
Yes.
So
that's what do you believe that? Then?
I do. I believe that. Like, if I were to be married, that, like, I would want to defer to him, and that, like, he's my rock, and, like, hey, what do you think we should do? But I absolutely think that we should have the discussion, like, I think this, and here's my ideas, and what my viewpoint of it. And if he's like, hey, that's a great idea, we're going to go that way. Yeah. And I think that's good. But it's nice being able to have that, like, oh, what do we do? Like, I need support. I need a rock. Like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And there might be things where he could even come to me like, hey, I've been a rock for all day, and I need you to kind of let me talk about my feelings and tell me it's going to
I need to be a marshmallow for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. and I think women, or at least in my relationship, I'll speak for myself. I want to be able to be that safety and security for him. I want to be able to be like, hey, you can be vulnerable around me. Yeah. You can take your walls down that you show the world. Right. And that could stay between us and that we don't have to talk about. Like that, I'm happy to be that role for you. Right. And that's a partnership. That's what. And I've had this discussion with people like, well, then that's not equality. Then that's not him leading if you're equals. I'm like, well, no. Like, I think we each have our skill set. Right. And I don't want the idea of like, you be the role. There'll be a lot of pressure. And then he's like, oh, what am I going to do? That now they're all looking to me and I make this. And that's overwhelming. And especially,
it can be,
if the guy's like, you know? Right. And like, well, no, like we make stuff together. We talk about things and all that. But I know that I can rely on you as someone who wants to protect us and have best interest at heart.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a little old-fashioned.
Are you? No, I love it. I think it's God designed personally, but I do think it's been skewed to mean like a superior, inferior thing. Sure.
Because people have ruined it.
Well, even saying the term, if I ask most women, well, do you think the man should be the head of the household? They instantly kind of puff up.
Sure.
What? Sure. No, we should both be the head of the household. That's equality. Blah, blah. It's like, well, no. I think that we're equal in worth.
Yes.
But we're not equal in role.
In skill.
I think, and in skill also. I mean, you can bring that into the workforce. Sure. You can bring that into anything,
for one,
right?
Women create life. Men can't do that. Like, hey,
men have to have a part in it.
they do. But I mean, like, they don't birth the children.
No, that's the woman's part.
We bring that thing. Yes. We create homes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the woman can't do that without the man, though.
No, you're right. Absolutely.
So it does take both.
Yeah.
I agree that women has the harder job when it comes to
but that's what I mean by like skill set. Like we can take something and create life. There was someone who made a really good point about that you can give a woman something and she'll create something. But like you give like women, money and she creates, like a home. You can, or like you give her a house and she makes a home. You give her, nourishment, she makes like meals, and you give her something, she creates life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, and I think that's like a skill set that we have that maybe like men don't have, and then he has qualities about him that I don't have.
Which I'm glad I don't have that, because I have watched my wife give birth 4 times.
Oh my gosh!
And I don't. And she did them all with no drugs or nothing. She's like I said, one of the strongest women I've ever met in my life. But yeah, I'm glad I don't have that role. But I think, not to compare and say man's role is as hard, but the responsibility of
like we talked earlier, there's men who are more feminine and women who are a little more masculine. Like I consider myself a tomboy.
Yeah.
I had brothers. I grew up. I always I was a really good balance. I wore the pink Barbie dress while I climbed trees. It was covered in grass stains. Nice. But I loved sports, and I was a scrapper in high school.
Right.
I remember getting grounded in 4th grade for 2 weeks because I was punching boys.
Nice.
Yeah.
They probably deserved it, though.
They probably did.
Yeah.
But I was a real rough and tumble, and so I think people there's no boxes that everyone's in.
Sure.
Everyone has their own dynamics and interesting, and I think that even maybe if I get married one day, there might be a side my husband sees that I don't show the world, and then vice versa.
Yeah.
That's private between us, and so I don't think a lot of people have to show their cards. They have to show everything. Well, here's all the proof, and here's all the approval, and it's just exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, no, man, mind your business.
What do you think of the idea, though, that, and this is pretty standard among kind of a Christian family unit, and some would argue it's biblical as well, but to say that the man in the household is the ultimate decision maker, to where he may and he should, in my opinion, go to the wife and say, hey, this is something that's going on. I really need your input here. Please help. Let's come to it. But ultimately, when it comes to making the final decision, it's up to him. Whether that's for their family, whether it's for the kids, something with the kids, it's something. What do you think about that? I think that's
a tough one, because I feel like, and I can only speak for myself, what I would want in my own marriage. I feel like that's tough because, like you said, it's good to have, like, hey, let's talk about it, where both want opinion and everything.
Yeah.
But I feel like if I was really like, hey, let's not do this, like XYZ, or I read this, I know this skill a bit more than you do, or
like you had a really good reason why
no,
he
wait,
should.
Please listen to me. We got to do this.
Yes.
And if he was like, no, I don't care, I want to do this.
Right.
Then I'm like, well, then you're not a partnership. And I think and I think that can be bad.
Right.
But some might, I don't want to seem at the same time like, well, he can only do things with his wife's permission.
Right.
And so I think it really has to come down that they talked together and made the decision, and he's the one that okay, cool, we're going to do this after we decided together.
Right.
And so because
and that's what I mean, though, is I think it's like it would be a bad decision, I would say, for a husband if the wife had all these really good reasons and he still said no. I would say, and you might disagree with this, I would say that he still does have the right to do so. But he would be making a bad decision, and I think he will face the consequences. Because that's what I'm talking about. The hard part about being the man is all the responsibility falls on his shoulders. He makes a wrong decision for the family. Yeah. That's his fault.
It is. Because if he makes a decision, maybe that his wife was begging him not to do, or against, he risks losing her trust, her safety, her that security together, and breaking that. There's a lot of couples who he makes the choice and it broke her heart, and they're never the same.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like you have to as much as I think he takes the responsibility for the decision. Maybe if they made it together and he's like, okay, we'll invest in this, whatever, just say it's a money thing, okay, we'll do this, and if it goes bad, then sure, maybe people would be like, oh man, the husband made the choice, that's bad, and then that falls on him, and some might be like, that's not fair because they made it together, but he was the one that picked it. So is that him then also taking, if he's the decision maker, if he's the head,
that's what
should he be the sole person to take all the responsibility and blame?
Yes.
So then is it like, hey, my wife told me this thing and she was wrong and I listened to her, and so are you throwing your wife?
Let's go back to Genesis.
Sure.
That's exactly what happened.
It was
here, eat this.
Yeah, it was Adam's job to keep Eve safe.
Right.
And some people are like, oh man, she did this and it was bad and she was betrayed by the snake. It's like, well, Eve didn't know better.
Right.
It was Adam's job to keep her safe, and he didn't protect her. And that's why God got mad at Adam. He's like, dude, you had one job, to be like, Eve, no, listen to me. This isn't safe.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, because the world was plunged into sin and death.
Yes.
Not because Eve ate the fruit.
But because she wasn't,
Adam ate the fruit.
Yeah.
Eve ate the fruit first.
Yeah.
But that's not what drove sin into the world, because Adam's responsibility
was to keep her
different
safe.
than hers.
Yep.
See? And
He
the
was in
Bible
charge of
says
the garden
that
and
she was
everything.
deceived.
Yes.
The Bible does not say Adam was deceived.
No.
He knew exactly what he was doing.
And he listened anyway.
Right. What an idiot.
and from that came forth shame and anxiety and all that, you know, the spirit, you know, the spirit,
all the bad stuff,
these like demon or, you know, devil, all that uses it against us, which is why what I said, you know, God says to love ourselves, that when we feel shame and anger and all that, it's like, well, wait, that's not from God. You know, he doesn't talk to us and use our discernment and you know, all that through negative emotions. And I really believe that. Yeah, cool. So no, it's complicated. I think it really, you know, has to pertain to each kind of couple, but I really do, you know, would hope that, you know, my husband could be like, hey, like, let's talk about it and stuff. Of course. I trust him enough to like, hey, you know what, that's my opinion. Make the choice, go for it. But that's what works for me. That's just for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that should be what works for everybody.
Sure. But I'm also a doormat, and I don't like upsetting people. So I'm like, oh, it's just me. Like, no, whatever works for you.
Yeah. So. All right, well, cool.
No,
thank you.
This was fun. Let's see if I'm fired tomorrow.
Yes, let's see. Well, they won't hear it by tomorrow.
Oh, that's
if you get fired, it'll be
tomorrow
next week.
after it's posted.
Yeah, well, it'll be posted on Wednesday.
I'll listen to this
so you have a few
first,
days of freedom.
And then send it to friends and family. I'll see if I want people to listen to me.
There you go.
Thanks so much for checking out another episode. It really means a lot to me. Please send me feedback at whycan'twetalkabout that at proton.me. I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time.